Progress. I wonder which shelter he's at. If you don't know, I would know even less, right? Why do you look for him? Does Son of Heaven still want to go after him? Hansen asked, pretending to be casual. Although my cousin hates Dollar, he is not so bored. The reason I want to look for him is because the footwork he was using in the fights looked like Heavenly Go. Hyunfu Pinkin said grimly. Even if he is using Heavenly Go, what does that have to do with you? Hansen asked, puzzled. Currently, in the Alliance there should be only two persons who practice Heavenly Go. One is my grandmother, and the other is the student of my grandmother. Even I did not manage to learn Heavenly Go. If he was really using that, Ares Marshall Hall must investigate into that. Hearing Hyunfu pinking out, Hansen felt puzzled. And then he looked at her and asked, is the student of your grandmother that queen from Queen Restaurant? How do you know that? Hyunfu Pinking looked at Hansen, surprised, her breasts moving up and down dramatically. Hyunfu Pinkings are the best. Although that girl has huge breasts, their shape was not as perky and perfect as Hyunfu Pinking's. Hansen couldn't help thinking. I've met Queen on Gladiator before and learned some kiting skills from her. It helped me a lot. But I don't know if that's the Heavenly Go you mentioned, Hansen said. Is that true? Hyunfu Pinking was shocked, asking Hansen to show her the skills he learned hastily. Hansen only demonstrated what he learned from Queen and did not expose any part of the technique in Dongshuan Sutra. Hyunfu Pinking was even more surprised. After she watched Hansen's demonstration, she looked at Hansen with a strange look and said, Queen is a very proud person. Except for my grandparents, she did not care for anybody. Even I was ignored by her constantly. She would not even look at ordinary people. The fact that she would teach you Heavenly Go is simply incredulous, although she did not teach you a lot. Tell me, why is that? Hansen told Queen the story in details. The reason he was explaining was to let people know that he learned the footwork from Queen, in case anyone recognized the footwork. Hyunfu Pinking was surprised hearing the story. So that's what has happened. You are indeed a genius for making her treat you differently. Unfortunately, I have only learned a little bit. Hansen licked his lips and said, a little bit is quite nice already. Without the talent, one could not learn anything. Heavenly Go is definitely one of the top 10 Hyper-Geno arts, even better than Super Diamond Body. Not everyone has the chance to learn, Hyunfu Pinking said admiringly. Why didn't your grandmother teach you? Hansen asked her. My grandmother said that my character and talents were not right for Heavenly Go. If I force it, I would probably get myself killed, which is why she did not teach me. In fact, I'm not the only one. No one in my family was taught Heavenly Go. Queen is her only student, Hyunfu Pinking said helplessly. So, I really envy you for having such talent. That's right. If one does not learn the kiting skills well, one would get oneself killed even faster, Hansen agreed with her. The kiting skills that focused on calculation could easily be manipulated by the opponent if the user had poor abilities, which would cause the user to be killed. For example, when Hansen was against Queen, if he were to use the kiting skills, he would lose even faster, which was because Queen had better skills in calculation and designing. She was even able to turn Hansen's calculation against himself, before he gained better abilities at calculation. Hansen would rather stand still than use kiting skills in front of Queen if they were fighting for their lives. Oh, I have to go. Talk to you later. It seemed that Hyunfu Pinking suddenly thought of something. She muttered some words out of order before she hung up. Hansen shrugged helplessly, not knowing what had happened to Hyunfu Pinking. He had never seen her so disorganized before. Ready to go to the military camp, Hansen suddenly heard a crack in his sea of soul. The blood snail, which had gone through transformation of several months, eventually broke out of the cocoon. Hansen was suddenly overjoyed. Initially, he thought all the beast souls would finish the upgrade within 1 month. However, all beast souls had different paces. It took several months for the blood snail to finish its upgrade. The upgraded blood snail had different looks from before. It used to have a jade shell and red meat, looking like a snail shell floating on a red cloud. Currently, the entire blood snail had turned red, its shell looking like red crystal. The beast soul seemed to be on fire from afar. Type of beast soul of Berserk Super Blood Snail. Pet armor. The introduction to the blood snail did not change much. There was only an extra word, Berserk. Hansen thought about it and went into a training field. He then summoned the Golden Rock Worm King and equipped it with the Super Pet Armor. The red armor turned the Golden Rock Worm King into a red tank with a ferocious and fierce look. Hansen used 30% of his force to hit the pet. Although the Golden Rock Worm King backed off a little bit, the pet armor was still intact. Hansen almost jumped with joy, hitting the Golden Rock Worm King again with 60% of his force. And the pet was still fine. Hansen increased his force gradually, but the Golden Rock Worm King equipped with Super Pet Armor was never injured. like a cockroach that could never be killed. In the end, Hansen hit the golden rock worm king with all his strength, while he was only able to blow the pet away. With the protection of the super pet armor, the pet was not hurt severely, and the super pet armor only had a dent on it and was not broken. The result made Hansen feel both surprised and disappointed. The blood snail did not turn into a beast soul of second god's sanctuary like the holy angel. It seemed that not all the beast souls could evolve like that. The black crystal only turned the blood snail into a berserk beast soul. However, a berserk super beast soul from first god's sanctuary was comparable to a sacred blood beast soul from second god's sanctuary. This was great news to Hansen. Hansen suddenly had a thought. If I upgrade a beast soul from second god's sanctuary, I wonder if it could be turned into a berserk beast soul directly. If that is possible, I will be able to make a huge fortune. For the same beast soul, the value of a berserk one would be several times or several dozen times that of a normal beast soul. If he could turn a beast soul berserk, the profit was unimaginable. In addition, if he could turn the sacred blood beast souls from second god's sanctuary into berserk ones, it would be a great help for Hansen to hunt super creatures in the future. Of course, what Hansen was worried about the most was the time it took for the upgrade to take place. The holy angel only used a month, while it took several months for the blood snail to become berserk. Hansen had not yet figured out the rules. Hansen had no mood to go to the military camp anymore. He immediately went to the teleport device and entered Starwheel Shelter. Hansen was looking for suitable prey on the ice field, but to no avail. In recent days, he had not even run into a mutant creature and had only gained some primitive geno points. Wise England was right. The resources on the ice field were not enough to support so many humans to cultivate. In comparison, the mountains around Goddess Shelter had quite a lot of advanced creatures that acted alone. However, the terrain of the mountainous region was not suitable for large-scale hunting because of the potential dangers. If they did not want to risk their lives in the mountains, they had to take down the royal shelter in order to communicate with outside. Otherwise, they had to stay at the spawn and rely on the limited resources. Hansen decided to check out the royal shelter, getting ready for conquering it in the future. After marching for 2 days toward the royal shelter, the evil-blooded condor had already become a berserk beast soul. However, Hansen still did not know what the glyph should be used for. It was not that easy to tell like the glyph of the gargoyle. Because Hansen had no other beast souls, he fed the black crystal to the golden growler. He did not have time to make money using the black crystal recently anyways. Running on the ice field, Hansen was using Treading Cloud on his way. Without 7 twists, he had to settle with Treading Cloud. Luckily, the effect of Treading Cloud was much better than Hansen had thought. It enhanced his speed and was also quite easy to learn. Hansen was pleased that it was much better than Sparticle he used. Indeed, the Chens are great at footwork. I wish I could get my hands on 7 twists someday, Hansen said to himself. A few hundred miles from the royal shelter, Hansen saw the silver-haired spirit riding the dragon snake on the ice field, followed by groups of creatures. Hansen had no idea where she was going. Seeing the sacred blood creatures among the groups, Hansen immediately decided against a sneak attack. Last time, there was Starwheel Shelter as his backup, which he now did not have. If he went there alone, he would most definitely get himself killed. However, on a different note, since the silver-haired spirit had left the shelter, could he take the opportunity to steal her spirit stone from her shelter? Although there were definitely sacred blood creatures guarding the shelter, this was an opportunity nonetheless. Even if the chance was slim, it would not hurt to check it out. After Hansen arrived at the royal shelter, he was surprised by what he saw. Although he had read about the description of royal shelters, it was simply overwhelming seeing it with his own eyes. It was not even like a castle. It was a huge metropolitan. At first glance, he could not even see the borders. In the sky, huge creatures were flying, and groups of strange birds were hovering. A large number of creatures were going across the shelter, many of which were sacred blood creatures. Even on the lawn in front of the royal shelter, humongous creatures were feeding. Initially, Hansen imagined that he might be able to sneak into the royal shelter, but with a glance, he knew that he could never sneak inside, and he would have no idea where the spirit stone was even if he did. A stone the size of a fist in a large metropolitan was harder to find than anything else. Unless he had the power to take down the spirit shelter the hard way, it was almost impossible for him to touch the spirit stone. If I could take down such a huge shelter, I would be so rich just by collecting taxes. It would be no worse than a large city. I would not even be able to count the money I could earn. Hansen became more and more excited. If he could conquer the royal shelter, he would be dominating this region. In addition, he would also have a royal spirit servant. This place was such a treasure. The only thing bothering him was that he did not have the power to take down the place alone. This is not okay. I have to think of a way to urge the other 3 shelters to unite together. It would be good if I earn the allegiance of the royal spirit first. As for this royal shelter, the humans will have to give it to me when I am strong enough. Hansen thought to himself. He did not dare to hunt in this area. Once noticed by the creatures of the shelter, it would be hard for him even to run away. Hansen had to go back following the way where he came from. Luckily, Hansen had hunted a lot of small creatures these days, which gave him quite a few primitive geno points. Now he had 63 primitive geno points and 100 ordinary geno points already. Currently, Hansen's fitness was around 100. After he used Heresy Mantra and Overload, his strength and speed could easily break 100. Such fitness and Yin-Yang Blast would be enough to beat that Tiger of Blue Blood, right? Hansen estimated that it was time for the military contest and returned to the Alliance. This military contest was not the one of the entire Alliance soldiers, but just the contest in the Southwest Galaxy where Daphne belonged to. All units in Southwest Galaxy would send contestants. Initially, Blue Blood Special Force was not a part of Southwest Galaxy. Because Jai Yanran was selecting guards, Tiger of Blue Blood chose to give up the contest of the Central Galaxy and came down to Southwest. This made the soldiers ready to take part in the contest in the Southwest Galaxy clench their fists, ready to teach this person a lesson. Blue Blood Special Force was always the best of the best, which got on the nerves of the soldiers of other forces naturally. Now that they had a chance to compare themselves against the best soldier from the Blue Blood Special Force, they definitely wanted to prove how good they were. Actually, we are only here to be onlookers. We are all counting on Zheng Yu's here. I hope that he can beat the Tiger of Blue Blood Special Force and make Southwest Galaxy proud, said the young soldier. Zheng Yu's. Hansen thought about it, and it seemed he had heard of this name. Zheng Yu's appeared to be one of the other 2 candidates competing for the position of Jai Yanran's guard. After chatting with the young soldier for a while, the warm-up zone suddenly became quiet. Hansen followed everyone's gazes to a huge man who walked over in large steps. Even looking at him made people want to run away. Tiger of Blue Blood, Tai, whispered the soldiers from the Southwest Galaxy. Glancing at the soldiers in the warm-up zone with his black eyes, Tai eventually gazed at a 40-year-old veteran and asked seriously, "You are Zheng Yu's?" "I am," Zheng Yu said and nodded. "Great," Tai replied, and then sat down without saying anything else. After all, he was not from this galaxy and had no friends here, so he was simply resting. Seeing how Tai acted, Hansen knew that he thought nothing of Hansen and the other competitor, and believed that only Zheng Yu's was worthy of his attention. Hansen did not care much. After all, everything was about strength in the end. It would not benefit him if Zheng Yu's or Tai gave him more credit. Very soon, the contest began. The contestants walked in a group into the venue, seeing a sea of soldiers and officers who were the audience. It was quite magnificent to watch. The Southwest Galaxy included 2 main galaxies, Zygely Galaxy and Nansangshuan Galaxy, and 16 smaller galaxies. Only Zygely Galaxy and Nansangshuan Galaxy had a large number of habitable planets. Only 1 or 2 of the 16 smaller galaxies had military bases. Other planets were either uninhabitable or used for mining only. The first event was a test of strength. A strength tester was placed on the venue, looking like a giant drum. The contestants could hit the drum using whatever method they chose, and then the screen on the drum would show the score of the last hit. The higher the score, the better. Although no one would be eliminated because of a bad score, one's final score was the sum of the scores of all events. If in the end, one's final score was not among the top 4, one would not be able to enter the contests for the title of Soldier King. Shortly, in the thunder-like cheers of the soldiers, the first round of the strength test began. The soldier who was called first came up to the stage to strike the drum. Since all the contestants were elites from their respective units, they were all evolvers with fitness over 100. After watching for a while, Hansen noticed that the score was ordinarily between 100 and 105, and there were not any outstanding performances. Although it was a galaxy-wide contest, there was an age limit on the contestants, and some special forces were not allowed in the contest. Very soon, it was Tai's turn. The eyes of all the contestants were focused on him. Even the audience stopped cheering, waiting to see Tai's performance quietly. Under all the attention, Tai was not nervous at all. He simply walked up to the drum and hit it without any additional moves. Boom! A loud sound made people's ears hurt. The number on the screen of the drum changed quickly and ended up on the number 113.7584. Everyone couldn't help gasping. This kind of strength was nerve-wracking among evolvers. A sacred blood evolver only had a fitness index around 30 to begin with in Second God's Sanctuary. With ordinary, primitive, and mutant geno points maxed out, a sacred blood evolver could only reach around 90. In order to have a fitness index of 110, one would have to gain at least 40 to 50 sacred geno points. The expressions of all the contestants changed. Zheng Yu's looked grim. This kind of strength was a huge pressure on all of them. From Hansen's perspective, this should not be the best Tai could do. If he used everything he had, he should be able to make the score a bit higher. Later on, it was Zheng Yu's turn. Zheng Yu walked up to the drum, took a deep breath, gave a loud roar, and then hit the drum fiercely. Boom! The screen showed the number 114.2584, giving rise to loud applause from the audience. This number was even better than Tai's, which boosted the morale of the soldiers in the Southwest Galaxy. Zheng Yu did well. On the stands, the chief of the Southwest Galaxy troops nodded and complimented. Chief, I don't think he is the match of Tai. Zheng Yu had the all he got in his strike, while Tai was still conserving his strength, said the secretary. The chief did not mind it. How much resource did Blue Blood Special Force put into their tiger? And how much resource did Zheng Yu have? The fact that he has such performance is enough to prove his excellence. The chief thought about it and then asked, how are the other two persons? Major Wang Gang was also an elite from his department, but he is not as good as Zheng Yu's. As for the person recommended by Jai Yanran herself, I have looked him up as well. The secretary looked through his files on his comlink and said, Jai Yanran and Hansen are schoolmates and a couple. Hansen does not have much of a background. Jai Yanran must have pulled some strings for him to go to Daphne. He had been in Second God's Sanctuary less than a year. Being a sacred blood evolver, he had a great foundation. However, according to his registration, he is currently located in a remote small shelter. There are only 2,000 to 3,000 people there, so it should be impossible for him to gain geno points efficiently. I think that Jai Yanran originally wanted for Hansen to be her guard, and only failed because of the pressure from the upper level. So, among the candidates, Hansen should be the least competent, the secretary summarized. The chief nodded. As they were speaking, it was Hansen's turn. In front of the drum, Hansen took a deep breath, his heart thumping and his bones squeaking. His punch traveled through the air and hit on the drum. Boom! With a loud noise that hurts people's ears, the number on the screen quickly changed and froze at 111.1111. This number was so neat that it looked like it was faked. Everyone was dazed. Of course, it was not just because the number was needed, but mainly because it was such a good score. Up until this moment, it was the third best. The soldiers started to applaud for Hansen, because he was one of the Southwest Galaxy. Damn it, what's wrong with the score? It must mean I am going to be single all my life. Hansen felt quite depressed. He uses his best to see how much he could get and did not expect such a number. Despite the unlucky number, he was quite satisfied with his score. With the score, he could be counted as an elite among the evolvers. Well done, brother. Are all the cooks on your warship so good? When Hansen returned to his seat, the young soldier gave him a thumbs up. That's true, but we're not cooks, we are cookhouse soldiers. Hansen smiled and said. Because of his punch, lots of contestants were impressed by Hansen. But Tai did not even look at Hansen. Naturally, Tai could tell that Hansen had given all he got with his punch and even tapped into his potentials using hyper-geno arts. Although his score was good, Tai did not think much of him. This Hansen is not bad. He does know something, the chief said, slightly surprised. The secretary wiped some cold sweat off his forehead. The discrepancy between Hansen's performance and his investigation was a negligence on his side. Although the chief did not say much, the secretary understood very well that he should not have made such a mistake, and the chief would not tolerate such mistakes every time. I'm so sorry, chief. I will reinvestigate right away, the secretary said hastily. No need. This is the best test. Let's wait and see, the chief said quietly. Yes, sir. Although the secretary continued to watch the game, he still quickly looked at the information he found on Hansen again. The chief could be merciful, but he had to be committed to his duty. Otherwise, there was no need for him to stay on his position, which was utterly dangerous. The second item was Sprint, to Hansen's surprise. However, this device was tuned to level 10 with a gravity of 100. Without a fitness level of over 100, it would be impossible for someone to run inside, let alone pass all the metal walls. After the game began, soldiers entered the device. However, the result was not great. 8 soldiers had failed at Sprint. None of them finished even a third of it. The gravity of 100 was simply too difficult. Even with the fitness index of 100, one could easily get tired, so it was hard for them to maintain the speed and reflex. Hansen frowned. This gravity setup was clearly too high. With the fitness level around 100, it would be more sensible to set it at 80 or 90. Even Hansen himself could not help frowning seeing such a hard test. One soldier tried after another, but they all failed. After the better half of the contestants had failed, it was eventually Taiyi's turn. Although many soldiers from Southwest Galaxy wished Taiyi to lose, they were soon disappointed. Taiyi's muscular body jumped across the metal walls like a robot that was never tired. It looked like he was not bound by gravity at all. Without a single mistake, he kept the same speed and rushed through wall after wall, which made Hansen gasp with admiration. Taiyi was indeed an impressive figure. Great fitness, sensitive senses, and a perfect judgment of the bigger picture. He seemed that this incredibly difficult sprint could not trap him at all. He really is tough, Hansen said to himself. In the end, Taiyi finished sprint perfectly, as if he had done something trivial. He returned to his seat quietly and sat down. The soldiers of Southwest Galaxy all placed their hope on Zhang Yu's who followed. Unfortunately, although Zhang Yu's did everything he could, he fell after going through 70%, which made many soldiers sigh in sadness. Seeing that even Zhang Yu's failed at the test, the soldiers of Southwest Galaxy felt disappointed. Damn it, even Zhang Yu's failed. The tiger of blue blood must be so content, said the young soldier sitting next to Hansen disappointedly. After he said that, he looked at Hansen and said, "Brother, how about you? Do you think he can do it? We can only count on you right now." Hearing the young soldier, the other contestants were also paying attention to Hansen's reply. Most soldiers had already failed and there were only a few people left. Hansen was definitely the biggest hope among the remaining soldiers, so people had naturally placed their hope on him. No problem, Hansen replied concisely. Between soldiers, there was no need to be humble on the battlefield. You must trust your comrades and make them trust you. Although this was not a battlefield, it was about the honor of Southwest Galaxy. Therefore, Hansen could not show any cowardice or lack of confidence. Hearing the conversation between Hansen and the young soldier, Taiyi curled his lips with contempt and did not say much. From Taiyi's perspective, ordinary soldiers were not even comparable to him. Blue Blood Special Force was the best of the best, so he was naturally much better than any ordinary soldier. Before he came, Taiyi had investigated a lot into his three competitors. Hansen, who entered Daphne using nepotism, was not even an opponent, he acknowledged. Even if Hansen's fitness was higher than his expectation, Taiyi still did not think that Hansen had what it takes to be his opponent. A strong fitness only meant that Hansen had been offered lots of meat in God's sanctuary. It was still hard to say whether Hansen had done all the hunting himself. As for sprint, Taiyi did not think Hansen could finish the task. Zhang Yu's failed because of his insufficient vigor. In the strength test, Hansen had to tap into his potentials to get a score of 110. Which meant his fitness should be around 100, which was even worse than Zhang Yu's. How was it possible that Hansen could go through? Therefore, in Taiyi's eyes, Hansen was totally bluffing when he said no problem. The fact that Hansen promised something that he could not accomplish to his comrades made Taiyi look down on him. It was soon Hansen's turn. Hansen ran into the sprint and did not rush to start. He first made some adjustments to his body. His fitness was around 100. With the gravity of 100, he could only walk inside. In order to reach the necessary speed, he must run under the state of overload. In order to go through the entire device, Hansen must allocate his strength reasonably. Otherwise, he might fall because of lack of energy. It would not even matter how well he mastered the system. After Hansen made the adjustments, he took a deep breath slowly and made his first step under everyone's watch. When making the first step, Hansen had actually already calculated all the steps he was going to make in the device, in order to perfectly spend each ounce of his energy without any waste. Going forward on the metal walls at a high speed, Hansen's heart was thumping like a motor and all his bones were slightly squeaking. Hansen's moves were different from any other person's, and also much different from the brutal way that Taiyi passed the device. Hansen's moves were incredibly smooth. It was as smooth as the demonstration video. It felt like Hansen's moves were pre-programmed. Each of his moves and even looks was so reasonable that it was incredulous. Very good. After watching for a while, the chief couldn't help nodding. At Hansen's age, it was incredible that he had such great and accurate control of his body. Many Surpasser officers were watching the game even felt surprised. It was even hard for them to control their bodies like this. It was probably even beyond humans' limit. The level of control was more like it was conducted by AI. Each phone and muscle were moving in the most efficient way possible. The perfection made people feel their scalp was prickling. The secretary felt the same, covered in cold sweat. Mistake. A huge mistake. The investigation and analysis he conducted about Hansen were so far from the truth. It was as if he had investigated into a different person instead of Hansen. Although ordinary soldiers could not understand as much as the officers, they felt very excited and thrilled watching Hansen's smooth moves. Tai frowned slightly. Even he was surprised by Hansen's performance. The ability to control the body so delicately was something even he could not achieve. However, Tai did not think that Hansen could go through the task by using incredible control. After all, Hansen did not have enough strength to begin with, and techniques were not everything. For example, if someone only had $1, no matter how he saved and allocate the money, he could not buy food for a month using $1. Reasonable allocation could maximize the use of strength, but he first needed to have enough strength to be allocated. After going through half, Hansen was covered in sweat as if he jumped out of water. Even his hair was stuck to his scalp. With abnormal flush on his skin, rising body temperature, and squeaking bones, he felt like he was going to collapse any second. All the soldiers and officers watching Hansen couldn't help cheering for him. Under the state of overload, he still had half of the device to go through. They were afraid he could not last that long. Naturally, Hansen did not think the same. Although the consumption of his energy under the gravity of 100 was even higher than he thought, as long as he wanted to do it, he could still finish. In terms of enhancing one's stamina, there were not many hyper-geno arts that could be compared to Jade Skin in the world. Although Hansen looked like he was about to use up all his strength, for some reason, people felt reassured looking at his expression. People couldn't help but think he was trustworthy and he could last until the end as long as he wished to. It was the special charisma of a soldier, and it could not be described with words. It was nothing but trust. When Hansen finally reached the end, everyone felt relieved and incredibly good. Applause sounded like thunder. Chief, Cookhouse Soldier Hansen has finished the test. Waiting for your instruction. Hansen saluted to the officer judging the test. As he moved his arm, sweat fell, reflecting sunlight and the vital energy of youth. At ease. Well done. You could go back to your seat, the officer said with a smile. Seeing Hansen going back, the chief said, very good. Very good indeed. This is more like a soldier from Southwest Galaxy. The secretary, who understood the chief very well, had very different understanding of this short comment. According to what the secretary knew about the chief, if he said good, then it was a great compliment already. If he said very good, it meant the chief appreciated the person a lot. Now that the chief said very good twice, with a strong tone, he must feel so excited inwardly. The secretary rarely heard the chief say something twice, and yet he did. Shooting, warframe operation, assembling and reassembling the combat machines were the main parts of the military contests. In interstellar wars, science and technology were still the priority. Unless someone could reach the level of surpasser, a soldier could not beat a warframe, let alone large weapons. What Hansen had learned from school was put into use here. He ended up with a high score on each item, definitely a well-rounded soldier. Although Tai was great, Hansen was not worse than him. In many items, they were each either the first or the second. The two were on quite the same level. All the soldiers felt it was great to watch. As a cookhouse soldier from Southwest Galaxy, Hansen was able to perform as a close match to the Tiger of Blue Blood Special Force, which earned a great honor for the Southwest Galaxy and left a great impression on the soldiers. Although Zhang Yus did well in the following items as well, he could not be compared with Hansen or Tai. When the total score was calculated, Hansen was the first place, beating Tai by 0.2, making all the soldiers of Southwest Galaxy cheer. Tai did not ignore Hansen like before, but he still did not think Hansen was a worthy opponent. Although Hansen did well, his advantage was mainly in the technical items. It did not mean that Hansen had better fighting skills than Tai. However, the final combat was a one-on-one combat, which would call for real strength, of which Tai was very confident. Hansen did not say anything but tried to recover as much as possible, waiting for the combat for the title of Soldier King. Only the top 4 contestants with the highest scores could participate in the combat. In addition to Hansen and Tai, Zheng Yus and some soldier from an army came to the combat. Wang Gang did not make it to the top floor. The 4 of them were split into 2 groups. The winners of the groups would enter the finals to compete for the championship, while the losers would compete for the 3rd place. The grouping was decided by a draw. Luckily, Hansen and Tai were in the same group, which meant the finals came earlier. It was a great news to Hansen. He had not fully recovered yet. If he consumed some of his energy in another fight before he met Tai, it would be even harder. If I could finish the 3rd phase longevity in Heresy Mantra, I should be able to resolve the issue of the lack of energy. Zhang Yu's fight began first, which gave Hansen more time to rest. After fighting another soldier for more than half an hour, Zhang Yu's won. If Hansen could beat Tai, he would battle Zhang Yu's for the title of Southwest Soldier King. It was Hansen's turn. Hansen moved around and felt the sore was relieved a lot. He had been using jade skin for the past half an hour, relieving his fatigue. It seemed that the effect was quite good. Tai walked up, standing opposite Hansen. Hansen was tall himself, while Tai was a foot taller than him, bringing lots of pressure. However, Hansen did not feel much. He had seen creatures as tall as skyscrapers and he was never scared, not to mention Tai was only a foot taller. When the whistle was blown, Hansen stepped out and punched at Tai's chest. However, Tai stood still, looking at Hansen with contempt. His body turned gold like the Buddha. It was as if he had become a statue. It turned out that Tai was trying to use Super Diamond Body to take Hansen's punch and did not mean to block it at all, which made many soldiers of Southwest Galaxy hiss, pissed by the arrogance of Tai. However, Tai was not just being arrogant. The reason he was showing such confidence was not because he looked down on his opponent. For Tai, it was less important to beat Hansen. His main goal was to earn the approval of Jai Yanran and the JIS. Otherwise, even if he had become a guard of Jai Yanran's, he would not receive too much attention. Therefore, Tai needed to show his strongest side. Even if he could not make Jai Yanran satisfy, he would need to get the approval from the JIS at least. Seeing Tai was trying to block his punch with Super Diamond Body, Hansen was not mad at all, but happy instead. If there was an idiot standing still taking your punch, what was there to be mad about? Hansen added more force into his punch and hit Tai's chest. The clash between the fist and muscle made muffled sounds like metal, making the audience feel shocked. After a series of attacks, Hansen took back his fists and stepped back. His jade-like fists were already swollen and red, blood even flowed from some spots. However, Tai did not even move. The gap between them is so big that there is no way around it. Sigh. Hansen could not beat Tai after all. You can't put it that way. How old is Hansen? At Tai's age, he must be much stronger than Tai. Unfortunately, he's too young now. Don't talk about age. Losing is losing. We soldiers from Southwest Galaxy are not sore losers and we did not need excuses. Seeing Tai's performance, the secretary was secretly relieved. This time, he made a huge mistake, but luckily the result was not too different from his prediction. Tai would still beat Hansen, which made the secretary felt much better. If Tai was defeated by Hansen, then his investigation would become a huge joke. Even if the chief did not scold him, the secretary would feel bad himself. What was more important was that this might cost him the trust of the chief. If he could not even do a brief analysis right, would the chief trust him with more important matters in the future? For a secretary, it was dangerous to lose the trust of his supervisor. You seem to be relieved. The chief suddenly turned back and looked at the secretary. No, the secretary was surprised and answered hurriedly. Do you think Hansen will lose? The chief asked again. Aye. The secretary muttered, not sure how to answer. It is not your fault to be mistaken in the investigation. After all, you did not see Hansen in person. However, if you still failed to make the correct judgments after he saw him, then it could only mean that you still have much to learn. The chief said casually. Chief, you're saying that Hansen will win. The secretary suddenly became pale. But the chief did not say much more, gazing at the two soldiers on the stage deeply. Did you finish? Seeing Hansen stepping back, Tai said coldly. Yes. Hansen swung his arms to relieve the prickling of his bones. Having hit Tai's a dozen times, his bones were about to be cracked. Super Diamond Body was indeed quite frightening. Then it is my turn, Tai said and raised his fist, ready to hit Hansen. I don't think you should make that move, Hansen said sullenly. Why? Tai frowned slightly, not understanding what Hansen meant. Because you have already lost, Hansen said seriously to Tai. Ha, nonsense. Tai snorted and did not deign to speak to Hansen again, raising his fist at Hansen. Same as Tai, Hansen stood still against Tai's fist. So, Hansen has also practiced Super Diamond Body. That's unlikely. How old is he? Even if he's talented, it is impossible for him to succeed in practicing Super Diamond Body. Why is he staying still then? Is he waiting to be punched? Who knows? He just said Tai has already lost. So, there must be some reason. The soldiers looked at Hansen, who was motionless, puzzled. Tai's fist was about to hit Hansen's face, but Hansen was still standing calmly, as if Tai were not trying to attack him. When Tai's fist was less than 5 inches from Hansen's face, everyone's heart was in their throats, and Tai suddenly froze. Although Tai's fist was only inches away from Hansen, Tai suddenly stopped moving and looked terrified. very pale, and cold sweat started to appear on his forehead. If observed closely, his body was also shivering. I just suggested you not to make that move. But you didn't listen. Now I'm afraid you have to suffer a bit. Hansen sighed and said, Ew. Kai was about to say something, but when he just said a word, blood filled his mouth, and his metal body suddenly became pale. The places where Hansen had hit became red. Tai tried hard to punch Hansen's face, which was right next to his fist, but he only moved an inch before he started to vomit blood. His magnificent body found next to Hansen's feet, and he failed to stand up again after struggling. Blood came out of his mouth continuously. Strange silence fell on the venue. Everyone looked at this incredulous scene, feeling shocked. Yin-Yang Blast, the Hansen had practiced for a long time, was eventually put into use. Yin-Yang Blast, invented by Professor Bai, was a method to use strength, and it could be used by people of any status. Hansen's conversion rate of the Yin force had reached over 95%. Initially, he thought it might take some extra work to get rid of Tai. After all, the Yin force could not hurt Tai when his limbs were hit. Only when Hansen hit Tai where the inner organs were located could Hansen manage to injure the vulnerable organs. However, unexpectedly, Tai was so confident in his fitness and super diamond body that Tai did not try to block Hansen's punches at all, which saved Hansen a lot of trouble. Since it was merely a contest, Hansen did not have any murderous thoughts. Otherwise, if he hit Tai's head, Tai would at least become an idiot if he was not killed. However, Tai was not to blame for his negligence. In such an interstellar era where efficiency is everything, there were few people willing to spend time and energy to practice the Yin force. In addition, even fewer people could succeed. No one had imagined that the invincible Tiger of Blue Blood was defeated like that, in such an unimaginable way. Tai's choice to let Hansen hit him was seen as a sign of ignorance and arrogance, while Hansen became the hero and glory of the southwestern galaxy overnight. Many surpassers looked at Hansen with more respect. The young man who could endure the boredom to practice the Yin force so well was in no way an ordinary person. His perseverance and insistence were all what it took for people to remember his name. Nowadays, less and less young people are truly dedicated to martial arts. Most people only focus on the skills instead of the arts. That's why they never reach a high level. This Hansen is very good, looking like a true master. He will have a great future for sure, said the chief with approval. Without any suspense, Hansen beat Zhen Yuz and became the new Southwest Soldier King. Zhen Yuz was not able to fight back effectively from the beginning to the end. It was as if the two persons were not on the same level at all. In fact, Zhen Yuz was afraid before he even started, terrified by Tai's injuries inflicted by Hansen. Zhen Yuz was too conservative to perform at his usual level. The chief himself personally awarded Hansen the medal and certificate. Unfortunately, there was no material or monetary reward in the military, which upset Hansen a little bit. The soldiers who had participated in the contest returned to their troops and told others about how Hansen beat Tai, making the name Hansen known to almost everyone in the Southwest Galaxy, which was a great honor. I'm sorry, Captain. I messed up, Tai said wryly to the good-looking man sitting next to him, lying on the bed in the hospital. Kitty cat, don't feel sorry for yourself. A man can only grow in mistakes. If a man had never made a mistake, it only means that he is a dedicated flower that has never seen storms. You are still a kitty cat right now, but after experiencing mistake after mistake, you will become the true tiger of blue blood one day. Mistakes are not bad for you. As long as you have not died yet, those mistakes will nourish you eventually, the good-looking man said with a smile. Captain, a hunk as strong as Tai almost sobbed. To cry after being beaten is not blue blood style. The good-looking man patted Tai on the head lovingly. Someone had seen the scene. He would definitely feel weird or even amused. The good-looking man seemed to be in his 20s, much younger than Tai. However, Tai looked like a child in front of him. However, as weird as it looked, there was a harmony to it. If someone knew the good-looking man, he would not feel weird about it at all. Liu Hui, the captain of Blue Blood Reserve Force, was only 27 years old but has the nickname Devil Captain. The nickname of Tai, Tiger of Blue Blood, was in fact from Liu Hui. However, Liu Hui initially called Tai Kitty Cat of Blue Blood. Except for Liu Hui, anyone who called Tai that would be beaten hard. Then, the other members of the reserve force twisted the name and called Tai the Young Tiger, which later became Tiger of Blue Blood when spread wider. Get better and there are worse training waiting for you in the future. Don't think there is no consequence for your loss. After you go back, your training will be doubled, Liu Hui said lightly. Yes, Captain, I will train harder. Next time, I will not lose to that guy, Tai said, gritting his teeth. He is no longer your opponent. However, it is a nice thought to have. Tibet, Liu Hui smiled and thought of Hansen. When Hansen returned to Daphne, he reported to Jai Yanran's office. Just when he entered the office, he smelled fragrance before he saw his girlfriend throwing herself at him. She wrapped her legs around his waist and held his faces with her hand, kissing him passionately. "My dear, you are so great. I love you so much." Jai Yanran did not expect Hansen to beat Taiyi and gain the post. She excitedly offered her hottest lips, which Hansen would never turn down. He held her butts with his hands, admiring how plump and bouncy they were. Jai Yanran, who was shy in general but seemed to be in a great mood this time. She even unbuttoned Hansen's shirt and kissed down his neck. When Hansen went out of the office with limp legs, he could still hear Jai Yanran's tempting voice. "This is a special reward for you. I love this reward." Hansen walked as he hummed a little song. Before long, he suddenly felt a chill. Hansen shivered and looked ahead. A woman in military uniform was standing opposite him, looking at Hansen coldly as if he were an animal. The looks on the woman's face made Hansen feel she was not looking at a man, or even a human. In her eyes, Hansen was no different from a cat or dog. If Wendy could be described as a cold soldier, then this woman just seemed like a bloodthirsty killer. Although Hansen had never seen this woman before, he had this impression already at the first sight. He could not tell why, but he thought this woman was so scary that he would rather beat 10 men like Taiyi before pissing her off. The woman walked straight past Hansen and surprisingly knocked on Jai Yanran's door. "Who is that woman? How come I have never seen her before?" The night Jai Yanran was chatting with Hansen using Comlink lying on her bed. "That woman is your other guard." Hansen still remembered that woman and asked casually, "Yes, that is Colonel Annie. She is my new guard. Do not try to flirt with her. She is a surpasser. If you piss her off, I could not stop her," Jai Yanran said, smiling. "My dear wife, what is it that your family do? They're able to get you a surpasser as guard." Hansen couldn't help asking. Hansen had never asked about Jai Yanran's family, but he was so surprised this time. Even those captains of interstellar warships will not be so extravagant that they use surpassers as their guards. "Have you been following the news recently?" Jai Yanran did not answer but asked. "Not a lot, but I know something." Hansen would read the news from time to time in case that he knew too little about the society. "Have you seen any news related to the JIS?" Jai Yanran asked with a smile. "News about the JIS?" Hansen thought about it and suddenly stared his eyes wide. "You mean the one who entered the election recently?" The next morning, Hansen got up and teleported into God's sanctuary. This time, he did not rush to go hunting. He decided to go to the market of the Starwheel shelter to buy some mutant beast souls. Even if mutant beast souls were not that helpful to him, he could easily elevate them into berserk mutant beast souls with the black crystal to make a lot of money. Such a good deal was not to be missed. Hansen wandered around in the market of the Starwheel shelter, which was much more bustling than the goddess shelter which belonged to Hansen. However, mutant beast souls were still hard to find, and there was none of the sacred blood beast souls. Hansen had his eyes on several mutant beast souls and asked for the price, but most of the owners did not want cash, but to trade for a beast soul on the same level. For the ones sold for cash, Hansen did not like them as much. 1 out of 100 beast souls would be berserk. So, if Hansen sold berserk beast souls in large quantities, someone would eventually suspect him, which was why he did not want to sell too many. Currently, Hansen was looking for a beast soul that could become a dozen or even dozens of times more valuable once it became berserk. Maybe he could even make enough money to purchase a sacred blood beast soul. That was not unlikely. He could not pick and choose sacred blood beast souls, but he could pick some rare mutant beast souls that were highly popular among evolvers. "Hello, how much do you want for the mutant snowy wolf?" Hansen asked the owner, pointing at a wolf beast soul that looked like a snowball. Snowy wolves were not rare on the ice field. In fact, there were so many of them that they caused a lot of troubles. On the ice field, you could easily spot hundreds of thousands of snowy wolves wandering around. Although most snowy wolves were primitive creatures, normally speaking, humans could not attack such a large group at all. Some snowy wolves even had a group of 100,000. Trading for beast soul weapon on the same level, better be heavy sword. The owner glanced at Hansen, lacking the enthusiasm that a seller should have. That was completely normal. After all, he was selling popular stuff which everyone wanted. Because the owner's request was specific, a deal was never made. A dozen minutes before Hansen came, several people had come by and asked, but there was still no deal. "You want to trade for a St. Hall license?" Hansen did not have beast souls on his hand, so he could only trade with licenses. "An S-class license for evolvers. I could pay you extra." But I don't want anything below S class, the owner said directly. Although the mutant snowy wolf is valuable, it is not quite enough to be traded for an S-class St. Hall license, right? Hansen looked at the other mutant beast soul that the owner had. It was a black ape beast soul, 6 to 9 feet tall. Its hair looked like tungsten. The muscles on his chest were so strong that they looked like bulks of iron, looking magnificent. You really have an S-class St. Hall license. The owner's eyes lit up. He eventually got excited and looked at Hansen expectantly. What is the type of this mutant beast soul? Hansen did not answer, but asked, pointing at the black ape. It is a shape-shifting beast soul, violent ape. After shape-shifting, your strength will be enhanced greatly. However, it could only enhance your strength, and would even hurt your flexibility a little bit. Being an honest man, the owner explained both the pros and cons of the mutant violet ape. How much strength can it give me? Hansen's eyes lit up a little bit. Beast souls with shortcomings would definitely have more outstanding strengths. Pure strength was quite useful to Hansen. After all, his strength was not quite enough at this point. It was still hard for him to kill sacred blood creatures with strong defense. This depends on your fitness. Normally speaking, the increase should be more than 10 points, the owner pondered and said. Hansen calculated and found that more than 10 points were quite good. With his current ability, he could easily achieve 120 to 130. If he evolved it into a Berserk Beast Soul, the increase should be higher. 1 S-Class Evolver St. Hall license for 2 Beast Souls of yours. How about that? Hansen took out a license and showed it to the owner. The ice field was a small region after all. If it were in a more populated area, many people would kill to trade to Mutant Beast Soul for an S-Class St. Hall license. However, in this place, the resources were so limited that the owner was still hesitating about the deal. After pondering for a while, the owner obviously wanted the S-Class St. Hall license very much. He said decisively, okay, let's do it. The deal was completed smoothly, and Hansen got the mutant snowy wolf and violent ape. When he came to the frozen lake, he found that it was no different from the glaciers. Under his feet was thick ice. Even the thinnest place was 3 to 6 feet thick. There were many people on the frozen lake. Because of the limited resources on the ice field, the frozen lake could be counted as a nice spot to go fishing since mutant creatures could be spotted sometimes. It took some patience to fish there. If he had good luck, it might only take 1 day for him to catch a mutant creature. If his luck was bad, it would take him more than half a month to catch one. Hansen did not plan to make the hole himself. He found a hole no longer used, took care of the thin ice that had formulated already, put the bait on the hook and fished in the hole. Hansen put down his stool and sat down. Wearing the leather mail of Snowy Wolf, he did not feel cold at all. Taking out a textbook of ancient language, Hansen started to read as he waited for fish to take the bait. It's you. When Hansen just sat down for a while, someone who walked past with staff in her hand ran to Hansen in surprise after seeing him. Hansen looked up and found it was the tall woman. Guantong, you're also here to fish. Hansen smiled at Guantong. Thank you for last time. Guantong opened her mouth and did not know what to say. What? Hansen was dazed, unable to perceive what he was thanked for. Thank you for saving Starwheel Shelter, Guantong said hastily. There was a piece of cake. I needed to thank you for carrying me back the other day. Hansen said with a smile. Guantong, who was rather carefree but couldn't help blushing hearing what Hansen said. She had understood that Hansen was fine the other day. Different from what she had thought, Hansen did not need to be saved. While she took him on her back by force, Guantong started to fish about 20 feet from Hansen, while she glanced at Hansen from time to time as she fished. Hansen kept reading and did not notice her at all. More than half an hour later, Hansen, who was reading, felt some movements on the fish line on his hand. Hansen put down the book in his hands and looked to the boy floating on the water, which was shivering slightly. Hansen put his finger on the fish line and felt the shiver like a traditional Chinese doctor feeling the pulse. He did not pull immediately. After absorbing the red crystal, Hansen's brain had much stronger perceptive abilities. From feeling the movements of the fish line, he could picture what was happening under the water in his mind. Hansen continued to read as he fished. In less than 2 hours, he had caught 4 bluefish and 3 gold anchovies. Although he had not gained any beast souls, his gains were considerable. People next to Hansen were less lucky. When Hansen had caught 7 fish already, the luckiest among the others had only caught 2 fish. Guantong was obviously less lucky. Like most people, she had got nothing since she came. She was not to be blamed for that. Not everyone had the perceptive ability that Hansen had. It was normal not to catch anything. Otherwise everyone would have come to the frozen lake. Guantong, the fish tastes good. Come here and try it. Hansen waved to Guantong and said. Guantong had been there for a long time, but she had caught nothing, which made Hansen feel a bit sorry for her. In addition, Guantong had carried him on her back. Hansen then told her to share the fish with him, which he could not finish anyway. I have brought something to eat. Guantong felt quite shy, taking out some nutrition solutions from her pocket. Come here, it is rather boring to eat alone. There is so much food that it would be a waste if we don't finish it, Hansen said with a smile. As Guantong was still hesitating whether she should go over, several people walked to Hansen. Hansen glanced at the people who had walked up to him. They didn't have any fishing tools or personal belongings, so they did not seem to be fishing here. FCK off, Hansen said coldly. You have quite a temper, but I'm afraid that you haven't been told who this place belongs to. The leader of the group, a middle-aged man, did not get mad but smiled coldly at Hansen. They didn't take Hansen's words seriously at all. Our boss at Black God Shelter says that half of the gains in the frozen lake must be handed over to the shelter. You have 7 fish here, so I will make it cheaper for you and only take 3 gold anchovies from you. Hansen had heard that since the frozen lake was near one of the 3 biggest shelters, Black God Shelter, people from Black God Shelter would charge the people who were fishing their fees. Normally speaking, only a primitive fish would be charged, and then the person could fish as long as he wanted to. These people asked for Hansen's 3 most valuable fish. Obviously, they were jealous of Hansen's gains and planned to blackmail him. Seeing the middle-aged man reaching for his bag, Hansen did not speak but stepped on his hand. Damn it, he dared to attack us. The rest of the people saw Hansen making a move and quickly summoned their beast souls, striking Hansen immediately. They were attacking mercilessly, aiming at Hansen's vital parts. Hansen's eyes became cold. When other people tried to kill him, of course he would not be soft. When the weapons were about to hit him, he waved his right hand. With the flash of 3 purple lights, all the weapons were cut into pieces, and the 3 people in the front of him were cut in the chests and died immediately. The other 2 people survived luckily because they did not attack as fast. Full of terror, they turned to run away, shouting, "Go away now, people of Black God Shelter are nearby, and they will be here in a minute." Guantong ran over and said. Hansen nodded slightly and said, "You should go as well. Avoid this area for the time being." After parting with Guantong, Hansen left the frozen lake. He did not want to make things worse between him and Black God Shelter, so there was no need for him to look for trouble. However, as Hansen left the frozen lake, a dozen mounts ran to him and approached him shortly. Obviously, they were targeting him. Among the dozen mounted riders, one was the middle-aged man who had run away. He pointed at Hansen and yelled. The dozen mounts quickly circled Hansen. Their leader, a man in black mail with eyes like a hawk's, stared at Hansen and said coldly, "You killed my men. They were trying to kill me, so of course I would not choose to be killed," Hansen said, looking at the man in black mail. The man in black mail quickly summoned a beast soul knife that was narrow and long. He pointed it at Hansen and said, "No matter why, you killed my men at a place of the Black God Shelter, so you deserve to die." As he spoke, the man quickly slashed the knife at Hansen. As his claws were about to clash with the long knife of the man in black mail, the long knife unexpectedly disappeared. When it appeared again, it cut Hansen's chest. Blood started to come out of the injury in Hansen's chest. Luckily, Hansen stepped back in time and diverted the majority of the force from the knife. In addition, the gargoyle glyph also made his skin tougher to block the damage. Otherwise, Hansen would have been gutted by this strike. The knife skills of this man in black mail were very strange, and his fitness was incredible, definitely much tougher than Tai. Hansen was not killed by the strike, which surprised the man in black mail slightly. However, he did not stop attacking, but slashed at Hansen again with his knife. Several people in the group also summoned their beast soul weapons to rush at Hansen. Judging from their speed, they were all evolvers with fitness above 100. Hansen knew that he could not stay, or else he would definitely die there. Using Heresy Mantra and Overload at the same time, Hansen quickly stepped away, running. However, the people besieging Hansen left no place for him to go. Hansen had to rush at 2 of them. The 2 persons cut at Hansen without hesitation. Hansen moved left and right like a willow tree in the wind, dodging both their attacks. However, there was no way he could dodge the strike from the man in black mail who was chasing after him. His back became bloody immediately. Hansen gritted his teeth and stayed silent. He rushed away as fast as his legs would carry him and broke the siege of the 2 persons, running fast on the ice field. He knew he could not stay. The fitness of the man in black mail was even stronger than his own. In terms of both fitness and knife skills, the man was the top of the top. With the help of the evolvers with fitness levels above 100, Hansen would definitely die if he chose to stay. We can't let him leave alive. The man in black mail led the group of people to chase after Hansen, showing strong desire to get rid of him. The resources on the ice field were so limited that it was completely normal to fight for them. The Black God leader would not tolerate any challenge to his interests or authority, otherwise there was no way he could lead the Black God shelter. Hansen had known that the competition for resources was heated, but he did not expect it to be as fierce as this. Hansen's speed was lower than Black God's to begin with. Without any place to hide on the ice field, there was no way he could run away like this. If there were no other evolvers, he could try to fight Black God, risking his life. However, under the circumstances, he could only try to run away. Turning quickly, Hansen ran toward the frozen lake again. Seeing Black God approaching him, Hansen jumped inside one of the ice holes and disappeared. Guard the ice holes nearby. I don't believe he will not come out, Black God commanded coldly. The temperature of the water in the frozen lake was incredibly low. Even someone with a fitness level above 100 could not last long under the water. In addition, Hansen could not breathe under the water, which was why Black God believed that Hansen could not stay longer than 5 minutes under the water before he appeared in other ice holes. At that time, even if Hansen wanted to fight again, he would be almost frozen to death, which would make Black God kill him more easily. Hansen was swimming underneath the ice. Some fish creatures would approach to attack him from time to time, which were all hit senseless by Hansen's fists. None of them dared to approach him again. The reason that Hansen did not kill those fish was that he was afraid the bodies of the fish would float to the surface, which would expose his location under the water. The frozen lake was huge after all. If he swam further away and climbed up, he could naturally escape successfully. After Hansen swam for a while, he felt there was something wrong with the current. The current behind him seemed to be moving. He turned around and found a silver creature that looked like an eel, which rushed toward him like a torpedo. The silver body as wide as a bucket stirred up the water, which made Hansen roll around before he stabilized himself. The eel turned around and rushed to Hansen again. Hansen thought it was not the way to go, so he moved sideways to dodge the eel and did his claws into its silver scales. As if he were climbing a tree, Hansen wrapped his arms and legs around the eel's body. No matter how the eel rolled, Hansen stuck to the creature. Although the claws were berserk, which made it tougher than ordinary sacred blood weapons, it only pierced the eel's body by 2 inches. The eel was so strong that it was definitely a sacred blood creature. In the water, Hansen was not its match at all. He closed his eyes and held the eel tightly as it rolled. With the toxins on the claws, the eel shouldn't be able to survive too long. The eel rolled so hard that it was incredibly fast in the lake. Hansen stayed on the eel for a long while and felt something was wrong. The eel turned out to be swimming deeper and deeper. Hansen did not know how deep the lake was, but the pressure became higher and higher. Even with his fitness and snowy wolf mail, he still felt terrible from the pressure. Is it possible that this guy is immune to the poison? As Hansen was feeling depressed, he suddenly felt emptiness below his feet and fell. The first thought Hansen had was that the eel had jumped out of the water. However, he denied the thought immediately. He was falling down from the water and did not go up for it at all. Hansen quickly opened his eyes to look, and what he saw made him feel dazed. Thump! Hansen and the eel fell on the crystal-like floor. Luckily, Hansen acted fast enough to flip himself up on the eel's back, making the eel take the impact. Having left the water, the eel wiggled like a snake on the crystal-like floor. However, the places injured by the claws on its body had become purple and black, easily to be spotted on its silver body. Hansen did not think too much and cut the eel with the claws like crazy, making injury after injury on the silver body. The eel struggled to fight back, but it was very much poisoned. Having left the water, it soon left the ability to struggle and lied motionless on the floor. Sacred blood creature silver eel killed. These soul of silver eel gained. Eat its meat to gain 0 to 10 sacred geno points. Hansen was excited. However, he did not look at the body of the killed creature. Looking straight ahead, Hansen felt incredulous. Hansen did not know whether Atlantis, the legendary city, was real. However, this place shocked him no less than finding Atlantis. A gigantic sailboat was sitting at the bottom of the lake. Water avoided the sailboat and formed a spherical space under the water. Hansen and the silver eel fell on the left of the boat. Standing on the boat, Hansen looked like an ant. This sailboat was a dozen times bigger than Daphne. However, it looked too ancient to be a spacecraft. As far as Hansen could see, there was no gaps on the material of the boat. It looks like it was carved out from an entire piece of crystal. Such a huge project was only possible in the Alliance. In the God's Sanctuary, there were no available mechanics, and it was impossible to be carved out by hand. Judging from the huge silver oars, humans should not be able to manipulate this boat. As Hansen was dazed, he suddenly heard noises from the mysterious crystal boat. Looking to the direction of the noise, Hansen saw something coming out of the chambers of the boat. With the gleaming of golden light, Hansen's eyes were even prickly. The thing gradually appeared in his sight, and what he saw first was a crab pincer, followed by the body of a golden crab. It slowly climbed down the rope. Seeing where the golden crab was going, Hansen originally thought it was targeting himself. However, the golden crab quickly rushed to the dead body of the silver eel. Damn it, this guy wants to steal my food. Don't you know that I am famous for being petty? Hansen bristled. Disregarding his injuries, Hansen waved his claws at the golden crab. The golden crab was naturally much larger than ordinary crabs. However, it was not too big among creatures, about the size of a jeep. Like ordinary crabs, it could only climb sideways. Creatures with claws like this were Hansen's favorite. He went to the back of the crab and clawed at the golden shell. Then, the seemingly clumsy body of the golden crab suddenly bounced, facing Hansen with its head. The golden pincer blocked Hansen's claws. Feeling a huge force, Hansen's right hand started to bleed. His entire arm was numb, and he couldn't help stepping back a dozen steps before he could stable himself. Moving all its 8 claws, the golden crab moved sideways toward Hansen quickly in an incredibly nimble way. What kind of crab is this? So weird. Hansen turned back and ran around the crystal sailboat. Since the golden crab was incredibly fast and strong, Hansen found he could not take care of the creature at all. Running after Hansen for several laps, the golden crab failed to catch up with him and became so upset that it kept making noises with its pincer. Because Hansen was so good at his footwork, although he was slower than the golden crab, he could leverage the crystal sailboat as an obstruction to get rid of the golden crab. As Hansen was pondering what kind of tricks he needed to adopt to take care of this golden crab, the crab suddenly gave up chasing him and ran toward the body of the silver eel. I wonder if this guy eats the toxic meat of the silver eel, will it be poisoned as well? Although Hansen had this thought, the meat of the silver eel would be wasted if the golden crab was immune to the toxins. Thinking that, Hansen ran to launch a sneak attack against the golden crab from its back, trying to stop it from eating the silver eel. Hansen and the crab were both trapped in a dilemma. The golden crab could not catch up with Hansen, nor could it eat the eel peacefully. They kept fighting and none of them was able to take any advantage. Guarding the body of the silver eel, the golden crab faced Hansen, no longer wanting to chase him. However, it did not dare to turn around to eat the meat either. With the golden crab next to him, Hansen stared at the creature. Neither of the two knew how to proceed. Hansen observed the golden crab carefully, wishing to find its weaknesses. If it were an ordinary crab, the links and gaps between its shells should be its weakness. However, this golden crab was obviously somewhat different. The links between its shells were of a deeper golden color. Although the links were narrow, he could tell that they were even tougher than the shells. As for gaps, the golden crab did not have any. It was as if the crab was made of a piece of gold. As Hansen was feeling depressed, he suddenly saw the golden crab waving its pincer at him. Hansen thought it was about to attack again, and then found it did not move. It was waving its pincer to Hansen. The act did not look like a provocation or an assault but seemed to be a come here between humans. Hansen thought he was mistaken, rubbed his eyes, and found it was still waving like that. Big crab, you are not a flirty girl. There is no use for you to tempt me like this. Hansen did not know what the golden crab wanted, so of course he could not approach it. Hansen simply yelled at the crab. Hansen did not know whether the golden crab understood himself, but it most likely did not. After Hansen said that, the golden crab turned around and pointed at the silver eel's body with its pincer, and then pointed to Hansen. Hansen saw the golden crab making gestures, not understanding what it meant. He was so confused that he was full of questions. At this point, Hansen only regretted that he had never learned the language of the crab. Otherwise, he might be able to chat with this crab to see what was it that it wanted. The golden crab made the gestures again and again, repeating its moves. It was blowing bubbles from time to time, seeming to be very anxious, wishing it could speak to Hansen. Hansen watched for a while and felt his talent in learning the crab language was indeed lacking. However, he suddenly thought of one thing, which was the fact that he still had the spirit snow charmer. Although she had lost the ability to control other creatures after it gave Hansen her allegiance, she had been the master of creatures once, so she might understood what the crab was talking about. Summoning Snow Charmer, Hansen pointed at the golden crab making the gestures and asked her, Snow Charmer, do you know its language? No, Snow Charmer answered decisively. Hansen was suddenly very disappointed. Since even Snow Charmer did not understand the crab language, it was impossible for himself to know what it was trying to say. However, I do know what it means, Snow Charmer continued to say. What does it want to say? Hansen was excited and asked Snow Charmer. Snow Charmer said quietly, its gesture is quite obvious. It wants to split the body of the silver eel with you. Hansen was dazed. Looking at the gestures of the golden crab, he felt it was true. The golden crab made a gesture in the middle of the silver eel's body, and then pointed to both sides and Hansen. It seemed to be saying Hansen could pick one side. Hansen blushed. Such a simple gesture, yet he was unable to understand it. How foolish. Hansen quickly took Snow Charmer back, making his servant see his foolish side. Hansen felt quite embarrassed. Half is no, 2/3. Lion Hansen gestured as he spoke, sounding like an alien. However, this time the golden crab was the one who was confused. It stared at Hansen with bubbles coming out of its mouth and even scratched its head with its pincer like a person. Seeing that the golden crab did not understand him, Hansen did not dare to approach the body either. He had to gesture to the golden crab to ask it to step aside repeatedly. Luckily, this gesture was easy to be understood. The golden crab moved aside and stared at Hansen in suspicion. Hansen gestured it to move aside a bit further, and so it did. After a couple of times, Hansen made sure that the distance between the golden crab and the silver eel was safe to him. He then walked next to the silver eel's body, gesturing at 2/3 of the body like the golden crab. He then pointed the smaller part and then the golden crab, the larger part and then himself. The golden crab seemed to be understanding this time. As it shook its pincer, it moved its claws and returned to the eel. Hansen felt scared and stepped back quickly, but the golden crab did not mean to chase after him. It gestured on the body again, meaning it insisted on half and half. Hansen could not believe that he would bargain with a crab at this place with gestures. And this golden crab looked like an older lady bargaining in the farmer's market, not willing to sacrifice anything. The man and the crab discussed for a while and finally reached an agreement. Hansen could take about 3/5, while the golden crab was to take 2/5. Eat as you want. I wish you the bloody crab would be poisoned to death. Hansen cut the body of the silver eel according to the proportion they had agreed through gestures. Seeing the golden crab taking its part with its pincer, Hansen cursed inwardly. Hansen was afraid that the crab might snatch his part after it finished its own, so he summoned the angel, feeding the remaining silver eel to her. The archangel was the main force to help him hunt super creatures, so it was essential to Hansen that she transform again. Sacred blood meat was not a waste on her. In addition, this silver eel was as thick as a bucket and more than 30 feet long. Hansen's part was about 18 feet long. It was too much for him to eat up, while the archangel was eating with ease, her mouth moving non-stop. She was not affected by the toxins at all. The silver eel disappeared quickly. Hansen then had the time to look at the beast soul of the silver eel. Hansen felt he was a bit too lucky recently. As long as he hunted a sacred blood creature, he would gain a beast soul, which even scared Hansen himself a little bit. Type of beast soul of sacred blood silver eel, water mount. Water mount. Hansen became overjoyed. He was just wondering how he could come back to this place again. After all, humans could not stay in the water for a long time and this place was so deep in the water. Hansen was not sure whether he was able to dive so deep himself. With the silver eel mount, it would be easy for him to come down. The only shortcoming of the beast soul was that it could not be used on the land. However, that did not trouble Hansen at all. He had the golden growler on the land and did not need anything else. As the archangel was enjoying the needs of the silver eel, Hansen checked the crystal sailboat out and climbed to the deck. The sailboat was so big and carved out of crystal. However, nothing could be seen inside the boat, which made him feel quite weird. The golden crab had disappeared in a cabin, so Hansen wanted to see whether there was other stuff in the cabin. However, before he came to the entrance, the golden crab suddenly rushed out, waving the pincer fiercely at Hansen. Buddy, don't be so nervous. I am only looking around and do not mean you harm. Hansen stepped back and said with a smile, seeing that the golden crab was just guarding the entrance and did not chase him. However, the golden crab did not know what he was talking about, threatening him against approaching with its pincer. The more reluctant the golden crab was, the more Hansen wanted to see what was in the cabin. However, he looked at the entire crystal sailboat and found that entrance was the only one. Since it was guarded by the golden crab, there was no way that Hansen could enter. How come you are not poisoned? Hansen became upset, as he was not able to see what was inside the boat. He tried to stick his head up and look. Hansen was no match of the golden crab, so he had to retreat temporarily to think of another way. Currently, Hansen was very curious about the thing inside the crystal boat, and was not in a rush to leave. In addition, he wondered if those people from Black God's shelter were still guarding outside, so it was unnecessary for him to go out of the water. When I go out, I will definitely try to wipe out Black God's shelter. Hansen decided that as long as Black God's shelter was still there, his grudge would never disappear. In addition, Goddess Shelter was surrounded by ocean in 3 directions. In order to develop, it must expand to the ice field, which meant he must have his own place here. Now that Black God did him a service by becoming his enemy, Hansen would not be polite with him. Hansen had heard from Lai Xinglun that Black God was the strongest among the 3 forces on the ice field with the most resources. Lai Xinglun and the other force could only be its match when they united, maintaining the balance between the 3. Previously, when Starwheel Shelter was under the attack of spirits and the other shelter was distracted, Black God Shelter did not try to help. They probably wanted to unite the entire ice field after Starwheel Shelter was wiped out. It was not easy to conquer Black God Shelter, obviously. Blood God himself was stronger than Hansen, so he was very likely someone that had almost maxed out on sacred Geno points. His fitness index should be more than 120. In addition, Hansen was deterred by the knife skills of Black God. Up until this moment, Hansen still failed to understand how the strike disappeared, and if he did not understand it, he would suffer again when faced with Black God. If I could not beat him, I would rob him. Black God Shelter has such a large territory that I don't believe they could guard all the places if I attacked one by one. Hansen made up his mind to take care of the Black God territory when he got out. When he returned to the lower level of the boat, he saw that the Archangel had almost finished the body of the silver eel, with only a head left. Hansen had a thought and stopped the Archangel from her feast, taking her back into his Sea of Soul. Hansen looked around and hanged the head of the silver eel on a rope in front of the ship and hid on the right flank of the ship himself. After waiting for several hours, he indeed saw the golden crab sneaking out. However, because there was only a single rope, the crab could not climb up with its claws. It had to jump up to reach the head of the eel with its pincer. Seeing that the golden crab having left the crystal, Hansen secretly climbed onto the deck and sneaked into the cabin. When the golden crab was under the silver eel, it jumped twice but did not catch the head of the silver eel. Hansen felt content secretly. He had calculated the height of the jump of the crab, and he deliberately made it hard for it to reach. However, the crab would not give up either. This way, he had enough time. Standing in front of the entrance, Hansen looked inside the cabin. It was a hall inside. Everything was carved out of crystal, looking very delicate and beautiful. In the middle of the hall, the crystal table was placed. Hansen originally thought it was a table, but when he entered, he found it was no table, but a crystal treasure box, with the crystal lock on the outside. However, the lock was not locked, so it was not really effective. Is there some kind of treasure of the pirate or curse of the phantom boat? Hansen suddenly felt hesitant. Greed and curiosity eventually beat his logic. Hansen heard the noise of the head of the silver eel falling and knew that the golden crab would return very soon. He gritted his teeth, summoned Snow Charmer, stood next to the cabin door, and asked Snow Charmer to open the crystal box. The spirit was absolutely loyal to her master. After hearing the command, she took off the lock and lifted the lid of the box. Seeing nothing dangerous had happened, Hansen quickly walked up to the crystal treasure box and had a look. In the treasure box there was a woman, whose lower body was a fishtail. Her upper body was naked and pale, with 2 scallops covering her boobs. Her long blue hair fell like a waterfall, and her ears were blue fins, looking pretty but weird. Is this thing a mermaid? Hansen looked at the woman inside the treasure box and saw 2 other things next to her. One was a staff shaped like blue coral, and the other was a shiny gemstone. Spirit staff, spirit stone. Is this mermaid-like creature a spirit? Hansen saw what the 2 items were and looked to the mermaid in the box, surprised. According to the logic, once the shelter was conquered, the spirit had no way to run away. It could either choose to give its allegiance or destroy itself together with the spirit stone. How come this mermaid-like spirit was placed in this box? Suddenly, a thought made Hansen's eyes lit up. The sailboat does not look like it was made by humans. Is it possible that this crystal sailboat is in fact a shelter? With the noise outside, Hansen knew the golden crab seemed to be back. He quickly grabbed the spirit stone. If the mermaid was really a spirit, as long as Hansen grabbed the spirit stone, the spirit must be his. Just when Hansen put his hands on the spirit stone, the golden crab had rushed into the hall. After it saw Hansen, it became furious, rushing toward him waving its pincer. He took the spirit stone in his hand and ran around the hall. He used the techniques in Dongchuan Sutra and ran from the golden crab using the pillars and other stuff as obstructions. Hansen and the crab were running inside the crystal boat, and there was nothing the golden crab could do to Hansen. When Hansen ran, he suddenly heard a noise. Where the noise came from was the box that trapped the mermaid spirit. When he turned around to look, he saw the mermaid had sat up. Her white hands rubbed her eyes and then stretched. It looked like she had slept well. After the mermaid woke up, she saw Hansen and the spirit stone in his hand. Her blue eyes were suddenly dazed, and she froze for a while. The golden crab was still chasing after Hansen. When Hansen was about to continue to run, he suddenly saw the mermaid taking up the staff and pointing it to the golden crab. The golden crab went to the side immediately and did not chase Hansen anymore. The mermaid went out of the crystal box with the staff in her hand. When she walked, a piece of wave moved under her fishtail, supporting her to go forward. The mermaid went up to Hansen, bowed to him with a hand on her right chest, and then she said, "Mermaid Princess wishes to give her master her pure soul and become his loyal servant." Mermaid Princess. This mermaid is a royal spirit. Hansen heard her words and became overjoyed. He did not expect a mishap had come a blessing. Just by wandering around under the water, he had gained a royal spirit. There were two types of royal spirits. One was princess and the other was prince. Hansen did not hesitate and put the spirit stone on her forehead. In blue light, the spirit stone and the mermaid became one. They both became a light that entered Hansen's sea of soul. Mermaid Princess, royal spirit. She is indeed a royal spirit. Hansen checked the information of the princess. Although he had expected it, he still became overjoyed. After the mermaid princess became Hansen's, the golden crab suddenly became fierce again. It was no longer bound by the spirit and rushed to Hansen again. Hansen ran out of the cabin to dodge the attack of the golden crab. He made it all the way under the crystal boat and the golden crab then gave up its chase. Hansen moved further away from the boat and summoned the mermaid princess. He then commanded her, "Get rid of the annoying crab." Since it was a royal spirit, then her ability should be the equivalence of a sacred blood creature. With her unique intelligence, she should be able to be the match of the crab even if she could not kill it. However, the mermaid did not move at Hansen's command. She took a deep breath, her ample breasts under white scallops shivered, and she said, "Master, I don't have the ability to kill it." Hansen felt dazed and looked at her. "Are you not a royal spirit? Even if you could not kill the crab, you should be able to fight it." "Sorry, master, I am not a fighting spirit. I do not have the ability to fight," said the mermaid princess. "Then what is your ability?" Hansen asked curiously. He had heard about the non-combatant spirits, which were rather rare. However, that was mainly because the spirits that humans gained were limited in general. "I could operate the crystal palace." The mermaid princess pointed at the crystal sailboat. "How would that be useful?" Hansen looked at the mermaid princess, dazed. The ability of this royal spirit was just to operate a boat. Hansen could not think of what use it would serve. The crystal palace shelter is indestructible internally. It could sail to any place in the water, and it could go to the bottom of the sea. Except for the fact that it could not leave the water, Crystal Palace could reach anywhere. Mermaid Princess was obviously upset about Hansen questioning her ability. Hansen thought about it and reckoned that this ability was rather nice. Since the boat was a royal shelter, Hansen now had a moving castle on the ocean with Mermaid Princess. He could go hunting without any efforts, which would solve the issue of the lack of creatures. Thinking it was a nice thing to have, Hansen commanded the Mermaid Princess again. "Okay, get the Crystal Palace over here right now." "Sorry, master, I could not," the spirit said helplessly. "How come you could not do that either? Didn't you just say that you could operate the Crystal Palace?" Hansen looked at the spirit in suspicion. "I must be sitting on the operating seat of the Crystal Palace to control it," answered Mermaid Princess. Hansen became somewhat depressed. The golden crab was guarding the cabin, so it did not make sense for him to rush inside. In addition, God knows whether there were more impressive creatures inside. "Forget it. When I think of a way to kill the crab, I will take back the Crystal Palace." Hansen gave up the thought of taking the sailboat by force. Other people did not have Mermaid Princess anyway, so they could not take the sailboat away even if they had discovered it. At a remote corner of the frozen lake, Hansen made an ice hole from underneath the water and climbed out. He shook off the water on his body and quickly left the lake for the ice field, seeing no one was around. Hansen wanted to go to Starwheel Shelter to ask Lai Zinglan about the detailed information of Black God Shelter. Only when he had more information about his enemy could he hit his enemy harder. Especially, Hansen must find out about Black God's knife skills. Hansen wanted to go to Starwheel Shelter to ask Lai Zinglan about the detailed information of Black God Shelter. Only when he had more information about his enemy could he hit his enemy harder. Especially, Hansen must find out about Black God's knife skills. Lai Zinglan was very glad to see Hansen visiting him. Hearing Hansen explaining his conflict with Black God, he frowned and said, Black God is more and more arrogant and wanton. Wise England explained the background of Black God in details to Hansen, which made Hansen frown slightly. The family of Black God was quite ordinary, but he was working for a force in the Alliance, which made it almost impossible for Hansen to kill him in the Alliance. Among all the shelters, he was the strongest on the ice field. In addition, every month he provided a large sum of income to the force in the Alliance, which gave him strong support. It was not easy to take him down. As for the knife skills of Black God, all Lai Zinglen knew was that it was called Tornado Knife. He did not know how it worked either. Lai Zinglen only knew that when Black God made the move, the knife would disappear for a moment, as if it was teleported. Of course, Black God was merely an evolver, so he could not have the ability to make the knife teleport. There must be some special techniques that they did not know of. Tornado Knife, it sounds familiar somehow. Hansen felt he had heard about the name somewhere. Thinking about it, Hansen then remembered that Tang Zhenliu had once said that one of his knife skills was Tornado Knife. However, from what Hansen could remember, Tang Zhenliu did not have the ability to make his weapon disappear. Would this Black God be related to Tang Zhenliu? Hansen was determined to ask Tang Zhenliu first when he went back, to figure out what Tornado Knife was about. After he returned to the Alliance, Hansen asked Jai Yanran to get him the number of Tang Zhenliu in the military. Hansen then contacted Tang Zhenliu. Hansen, how does it feel to be a soldier? Tang Zhenliu asked Hansen, smiling. I don't feel much, Hansen shrugged and said. He was telling the truth. Although he was now Jai Yanran's guard, the actual guard was Annie, so Hansen was merely a declaration. In fact, no one expected that Hansen could protect Jai Yanran as an evolver. His position was required by Jai Yanran herself, and initially her guard was only Annie. However, since Annie had arrived, Hansen had a lot less time to spend with Jai Yanran. That woman was following Jai Yanran almost 24/7, which made Hansen very mad about it, even questioning whether she was a lesbian in love with Jai Yanran. Haha, your life is great. With the beauty on your side, it is not like an ordinary service. You are completely on vacation with your girl. Lin Feng and I are having a terrible time. We are either training or fighting the Shura, almost losing our lives several times, said Tang Zhenliu, feeling upset. How come you guys are at the front? Hansen asked, puzzled. With the background of Tang Zhenliu and Lin Feng, it should be easy for them to stay in the back, but they were serving in the front. It is completely Lin Feng's idea. He said only by doing this can we exercise ourselves. He must stay in this hell and the wars are so frequent that I have almost gone mad. Although Tang Zhenliu said that, he was smiling. Hansen looked at Tang Zhenliu carefully and found he had much darker skin than before. He also looked tougher with an injury that had not cured on his forehead, looking more like a man. Tang Zhenliu explained briefly what was happening on his side. Lin Feng and he were warframed soldiers, and on their planet, humans and Shura were coexisting, fighting for the mines. However, because of the location of the planet, no one could take the entire planet. Both forces had armies on the planet and they fought once in a while. When they had finished chatting, Hansen then asked about Black God and Tornado Knife. After hearing Hansen's words, Tang Zhenliu hit the table madly and said coldly, damn it. Hansen, if you have the chance, kill the bastard for me. Hansen was surprised to see Tang Zhenliu being so excited, so he asked Tang Zhenliu what had happened. Tang Zhenliu told Hansen that Tornado Knife was originally one of the family secrets of the Tangs. Later on, due to some incidents in the family, Tornado Knife was robbed by others, which was a huge shame for the family. Then I could act freely. Hansen was initially afraid that there might be some kind of connection between Black God and Tang Zhenliu, which might be awkward in the future. At this point, he was completely relaxed. Kill him, and I will treat you to drinks. Do not worry about people supporting Black God. If you could kill him, I will take care of those people. Tang Zhenliu told Hansen about the core secret of Tornado Knife, wishing Hansen could get rid of Tang Zhenliu, giving his family justice. After hearing Tang Zhenliu's explanation, Hansen understood why it looked like Black God's knife had disappeared. In fact, it did not truly disappear. Just because the Tornado Knife was so fast, it felt like it had disappeared. The speed was not continuous, but a temporary effect in the attack. In a short amount of time, the speed of the knife increased greatly, making the high speed even higher, causing a visual illusion. In fact, the knife seen by the eyes was the shadow of the knife. The real knife had already changed its location. Although Hansen had understood the mechanism of Tornado Knife, it was still very difficult to tackle it. At that kind of speed, even if he knew what was happening, it would be useless if he could not follow the knife. With Hansen's eyesight, he could not even see the knife, so even if he knew the knife was elsewhere, he could not block it. Tang Zhenliu did not have enough speed and strength in the past, so he did not achieve the same effect as Black God. Currently, if he used the skills, he would not be worse than Black God. Do you have time tomorrow? Tang Zhenliu asked Hansen. Yes, replied Hansen. Okay then, you go to the virtual camp tomorrow and I will spar with you. Today I have something else, so I must leave now. Tang Zhenliu was a decisive person, so he directly hung up. Hansen knew that Tang Zhenliu was going to spar with him using Tornado Knife, which was great news to Hansen. The next day, Hansen logged into the virtual camp at the time agreed with Tang Zhenliu. According to the ID name that Tang Zhenliu told him, Hansen added him as a friend. Tang Zhenliu accepted Hansen's requests and invited him to enter the room, changing the setting to no audience allowed. Tornado Knife was one of the secrets of Tang Zhenliu's family. Although it was leaked once, the secret shall still be kept. Tang Zhenliu demonstrated for Hansen in a slower speed than normal. In addition, he told Hansen about the keys of the Tornado Knife in slow motion, which could not be seen by outsiders. The front was different from the back, because Tang Zhenliu could not make much time every day. He was sacrificing his limited resting time and sparing 1 hour a day. Therefore, the two did not speak at all and went directly into the fight. Tang Zhenliu slashed at Hansen with his weapon, and Hansen tried to block it. When the two weapons were about to clash, Tang Zhenliu's weapon weirdly disappeared at Hansen's side. When it appeared again, it was already on Hansen's chest. Although Hansen could use his footwork to dodge the strike, it would not be meaningful at all. If he could not block the strike up front, the best Hansen could do was not to lose. If he could not beat Black God, it would mean nothing to Hansen. Hansen did not continue to dodge Tang Zhenliu's strikes, taking the strike directly and feeling the rhythm of the skills. Again, Hansen waved his weapon again, attacking Tang Zhenliu one more time. Although Tang Zhenliu had explained the key to the skills, Hansen still felt it was difficult to predict the Tornado Knife in actual fight. It was mainly because the speed of the weapon was so fast that Hansen could only stop it by attacking Tang Zhenliu. The best he could do was mutual destruction, and most of the time, Hansen was killed off directly. Neither of them could predict the other. However, because Tornado Knife was fast enough, Tang Zhenliu was able to cut Hansen earlier, which Hansen had no solution to cope with. Again. 1 hour had soon passed, but the result was not that great. When Tang Zhenliu was using all he got, Hansen still could not block Tornado Knife. There is a unique way to use force in my family, which is integrated in Tornado Knife. It allows the speed to be incredibly high momentarily. At the same fitness level, one is unlikely to block Tornado Knife. In addition, Black God is even stronger than you. If you want to beat him, you can only rely on your footwork and wait for him to expose his weaknesses. Otherwise, it is hard for you to win. I am only sparring with you to get you familiar with the rhythm and attacking range of Tornado Knife, so that you will have more information when you face him again. Tang Zhenliu said and quickly left the virtual camp. Hansen knew that Tang Zhenliu was right. If it was the one-on-one, Hansen could use his footwork to deal with Black God, and it will not be easy for Black God to beat him. However, that way, he will only have an opportunity when Black God made a mistake, which meant handing the initiative to Black God, which Hansen could not accept. In addition, the Black God shelter was huge, so Hansen would never have an opportunity to fight Black God one-on-one. Black God would definitely be surrounded by other evolvers. In order to kill Black God, Hansen had to block Tornado Knife up front. So fast, how shall I block it? Hansen thought to himself but did not have any conclusion. Beep beep. As Hansen was thinking, he suddenly heard a call on the virtual camp. He took a look and saw it was from Ms. Perfume. Hansen chose to accept, and Ms. Perfume suddenly appeared in front of Hansen. She looked at Hansen and asked, "Coach, do you have time to teach me? I have several questions about last session that I want to ask you. I'm afraid today is not a good time." Hansen shook his head. He was thinking what the solution to Tornado Knife was and was in no mood to teach Ms. Perfume. Kim Chuan was slightly disappointed. She had waited for a long time to see Soldier on the warship again, but she did not have the opportunity to ask him questions. Naturally, she was let down. When Kim Chuan was about to say goodbye, she suddenly heard Hansen ask, "Do you practice fast sword or knife?" "Yes, but I am not that good at it," Kim Chuan answered hastily. Atomic fission that she practiced was great in both strength and perseverance. That was why her techniques were all quite balanced. There were no extreme techniques. Then, if you encounter someone who is much faster than you, what will you do? Hansen did not truly want to ask her, but only voiced his concern. King Xuan thought about it and said, avoid it with my footwork and then find the perfect opportunity. King Xuan thought he was using questions to teach her and felt quite happy inwardly, not daring to take Hansen's question lightly. If you could not dodge and have to fight it out with your opponent, what then? Hansen asked again. If we are fighting for life and death, the faster one will definitely win. If I am not faster than my opponent, and I could only enhance my strength, King Xuan said after serious consideration. Why strength? Hansen looked at her in surprise. He initially thought King Xuan would say to increase her defense. King Xuan thought Hansen was testing her, so she organized her words and said, if one is fast, then his strength must not be too strong. If I am strong enough, I will not die from his strike. However, my strike will kill him. That is a method. Although what you said might work, it is not the answer I want. Hansen shook his head with a wry smile. This method would not work against Tornado Knife. The strength of Black God was stronger than Hansen's to begin with. Even if they trade one strike for the other, Hansen would be the one who suffered more. I am not smart enough. Please instruct me, coach. King Xuan could not think of a way to win when her opponent was faster than her. Hansen wanted to say he did not know, but when he saw Miss Perfume, Hansen suddenly thought of one thing. Last time, when he was teaching her, he was explaining the techniques in Dongchuan Sutra. At that time, he explained several techniques that he was practicing. However, thinking of those techniques, Hansen's eyes suddenly lit up. It was not about those techniques, but about some other words in Dongchuan Sutra. The other words were also included in the parts of Dongchuan Sutra that Hansen had already translated. It was related to what Hansen had learned about footwork, but Hansen was not able to perceive it fully. However, thinking back, Hansen felt he suddenly understood those words. He invited Ms. Perfume to fight and said to her, come on, use all you got to attack me at full speed. King Xuan was overjoyed, thinking Hansen was trying to teach her. She did not save any energy and cut at Hansen with Thunder Knife at full speed. Hansen had been practicing Thunder Knife as well recently, so he was quite familiar with the skill. When King Xuan just raised her hand, before the skill was launched, she felt she had to stop. If King Xuan continued her attack by force, her arm would hit Hansen's hand blade. King Xuan took back her hand and was ready to attack again. But the result was the same. Hansen's hand was again placed at a spot that made her feel very uncomfortable. King Xuan had changed the way to attack 7 to 8 times, but she was never able to make a complete strike. All of her strikes were forced to change in the middle, which made her feel so uncomfortable that she almost wanted to vomit blood. This way, King Xuan was even more respectful toward Hansen, believing more firmly that Hansen was a martial arts master and some incredible figure in the military. I understand. Coach, you are saying that even if my opponent is fast enough, as long as there is space and distance, I could stay still to fight his moves and buy myself time using space and distance so as to react. King Xuan said happily. It is not completely like that. You do not understand. If you practice more, you will naturally understand it in the future. Hansen was very happy, and he did not mean to put King Xuan down. King Xuan was right. He did buy some time using the distance. However, this amount of time was not enough for him to beat the opponent. The key to win was the word block. In ancient times, there was a strategy in wars called attacking Y to save Zhao, which meant attacking the opponent in his vital parts to make him give up the original target. This technique was also called no-kill. The aim of this technique was not to kill the enemy, but to force the enemy to take defensive position. As long as the enemy turned from attacking to defending, then Hansen could use his footwork. Since the enemy no longer had the ability to attack, it was just a matter of time to beat him. In order to use the blocking technique well, Hansen must first figure out the importance of each move, which meant he needed to understand the strengths and weaknesses of his opponent. For example, Hansen himself had also practiced Thunder Knife, so he knew what the positions that King Xuan had to defend herself were. If King Xuan uses a different technique that Hansen was not familiar with, the effect would not be as good. Currently, what was beneficial to Hansen was that Tang Zhenliu, who had the same level at using Tornado Knife, was his sparring partner. All he needed to do was to fully understand Tornado Knife, and then he could reach the effect that Tang could not attack him at all. Thinking of that, Hansen wished that he could fight Tang Zhenliu right away so as to familiarize himself with Tornado Knife. However, unfortunately, Tang Zhenliu had too many tasks in the front, so he only had limited time every day. When he was in the middle of a project, he did not have time at all. Even so, Tang Zhenliu was astonished by Hansen's performance. Initially, he only wanted for Hansen to avoid the attacks when Hansen got familiar with the knife skills. However, Hansen was trying to block the attacks altogether. Tang Zhenliu originally thought that was something couldn't be achieved. It was a family secret, and he knew very well how strong the techniques were, which were impossible to block. However, the more he sparred with Hansen, the more he doubted his own thought. When facing Hansen, Tang Zhenliu felt harder and harder to make his moves. He felt like he was trapped in a barbed cage. Whenever he tried to reach out his arm, he would be stabbed. And when he was trying to reach out his legs, his thighs would be hurt. The more he fought Hansen, the more painful Tang Zhenliu felt. He almost wanted to drop his weapon. Weirdo. You and Lin Feng are both weirdos. Finally, one day, Tang Zhenliu could not take it anymore. He threw his weapon away and exclaimed madly at Hansen. Hansen knew that his blocking skills were quite good now. Although it might not work against other skills, it will definitely function when it came to Tornado Knife. All he needed to do was practice more in order to beat Black God. This time, you better not give me the chance. Hansen was thinking how he could get rid of Black God the bastard. Tang Zhenliu was feeling quite glad. Luckily, his family had more secrets than Tornado Knife. Otherwise, in the future, he did not need to fight Hansen again and could simply call him Grandpa. In the meantime, Tang Zhenliu swore to himself that he would never use his family skills again in front of Hansen. Hansen asked Tang Zhenliu to practice with him a few more days. In the end, Tang Zhenliu had become the one who was tortured. He could not make his moves, and he was beaten miserably by Hansen. Currently, Hansen was very confident to face Tornado Knife. However, he was not sure whether Black God had practiced other impressive skills. In addition, Black God had many master fighters that it was almost impossible to kill him without a perfect opportunity. If I could not kill you, I must gain some profits first. After learning from Lai Xinglan the recent moves of Black God, Hansen squinted his eyes. At this time of the year, because of the ocean currents or other causes, on the beach of Ice River where there were normally no creatures at all would witness the arrival of a large number of snakefish. They came to the beach from the ocean for unknown reason. Most snakefish were primitive creatures. However, if the cluster of fish was huge enough, there might be mutant and sacred blood snakefish among them. The beach of the Ice River was the territory of Black God's shelter. Every year, tens of thousands of snakefish would climb up from the ocean. They could always harvest several mutant snakefish and a sacred blood snakefish king. This was one of the fixed benefits of Black God's shelter. At this time of the year, Black God would summon a large number of people to come to the beach to hunt snakefish. Hansen arrived at the Ice River early. However, he did not go hunting, but dug an ice cave that only one person could fit in at a quarter of the beach. He then hid in the cave and piled up snow on the outside. No matter how hard Black God fought, he could not predict that someone would be hiding in the ice cave for several days. After the large cluster of snakefish had come to the shore, he led people to clear up the place and did not find Hansen. Hansen was hiding inside the ice cave, biting the meat jerky as he observed the situation from the gap he kept deliberately. A large number of snakefish started to climb out of the ice river and reach the beach covered in ice. More and more fish arrived, yet no one knew what they were trying to do. More than 1,000 people had gathered from the Black God's shelter, hunting the snakefish that had arrived. Snakefish looked like sea snakes. In fact, different from snakes, they did not have fangs or any teeth. Because they were covered in slime, weapons would easily slide on their skin. If one was entangled by the creature, its sharp scales on the stomach could even break one's bones. Ordinary people did not have the conditions to kill them. Only a large force like Black God could organize some new people to hunt snakefish together. Because the sacred blood snakefish king had not appeared, the strong evolvers with a fitness level above 100 including Black God himself did not make a move. All they did was to lead thousands of evolvers to hunt the creatures on the beach. There were 2 to 3 days from the snakefish arriving at the shore until they returned to the ocean. So Hansen was in no rush. The cold inside the ice cave did not have much of an effect on him. However, he was uncomfortable crawling and had to use jade skin to make himself feel better since he could not move. Luckily, the second day since the snakefish came to the shore, Hansen heard exclaims among the crowd. The dark red snakefish was a bit more than 6 feet long. Standing on top of the wall, it had a pair of fins or wings on the back of its head. As the fins moved, it made a weird noise. The sacred blood snakefish king had eventually arrived. Hansen suddenly became excited, observing the condition on the outside. Once he had an opportunity, he would go ahead and catch the snakefish king. He had even planned the route to escape. After the snakefish king appeared, the other snakefish became even crazier, rushing to the floor. The advanced fighters at Black God's shelter eventually moved. 5 or 6 evolvers with fitness above 100 killed their way toward the fish king, led by Black God. Other people continued to guard their own positions, killing the other snakefish. They did not look nervous at all. Obviously, they were quite experienced. Black God and his fellows rushed out, and primitive snakefish could not block their way at all. Very soon, they were approaching the Snakefish King. Snakefish King issued a strange squeak and bounced itself into the air. Its fins moving, it flew in the sky like a bird. Its little wings were too small. On the back of its head, they looked like a pair of ears that were slightly bigger. Unexpectedly, it could fly with the wings. Black God and the rest were besieging the Fish King. As they hit it with their weapons obviously slid off. They could not kill the creature in a short amount of time. The Snakefish King was 100 times more slimy than an eel. Even Sacred Blood Beast's soul sword would slide off its body, not leaving any marks. Even Black God's tornado knife did not work on it, which made Hansen feel quite surprised. If they could not hurt the Snakefish King, how did Black God and the rest kill it in the past years? Those people did not use any special method but attacked the Snakefish King together while killing the primitive snakefish that were approaching them. After watching for a while, Hansen could guess what they were trying to do. Although that Snakefish King could fly, obviously it could not last long in the air since it took more than the little wings to fly. The first time when it was flying, it could maintain about 15 minutes in the air. However, gradually, it could last shorter and shorter in the air and had to land. In the air, he did not have any point of force application. However, when it was on the land, there were points of force application. When the weapons cut it again, they would not slide off that easily. After watching for more than half an hour, Hansen noticed that the Snakefish King was weaker and weaker. He knew that it was his opportunity, took away the snow on the outside, and climbed out of the ice cave. Currently, it was the key moment for him to hunt the Snakefish King. Everyone was doing their best to hunt the snakefish, and no one had extra energy to look at other people. In addition, they had already cleared the space and blocked the way to the beach, so there was no way they could expect an outsider present. Hansen got inside the group of thousands of people, and no one found he was an outsider. Hansen killed several snakefish casually and gradually approached. Black God and the rest had already circled the Snakefish King in different directions, for fear that it might escape into the ocean. It was harder and harder for the Snakefish King to fly. It looked like it was about to be dead. Once it lost the ability to fly and could only wiggle on the ground, it would be easily killed. Hansen gradually approached Black God and his mates, focusing his eyes on their moves. Hansen thought, this is a good opportunity. If I could kill Black God here, then Black God's shelter would have no leader, which would make it much easier for me to conquer the shelter. Initially, Hansen only wanted to steal the Snakefish King. Now that he had an opportunity to assassinate Black God, he would not let it go. Hansen focused on Black God first. Very soon, the Fish King could no longer fly. Black God was overjoyed, found an opportunity, and rushed to cut it in half. Brother, watch out. When Black God was about to make a strike, he suddenly heard his friend calling him and felt ominous. Black God was indeed quite impressive and decisive. The moment he heard the voice, he directly fell forward. However, it was still a bit too late. He felt a burning pain on his back. It seemed that the armor on his back and his muscles were slashed open by sharp weapons. Hansen felt it was a shame. Black God and the top evolvers were a bit too far from the crowd. When he approached them, he was still discovered by an evolver opposite him, who warned Black God in time. With his claws, he did not kill Black God this time. Black God fell to the ground and rolled a dozen feet away, holding back the pain on his back. The 5 evolvers with fitness level above 100 came to Hansen. Hansen did not linger. His strike did not kill Black God, so he knew that he had lost his opportunity. He rushed to the Snakefish King directly, using the claws to cut off its head, taking up the creature's body. Hansen ran toward the ice river. Sacred blood creature Snakefish King killed. No beast soul gained. Eat its meat to gain 0 to 10 sacred geno points. The evolvers tried to stop Hansen, but Hansen swayed left and right, zigzagging among 3 persons momentarily. He ran past 5 persons non-stop. When Black God got up, holding back his pain, Hansen had already gone. It is that asshole. He's not dead yet. Kill him for me. Black God saw what Hansen looked like, recognized him, and yelled to the evolvers in surprise and madness. The evolvers quickly caught up with Hansen. However, Hansen directly jumped into the ice river. A giant silver eel appeared underneath his feet. The giant silver eel broke the ice on the river and was 100 feet away instantaneously, leaving Black God and his friends appalled on the land. Black God, I am taking some of the interests today. Next time I see you I will kill you, Hansen said loudly and rolled the silver eel away. You are dead. I will kill you definitely. Kill you. Black God was so mad that he was standing, cursing at Hansen's direction. When he scolded Hansen, he moved his back, which made his injury so painful that his face became grim. Black God became very mad. Not only was he almost killed by a sneak attack, but his sacred blood snakefish king was stolen. In addition, the one who did all that was someone who he thought had died underneath the frozen lake. Hansen disregarded what Black God did and rode the silver eel away, landing at a remote location. He summoned Meowth and rode Meowth away from the territory of Black God's shelter. La la la, la la la, I am a barbecue master. Hansen barbecued the snakefish that he had skinned on the convenient stove he brought with him and hummed a little song happily. It was not easy to get his hands on such a sacred blood creature. This sacred blood snakefish king would give him 8 or 9 sacred geno points at least. What was more important was that this creature was stolen from Black God, which made Hansen feel it was extra tasty. Just by smelling the fragrance of the barbecue, he could not stop his mouth from watering. Unfortunately, they only come to the shore once a year. Before the barbecue was done, Hansen saw a man coming his way in the snow outside. Black God's guys are here. Hansen was surprised, glanced that way, and it did not look like it. If it were the people from Black God's shelter, they should be more than one person. The person walked closer, and Hansen saw what he looked like. Out of Hansen's expectation, he knew the man. Although they were not familiar with each other, he had a deeper impression of him. The grandson of Senator Yidongmu. When Hansen participated in the contest of First God's Sanctuary using Dollar's identity, Hansen beat Yidongmu to become top 10. And the Fairy Queen was his reward for being one of the chosen. After that, he had never heard the news about Yidongmu again. Unexpectedly, Hansen ran into the person here. Yidongmu walked directly opposite Hansen. He looked at the barbecue on the stove and placed a fox-like red creature on the snow. Pointing to the barbecue, he asked, I want to trade this mutant creature for your barbecue. Will you do it? No, Hansen rejected directly, thinking, you think I'm an idiot. A mutant creature for my sacred blood creature. Yidongmu could not help frowning, checking Hansen out again, because he had not had anything cooked in so long. He wanted to trade the mutant creature he hunted for the barbecue, which was unexpectedly turned down by the other person. Can I borrow your stove? Name your price. Yidongmu could not tell where Hansen was from, so he did not mind the answer. Yidongmu pointed to Hansen's stove, said, the stove is quite cheap. Just use it. Hansen smiled and said. Yidongmu did not say anything but summoned a dagger to clean up the fox-like creature. Cutting off a piece of meat, he started to make the barbecue. The two persons did not converse much but barbecued respectively. When Hansen barbecue was about ready, he took a bite and felt it was so tasty. The grease melted in his mouth. So nice. Yidongmu had been working hard to cultivate, trying to enhance his martial arts skills and clear his name that was belittled by Dollar. He often spent several months every time he came to the God's Sanctuary, and sometimes even more than half a year. On the ice field, all he could eat what was raw meat. Even if he was made of iron, his stomach would no longer take it. How long have you spent in God's Sanctuary? Yidongmu asked Hansen. Not long, just a few days. Hansen said. Have you heard about Dollar recently? Yidongmu had spent about 6 months in the God's Sanctuary this time. He had been hunting alone all the time and did not have any news from the outside. Hansen was dazed, as he did not expect that was what Yidongmu would ask. He thought about it and said, I heard that there was someone named Kill Dollar on the official platform. He had won consecutively. Some people said he was Dollar himself, and I wondered if that was true. Tell me about the details, Yidongmu said immediately. I have only heard about it. No one knows whether Kill Dollar's actual Dollar, and I will be the last one to tell. It must be him. Except for him, no one could be that good, Yidongmu said assertively. Hansen was embarrassed inwardly. There were definitely evolvers who could be as good. He just had not met a truly good opponent. I want to hunt a sacred blood creature and need an assistant. Come with me. I will spare you 10% of the meat after I succeed. 20%. Hansen blinked and doubled the price. Let's go. Yidongmu did not bargain and asked Hansen to go with him. Hansen liked people like this a lot. Rich people who did not care about the price and only cared to be happy are the best. Following Yidongmu eastward on the ice field, Hansen reached the snow-capped mountains in less than 2 days. If he were to go back to Goddess Shelter, he must cross this region. However, because of the terrain, it was not easy to pass this region. Furthermore, if he encountered sacred blood creatures, it was too dangerous to fight on the mountains without the ability to fly. If he were not careful, he would fall into deep valleys. The reason that Li Zinglun and Black God would try to conquer the royal shelter before they expand to the mountainous region was because of the terrain, which was unsuitable for large-scale fights. You are not trying to enter the mountains to hunt sacred blood creatures, Hansen asked Yidongmu, surprised. Relax, there is no risks. I'm only asking you to lure the creature out for me. The rest is my job. The creature had suffered in my hands, so it would not dare to come out if I were there, Idongmu said quietly. Hansen did not say anything more and followed Idongmu into the snow-capped mountains. Like Idongmu said, he did not go deep into the mountains, but stopped after climbing one mountain. Just walk around ahead of me. When the creature had come out, run in my direction. Idongmu dug a hole in the snow and lay down, asking Hansen to bury him with the snow. Hansen knew that like himself, Idongmu was also an assassin. He did not say much and followed Idongmu's instruction, walking around in the valley ahead of him. Looking around, all he could see was continuous snow-capped mountains. There were no creatures, let alone sacred blood creatures. What creatures would be here? Hansen looked for a while and did not spot any creatures. As Hansen became impatient, he suddenly heard hoofbeat. From afar, he saw a donkey-like creature with a pair of antlers running from behind a mountain. Its hooves were rather wide, which prevented it from being trapped in the snow. It ran toward Hansen quickly, faster and faster. There is a creature indeed. Hansen did not know whether this one was the one that Idongmu was talking about. He turned around to run toward where Idongmu was hiding. The creature looked like it could fly, running fast on the snow. Luckily, Hansen was close to where Idongmu was hiding and soon reached him. The creature followed Hansen and approached him quickly. Idongmu quickly emerged from underneath the snow, appearing under the stomach of the creature, stabbing his dagger into its stomach, making a long cut. The creature was bleeding on its stomach. Forgetting about Hansen, it neighed, turned around and ran. However, Idongmu would never let it go. Catching up with it, he cut the creature repeatedly. The creature finally fell on the floor quietly. Good skills, good footwork. Hansen couldn't help complimenting. Idongmu had made great progress in these years indeed. In addition, he was in Second God's Sanctuary several years earlier, so he had improved his geno points greatly. If it were Dollar, he would have killed the creature with the first strike. I am not good enough, Idongmu said seriously. Hansen felt very embarrassed inwardly. Idongmu was simply obsessed. It should have been several years since Idongmu saw him, so there was no way Idongmu knew what level Hansen was on. It was completely his own illusion. Is that the sacred blood creature that you were talking about? Hansen walked up to the creature and asked, puzzled. Although this creature ran fast, it did not look like a sacred blood creature judging from its fitness. Idongmu shook his head. Not this one. This is a mutant creature. Idongmu then paused and said, this is good as well. We will use this body as the bait. The creature would come out smelling the blood. You can stay here and make a barbecue out of this mutant creature. Idongmu then dug another hole and hid himself again. Brother, you do not need to work so hard. How about we continue after eating something together? Asked Hansen. No need. If it were Dollar, he would have done even better. Idongmu said seriously and urged Hansen to bury him up. Hansen did not know what to say. Even he felt somewhat embarrassed. He did not feel he was as good as Idongmu had described. Hansen buried Idongmu up again, dissecting the mutant creature's body. Hansen thought it was a bit too big for him to eat. He then summoned Meowth to offer him the food. Meowth bit the body of the mutant creature excitedly. As for Archangel, she did not care to eat mutant meat at all, not wanting to come out. Hansen took out a piece of barbecued snakefish king, eating while squatting. He soon heard the voice telling him the increase of sacred geno points. Seeing that Hansen was feeding mutant meat to his pet, Idongmu frowned slightly. This behavior was a bit too extravagant. Even Idongmu himself had never done that before. After all, the resources on this ice field were so limited that Idongmu had not even filled up his mutant geno points yet. After Hansen had just taken a few bites, he heard loud hoofbeat behind the mountain again. Meowth that was eating suddenly bristled. It bared its teeth toward the direction of the noise and growled fiercely. Hansen stared at the direction of the snow-capped mountain, and soon saw a creature that looked like a triceratops rushing out from behind the mountain. Its horn looked like a silver awl and its skin looked like iron. The moment the triceratops came out, Hansen felt dazed. Hansen wondered if Idongmu was dumb. Such a large creature weighed at least a dozen tons. It would take more than a year for someone to eat it. What use would it be even if he killed it? But then Hansen thought, Idongmu was probably just trying to gain the beast's soul. The meat was not that important to him. Hansen felt a bit upset. However, it would not be a waste if he got the meat. He would not eat himself, but he could feed Archangel. Hansen took Meowth and ran back. He did not need to move a finger anyway. With 20% of the meat, he could feed Archangel happily. That Triceratops had rushed to the location of the body of the mutant creature. Without a pause, it still came toward Hansen. Idongmu, who was buried in the snow, suddenly came out of the pit, stabbing his dagger at the stomach of the Triceratops. The skin of the Triceratops was much thicker than that of the mutant creature. The dagger of Idongmu disappeared in the skin of the Triceratops, yet no blood came out. Only black leather and white fat was cut open. The Triceratops tried to get rid of Idongmu under its stomach. However, Idongmu moved up its body and came to its back like a gecko, stabbing its back fiercely. The Triceratops roared and stamped like crazy, trying to take Idongmu down. However, Idongmu stuck himself so closely to the creature that he would not fall. Hansen found a remote spot and sat down, caressing the head of Meowth, and enjoying his barbecue as well as the performance of Idongmu. Bravo! I will give you 9.9 for this move. When seeing an excellent move, Hansen could not help sharing. Idongmu was so upset. The skin of the Triceratops was so thick and tough that only a little blood came out when he had stabbed the creature multiple times. On the other hand, the Triceratops seemed to have infinite strength. Jumping and wiggling, it almost got rid of Idongmu several times. He had to hold the creature tied with both hands and stick close to it. There was no chance for him to touch the dagger again. However, Hansen was enjoying the show, applauding when seeing something good. Come and help me. Idongmu could not last any longer and yelled to Hansen. That is not okay. We had an agreement. You give me 20% of the meat and all I need to do is to lure the sacred blood creature out. I will not mind other businesses. Hansen shook his head and said, if this creature runs away, you will get nothing, Idongmu exclaimed again. If you want me to make a move, that is fine. However, that way, we could not split the meat like this. I must have 60% of the meat. 20% is my reward for leaving it out, and the other 40% is what I should have for collaborating with you to kill it. Hansen counted his fingers and said, 60% is fine. You help me kill it, and you can take 60% of the meat. Idongmu was in no mood to bargain with Hansen. His main goal was to try to gain the beast's soul. The meat was less important. Okay, that's a deal. Hansen then stood up, summoned his claws and walked toward the Triceratops. Help me to distract it from the side. Seeing Hansen approaching, Idongmu quickly said. However, Hansen did not pay any attention to him. He walked directly to face the Triceratops. The Triceratops noticed Hansen and rushed to him with its eyes red. It almost looks like a locomotive at full speed, incredibly scary. Hansen was still walking toward the Triceratops at a normal speed. The moment it was about to clash with the Triceratops, Hansen's body suddenly leaned back. The Triceratops rushed over Hansen's body. Hansen was lying in the gap between its legs. The Triceratops went ahead but did not hurt Hansen at all. Hansen dusted off the snow on his body and got up. The Triceratops screamed with blood coming out of its stomach. It wiggled and fell to the ground with a thump. It struggled several times but failed to get up again. Idongmu jumped off the back of the Triceratops, observed the struggling creature carefully and saw 3 marks on its stomach that went through its entire body. Obviously, they were left by Hansen when he brushed by the creature. Idongmu stared at Hansen for a long while. He did not expect that the random person he met was such a master. He knew the impressive figures on the ice field, so he did not pay too much attention to Hansen when he first saw Hansen. However, Hansen's strike made Idongmu feel utterly surprised. If you do not move fast, it will die, Hansen noted Idongmu. Normally speaking, under these circumstances, Hansen would abide by the agreement. Since he had agreed to help Idongmu kill the creature and he had 60% of the meat, he did not need to be greedy about the potential beast's soul. Idongmu did not say anything and stabbed his dagger into the jaw of the Triceratops, ending its life with several strikes. Whether Idongmu had gained the beast's soul, however, he did not have any special expression after killing the creature. Walking up to Hansen, he said, "You're good. Just average. I just broke 100, Hansen said casually. I know the locations of some other sacred blood creatures living alone. How about we continue to cooperate in the future?" Idongmu said seriously. That's okay. However, if it were a long-term cooperation, we could not split like this, Hansen smiled and said. We will split the meat half and half. The beast's soul will depend on our own luck. The fact that Idongmu said that showed he reckoned that Hansen was stronger than himself. Otherwise, because he provided the location, he should have taken 10% more. Okay, Hansen agreed. It would take Hansen some time to find sacred blood creatures, and he would not necessarily be able to kill those creatures alone. Dong will provide him with the location of the sacred blood creatures and he could take half of the gains. There was nothing wrong about that. Let's split up the sacred blood meat first. Hansen pointed to the body of the Triceratops and said, "You can have all of it. You have poison on the weapon, so the meat has already been contaminated. Even if I take it, I will not dare to eat it," Dong said calmly. "Thank you then." Hansen summoned the angel, asking her to eat the Triceratops up. Humanoid pet. What is the level of it? Dong stared at the archangel. With his background, he had never got a chance to have a humanoid pet. Sacred blood, Hansen said casually. Dong stared at the angel eating the Triceratops, feeling dazed. It was very hard for him to imagine that the angel who looked like a little girl would be able to consume the better half of the meat of the Triceratops in a little while and did not seem to be stopping anytime soon. He turned back and looked at Hansen, seeing Hansen was eating his leftover barbecue. Dong's expression became more complicated. As the descendant of a senator, he was someone who had seen a lot. However, he had never seen someone like Hansen who fed a humanoid sacred blood pet with all his sacred blood meat since he entered Second God's sanctuary. The resources on the ice field were extremely limited. Although this creature was big in size, it was a sacred blood creature nonetheless. Feeding it all to the pet made even Dongmu cringe. At this point, Dongmu had to reassess Hansen. Strong, wanton, and careless. Even Dongmu felt puzzled about the background of Hansen. It is about time. I must return to the Alliance now. Let's meet next time. After the Archangel finished eating the Triceratops, Hansen directly said goodbye. Although as long as Jai Yanran did not call him, he was idle and had infinite free time. He'd still go back from time to time in case Jai Yanran got worried. I will return to the Alliance as well. Let's go together. Although Dongmu did not need to go back to the Alliance, he wanted to find out about Hansen's background and who he was. The two persons teleported back to the Alliance from Starwheel Shelter. Dongmu immediately looked up all the information about Hansen. The name Hansen being real was out of Dongmu's expectation. After looking up Hansen's materials, Dongmu felt quite strange. Judging from Hansen's background, he was such an ordinary guy that it did not match his achievements at all. From his information, the biggest difference in Hansen's life was his girlfriend Jai Yanran. However, although the Jis were an incredibly prominent family, Hansen only knew Jai Yanran after he went to the military academy. Before that, he did not receive any help from the Jis. Even now, the Jis had not been helping Hansen. Before Jai Yanran married the guy, the Jis had no reason to help him. Whether she would marry Hansen was still unknown. Aside from that, Dongmu felt incredible reading about Hansen's growth. Dongmu thought if he were Hansen, he would never have achieved what Hansen had. In addition, according to the information, Hansen had entered Second God's sanctuary for less than a year. The fact that he had such fitness on the ice field with limited resources made Dongmu feel incredulous. How did he do it? Dongmu couldn't help frowning. Hansen returned to Daphne, trying to meet Jai Yanran. However, at the door, he was blocked by Annie. "We are both guards. Why are you minding my business?" Hansen was very upset with Annie. Since she had come, he did not have much chance to be alone with Jai Yanran. "Because I said no," Annie stayed cold and said, "What if I must go inside?" Hansen was mad, asking Annie coldly. "You can try." Annie looked at Hansen indifferently, as if she were looking at a dead man. Hansen immediately wanted to go inside by force. Just because she was a surpasser, Annie was being incredibly arrogant, which pissed him off. The doors of Jai Yanran's office suddenly opened and Jai Yanran came out from inside. She held Hansen's hand and said to Annie, "Colonel Annie, he is also my guard. He has the right to see me at any time." "I'm sorry, Miss Jai. The order I got was to protect your safety 100%, ruling out all the unsafe elements," Annie said calmly. "Please, Captain. This is in the military," Jai Yanran said, a bit upset. Annie did not speak again, but she looked the same, not taking Jai Yanran's words seriously. Jai Yanran did not say anything more and pulled Hansen into her office. "Do not have any conflict with her in the future. She will kill you," Jai Yanran said helplessly to Hansen. "A guard can be so arrogant, disrespecting your words," Hansen said. "Technically speaking, she is my guard. However, I do not deserve to have a guard like that with my current position. She was arranged by that person in my family. In fact, she only listens to him and my words are basically useless," Jai Yanran said helplessly, leaning against Hansen. "However, she is also doing it for my safety, so do not provoke her in the future." Hansen nodded. He also knew that Jai Yanran's safety depended on Annie. It was impossible for her to count on him as her guard since he was away all the time. When Hansen left Jai Yanran's room, it was already nighttime. Annie was still guarding the door. Judging by her position, it seemed she had not even moved in the past couple of hours. Men like you are a shame to all soldiers. When Hansen just stepped out of the room, he suddenly heard Annie saying coldly, "Are you talking about me?" Hansen turned around, stared at Annie and asked, "The most disgusting are men who live off women like you," Annie said to Hansen, disgusted. Hansen looked Annie up and down for several minutes, but he said nothing. "What are you looking at?" Annie felt uncomfortable under his gaze and exclaimed coldly, with the professional judgment of someone who lives off women, "I can tell you that you do not have what it takes for a man to live off you. You will probably die alone," Hansen said seriously. "You," Annie was shivering in anger, "you think you are so good because you are a surpasser. If I were a surpasser, I could kill you with one strike. Do you believe that?" Hansen curled his lips and said, "I will wait for you to become a surpasser and see how you kill me with one strike." Annie's face became blue. However, she was not someone good at talking. She was so angry that she could say nothing. In fact, there was a reason for Annie to hate Hansen so much. Because her dad died early, she was raised by a single parent. Later on, Annie's mother found a boyfriend, who initially treated both Annie and her mother well. He had nice temper and worked hard. Even Annie as a little girl thought he was a good man and called him father. Who knows that the man was not only a gigolo, but also a fraud. A couple of days before he was about to marry Annie's mother, he took away all their belongings, which made life very hard for Annie and her mother. She grew to loathe this type of man very much. Furthermore, Hansen came to Daphne and became Jai Yanran's guard because of nepotism. Coupled with what Annie had heard at the gist, she hated Hansen very much. "You do not have to wait until the future. If you dare to play with me, I can prove it to you how weak you are if we are of the same status," said Hansen, curling his lips. "What do you want?" Annie thought Hansen wanted her to suppress her strength to fight him. Annie did not mind that. Even if she had to lower her strength, she believed she could beat Hansen completely. "Let's go to the training room," Hansen said and walked toward the training room. "Now is not the time." Annie did not move, but said coldly, "What? Are you afraid?" Hansen looked at her sarcastically. Annie ignored it and said, "Now I still have to work. I will see you at the training room in 3 hours. "Okay, I will wait for you." Hansen appreciated this quality about her very much. She was indeed a good soldier, loyal to her duties. Hansen returned to his room and caught the unicorn beetle which was going around everywhere. Without eating or drinking, it did not starve. Hansen tried to feed it with different things, but it was not interested in any food. Hansen wondered how it kept itself alive. At the agreed time, when Hansen reached the training room, he saw that Annie had changed from uniform to a white combat suit. "Let's begin," she said coldly, seeing Hansen coming in. "What do you want?" Hansen stood outside and did not enter. "Don't you want me to suppress my strength to fight you? Are you afraid now?" Annie said with contempt. "Sister, when have I said that? I am no idiot. Even if you suppress your own strength, your eyesight and reflex are not something that could be reduced. I am not foolish, so why would I ask for that?" Hansen curled his lips. "Then what do you want?" Annie frowned. "We have both learned military boxing, right?" Hansen said. "What if I have?" Annie asked. "If you have learned it, that's easy. Let's do it the civilized way. I name a move and then you can name a move. We will both use the techniques from voter boxing only. Is that fair?" Hansen said. "The way of combat is focused on the reflex and flexibility. If we are talking about the moves, how can we decide who is the winner?" "Moving the lips is no fun," said Annie frowning. "Just tell me if you dare to do it. If you do not dare, you can leave now and stay out of my way in the future," Hansen said contemptuously. "Okay, I will see what tricks you have up your sleeves." Annie did not believe that Hansen would win using the same military boxing. "Lady first, you go." Hansen felt relaxed, as he was fully confident. Talking about the moves, he would definitely win. All other elements were ruled out and only the moves matter. It was like playing Go. Although the pieces were the same, the method to calculate was different. In order to win, the strategy was key, which was what Hansen was good at. Strength, speed, and reflex were less important. Although Annie was surpasser, a civilized fight like this one wiped clean all her advantages. On the other hand, Hansen, who was good at calculation, had an advantage. Head punch. Annie thought about it and said a move of attacking. "Sideway punches, left of your ribs," Hansen answered quickly. "Backward elbow, turning to the left to attack your neck." Annie felt slightly uncomfortable. She had never tried to make the move mentally and had to think for a while before she said anything. The two persons exchanged 30 moves and then Annie felt something was wrong. She found herself trapped in a dangerous situation. Although the moves were all the same, Annie felt it was hard for her to attack. When 14 moves were exchanged, she could no longer think of a way to dodge Hansen's attacks. You lost, Hansen said contentedly. This is just talking. If it were in a real fight, you could never have done that, Annie said, unwilling to accept her failure. That is okay. We can act out what we had just said. However, this time, neither of us shall use force. We will just act out what we had said. Hansen walked up to Annie and said, okay. Annie did not believe that. However, when the two persons were sparring like Hansen had just explained, Annie did not have anywhere to dodge when it came to the 39th move. Unless he used speed and strength beyond Hansen, she would lose for sure. How about that? Are you convinced? Hansen glanced at Annie and said, this is the first time for me to do this, and not like you who is all talk. Annie was not convinced. She did not believe that she would be inferior to Hansen. That's fine. We can do it again. I will beat you until you are convinced. Hansen curled his lips and said, okay, but we will both speak and act out this time. Annie thought she lost to Hansen because she was not good at imagination. Okay, Hansen smiled and said, acting out was not the important part. As long as no strength was involved, then Annie would not still be inferior to him. After all, everyone had a specialty, and Hansen's was calculation. Annie seemed to be the type that were good at violent moves. The fight began again. However, the result was no different from last time. This time, she lost even faster. She could no longer continue after the 35th move. Are you convinced? Hansen asked again. No. Annie bit her lips, unable to accept the fact that she was inferior to Hansen. There was no way she was now the match of a man who lived off a woman. Then let's do it again, Hansen grinned and said. Annie was looking for trouble herself, so he had no reason not to give it to her. Annie was someone stubborn. They fought for more than 30 times and she did not win even once. Lost, and lost. She did not even make it to the 40th move once. Although she did not use strength and her energy was not consumed, she became pale and sweaty on her forehead. She did not understand why she would lose to Hansen again and again using the same moves only with different order, not to mention in such a miserable way. Initially, she thought as long as she was familiar with this way of fighting, she could turn the situation around. All her previous losses were just because she was not used to it. However, the fact was cruel. Whether or not she knew the way of fighting well, she lost equally. Annie found that she was so weak in front of Hansen just based on the moves and martial arts. This man who she despised seemed to be exceptionally good in this regard. Now Annie had understood she was no match to Hansen in this respect. Do we need to continue? Hansen smiled at Annie. It is no wonder that you want because you have studied these trivial matters. However, if it were a real fight, there is no way you could beat me. Annie knew that she had lost, but she would not admit it. Then let's fight for real, Hansen said abruptly. You really dare to fight me? Annie was dazed. She did not believe that Hansen dared to fight her. In terms of real fighting abilities, Hansen was quite weak compared to her. Yes, but hands only. Hansen smiled. Hansen explained himself. What he was talking about was to play red hand. If she were to fight him, Hansen might not even be able to survive 2 or 3 strikes from Annie. Okay, after hearing Hansen's explanation, Annie agreed without hesitation. The fact that she was not able to use her strength just now made her feel quite sullen. Although there were many limitations in terms of playing red hands, she could use her own speed and strength to punish Hansen slightly in order to avenge herself. Annie did not believe that she would still lose to Hansen when she could use her own strength and speed. That could never happen. You made the first move just now, so it is my turn this time, right? Hansen asked Annie. She did not say anything but put her right hand above Hansen's right hand. She did not believe that Hansen could beat her with his speed. Did you know why you lost just now? Hansen asked her suddenly. Why? Slap. Annie was still preoccupied with the fact that she had lost to Hansen. When Hansen mentioned it, she was distracted immediately. When she was about to ask why, Hansen's hand had already hit hers. You are shameless. Annie gritted teeth, wanting to kill Hansen immediately. The game is all about tricks. If they are not allowed, you should say that earlier. Tell me, are tricks allowed? Hansen asked, smiling. As you. Slap. When Annie just said 2 words, she was hit on her hand again. Staring at Hansen with her eyes wide, she almost looked like a tigress that was about to swallow Hansen. Hansen played red hands with Annie from the very beginning. It would be hard for him to hit her even with his sneak attack skills, considering her reflex and speed as a surpasser. However, because Hansen had already broken the piece of her mind earlier, she could no longer treat the game normally, which was why he was able to affect her state of mind and hit her unexpectedly. At this point, Annie's mind had become a mess. She was watching out for Hansen at any moment. However, the more she did that, the easier it was for her to be hit. Slap, slap, slap. Annie stared her eyes wide, watching Hansen as if she had seen a ghost. She was both sullen and angry. There was no way she could understand why she would not be able to dodge Hansen's strikes based on her speed. She hated Hansen's shamelessness and wickedness even more, which distracted her each time so much that she could not focus on dodging his strikes. As the stone was tossed into a well, there was bound to be ripple. The amazing fact about human mind was that sometimes you knew what the right thing to do was, but you could not control your own temper and thoughts. Annie knew that she should calm down and stay away from Hansen's provocation. However, she was so upset at this point that Hansen's smiles made her feel incredibly angry. There was no way she could calm down. Slap, slap, slap. Annie was hit again and again. She could not tolerate Hansen's words. Boom. All of a sudden, electricity boomed on Annie's body, turning her into a burning light bulb. She hit the table with her palm and turned the table into ashes. Hansen looked at Annie, appalled. He was terrified. The strength of a surpasser was so scary that it was beyond imagination. If it were him that Annie attacked, Hansen would probably become ashes as well. Fortunately, it was in the alliance, so there was no way Annie would lay a finger on him no matter how mad she was. Watching Annie was so mad that she was shivering and sparkling. Hansen said with a smile, "You want to hit me because you lost." Staring Hansen for a long while, lights disappeared on Annie's body. Without saying anything, she turned around and left. She was afraid that she might not be able to resist the urge to kill Hansen if she said one more word to him. Asshole, bastard, shameless. Annie did not go back to her room but went to the virtual camp directly. She vented her madness in the virtual camp like crazy. Seeing the alloy table that had turned into ashes, Hansen could not help spitting his tongue. He decided not to provoke that woman killer. If she disregarded anything and hit him, Hansen could not survive a strike from her at all. Surpasser is so scary. They are not human anymore. Although Hansen said that, he looked forward to becoming a surpasser even more. After eating the entire snakefish king, Hansen had gained 9 sacred Geno points, and currently, he had 21 sacred Geno points already. When Hansen was trying to find Idamu to hunt sacred blood creatures together, he failed to find them. Without other sacred blood creatures to hunt, Hansen thought of the crab again. Although the shell of the golden crab was hard, Hansen had practiced the in-force and could penetrate its shell. Maybe he could kill it after all. The key was his strength. If he did not have enough strength, that was fine as well. Hansen decided to dive into the Crystal Palace first, hunt some primitive fish creatures at the bottom of the lake, and fill up his primitive Geno points. Hunting fish creatures at the bottom of the lake was much easier than fishing. Hansen returned to the bottom of the frozen lake again. With the silver eel this time, it was easy for him to come to the Crystal Palace. The golden crab climbed out after hearing the noise. When it saw it was Hansen, it quickly went back to the cabin, disregarding what Hansen was doing outside. It never went out again. Hansen did not provoke the crab but looked at the fish creatures that were swimming at the bottom of the lake. He thought to himself, when I have the Crystal Palace to myself, I will never worry about creature resources because I can go to the deep ocean to hunt. Since the Crystal Palace was indestructible, Hansen was not afraid to encounter scary creatures at the bottom of the sea. He could always hide in the cabin. The most important thing at this moment was to control this Crystal Palace. Otherwise, he could go nowhere. Standing on the deck, Hansen felt like he was in an aquarium. Above his head, all kinds of fish creatures were swimming around. However, because there was no glass, Hansen could reach into the water to touch them. After waiting for a while, when seeing a golden anchovy swimming nearby, Hansen reached out immediately and grabbed it into the shelter. The golden anchovy suddenly fell on the floor. Without water, it had lost almost all its abilities to fight. All he could do was to jump and try to go back to the water. However, Hansen would never give him the opportunity and trampled it to death. Primitive creature golden anchovy killed. Beast soul of golden anchovy gained. Eat its meat to gain 0 to 10 primitive Geno points randomly. For the dozen days, Snow Charmer had hunted a lot of primitive creatures. Since Hansen could not finish all the food himself, he piled the food up, wanting to sell it after he got out. Who knows that the golden crab was so shameless that it came to take some every day, treating Hansen's place as its kitchen. Damn you, crab. I must get straight with you today. Hansen had tolerated its behaviors for days and felt he should be on the same level as the golden crab in terms of fitness. So, he planned to try to kill it, getting the Crystal Palace back. As usual, the golden crab came to Hansen to steal the meat again. When it turned away, Hansen used his claws to hit the crab's shell. The golden crab quickly reacted. It threw away the 2 fish it had taken. Flipping itself around, it shot its pincer at Hansen's claws. Then, the pincer hit the claws and sounded like metal. Hansen stepped back 3 times before he could stabilize himself. The golden crab also fell back. They were about on the same level judging from this round. Seeing that his strength was no weaker than the golden crab, Hansen felt overjoyed and waved his claws again. However, this time, Hansen did not hit the golden crab head-on, but walked around it using kiting skills. Very soon, Hansen found an opportunity to hit the crab hard on its shell. However, the claws only left 3 shallow marks on the golden shell and did not crush it so hard. After fighting for more than half an hour, Hansen made several hits on the golden crab, but only shallow marks were left. The crab was not hurt for real. Hansen took his claws back and decided to use his fists to fight the golden crab. When hitting the golden crab, he secretly used the yin force. However, since the yin force only penetrates 3 to 4 inches, Hansen could not really hurt the crab if he was hitting at the wrong spot. Boom! Hansen found an opportunity to hit the golden crab on its head. Suddenly, he saw the golden crab wobbling as if it were drunk. Hansen was overjoyed, going up to hit its head hard. The golden crab seemed to be dizzy from the hit. Its strikes were no longer organized or forceful. For several punches, Hansen had hit the head of the golden crab repeatedly. The yin force went deep, and the golden crab became even more dizzy. It could no longer stand straight and fell on the floor. Hitting madly on the crab shell with his fists, Hansen sent yin force into its head. Gradually, it stopped moving. Sacred blood creature Golden Pincer King killed. Beast soul of Golden Pincer King gained. Eat its meat to gain 0 to 10 sacred geno points randomly. Hearing the voice at last, Hansen felt overjoyed. He quickly checked the type of the beast soul of the Golden Pincer King. Type of beast soul of sacred blood creature Golden Pincer King. Armor. Hansen summoned the beast soul and golden armor suddenly appeared on his body, covering him up completely. He looked lean and strong, full of power. At first sight, this armor and the black beetle armor were very similar. They were both golden armor that covered the whole body. However, their shapes were slightly different. The helmet of the Pincer King armor was clearly a golden crab. Eventually I have a sacred blood armor again. In the future, I will use the black crystal to turn it into a berserk sacred blood beast soul. At that time, I think not even sacred blood weapons could hurt it. Hansen was very happy. He was used to having sacred blood armor with him. When he came to Second God's Sanctuary, he had always wanted his armor, and this was his dream coming true. Putting the armor on, Hansen climbed on the boat and walked slowly into the cabin. After passing the hall, there were corridors and rooms inside everywhere. He did not encounter any other creature. However, Hansen could not find where the operating room was, so he had to summon Mermaid Princess. Mermaid Princess guided Hansen's way, and they soon reached the operating room, which was on the upper level of the crystal sailboat. Seeing the crystal rudder, Mermaid Princess cheered and grabbed it. The moment she grabbed the crystal rudder, Hansen felt the entire crystal sailboat was vibrating, making squeaking noises. Looking from the crystal window ahead of him, Hansen saw the weather was flowing and the sails rose. The entire sailboat was rising slowly. "My dear master, where do you want to go?" Mermaid Princess looked at Hansen, excited. The 3 sails rose at the same time. The mysterious and gorgeous crystal sailboat slowly rose from the bottom of the lake and floated in the water in a magical way, looking magnificent. Like girl, marched toward the ocean. Hansen was incredibly excited. This crystal sailboat was much better than a submarine. It was an interstellar warship in the water. "Master, do you want to go above the surface?" asked Mermaid Princess. "No, let's march on the bottom." Naturally, Hansen would not let the crystal sailboat to go up to look for trouble. "Yes, master," replied Mermaid Princess and turned the rudder in her hand. The giant crystal sailboat suddenly sailed toward the ocean, following the channel connecting the lake and the ocean. The scenery at the bottom of the sea was indeed incredible. Hansen saw a region of shellfish, which piled up like small mountains for hundreds of miles. All kinds of corals were colorful and glamorous. Clusters of fish were playing games and millions in the ocean. Giant monsters that looked like dragons were passing by, making one's heart tremble. Luckily, the Crystal Palace was indestructible. Otherwise, if it were hit by the horrendous beast, it would be ruined before long. Boom boom. A dual-headed turtle that looked like a hill hit the Crystal Palace several times before it went away slowly. The number of the creatures inside the ocean was beyond Hansen's imagination. However, he did not know what the status of those creatures was. He could not hunt as he wished for that reason. In addition, Hansen wanted to check out first what the ocean had to offer. All kinds of sea creatures that he had never seen before were swimming. From afar, he seemed to see a red river flowing on the bottom of the sea. However, when he approached it, he found it was formulated by numerous red-shelled prawns, each as thick as a motorcycle. The creatures in the ocean were much more than the land. They were beyond Hansen's imagination. Many of them Hansen has never heard of before. Humans did not have the ability to hunt creatures in the ocean yet. This might be the first time for humans to hunt creatures in deep sea. However, because most of the sea creatures were huge in size, Hansen did not rush to hunt. He mainly came to check out the resources nearby first. After traveling for a few more days and eating many sea creatures, Hansen had gained a dozen mutant geno points, making his mutant geno points as many as 33. This day, he saw from afar that in the deep ocean, there was a huge city that looks like a gigantic beast crawling on the bottom of the sea, an underwater shelter. Hansen glanced at it from afar and commanded the Crystal Palace to turn around, not daring to approach the shelter. Judging by the size of the shelter, it was at least a royal shelter. Hansen was alone at this point and he was under the water as well. There was no way he could conquer the royal shelter, because the royal shelter had blocked the way of the Crystal Palace. Hansen could only try to sail to the side. However, the water became more and more shallow and it eventually reached the shore. Hansen glanced at the shore from afar and found many humans, out of his expectation. There was a castle next to the shore, which should be a human shelter, to Hansen's joy. The ice field was surrounded by ocean and blocked from other places by the royal shelter. There was no way for the ice field to contact the outside. However, now Hansen could drive the Crystal Palace and come out from the bottom of the sea. This was a great business route. If he used it well, it was easy to make money. Parking the Crystal Palace at the bottom of the sea, Hansen rode the silver eel to go out. He swam to the shore and planned to ask where he was at. However, when he approached the shore, he found it was different from he had imagined. The reason for there to be so many people was that they were trying to conquer the shelter on the shore. In front of the shelter, there were many creatures that looked like porcupines, covered in spikes, which could be shot like arrows. The humans charged several times but failed to break into the rain of spikes. Many people ended up getting hurt. In front of the group of porcupines, a giant 9 feet tall covered in black iron armor ran into the army of humans on a huge boar, holding a tower shield in one hand and a double axe in the other. There was no one among the humans who could do anything to him. A human evolver who looked quite fit and should have a fitness over 100 was slashing a long broadsword at the giant. However, all the strikes were blocked by the tower shield of the giant warrior, who was not hurt. With the rampage of the huge boar, no one could stop the double axe in the giant's hand. Hansen took a look at it and felt surprised. This seemed to be an aristocrat shelter, so the giant warrior should be an aristocrat spirit. The injuries were heavy in human army. As they were hesitating whether they should retreat, they suddenly saw a golden figure rushing toward the spirit shelter at an incredible speed. The group of porcupines bristled and shot spikes at the golden figure. A rain of spikes was flying toward him. Many people were nervous as they watched. They had suffered a lot from the spikes and knew how good they were. Even mutant armor could not fully block their penetration. There were at least 1,000 spikes shooting at the golden figure. The man will very likely be killed in the end. However, the golden figure did not stop at all and rushed into the spikes. The spikes hit him like a storm, making noises continuously. All the spikes that touched the golden figure were flicked away or broken. Yet the golden figure was not hurt at all. He was still charging toward the spirit shelter at a high speed. Round after round of spikes did not affect the golden figure at all. The golden figure soon went into the porcupines. As he moved, he killed several porcupines already. The porcupines guarding the shelter suddenly became a mess, while the golden figure had rushed into the spirit shelter. Everything happened so fast. When the golden figure disappeared in the shelter, the army of humans then realized what had happened. As the porcupines were disorganized, humans started to charge with all they got. The spirit warrior riding the boar chased after him like crazy, but it was too late. When the spirit warrior came to the hall, the golden figure had already walked out of the hall, with a glowing gem in his hand. Thump! When the spirit warrior came to the golden figure, he did not launch a suicidal attack toward the man as people expected. Surprisingly, it kneeled in front of the golden figure. Mad Shield is willing to give his master the purest soul, follow his master all his life, and never betray his master. Everyone felt astonished, seeing this incredible scene. It was so rare that a spirit would offer his allegiance. In addition, one should beat the spirit before the spirit offered his allegiance. However, the golden figure did not even fight the spirit warrior, yet the spirit gave his allegiance already. The chance that this would happen was probably less than 1 out of 10,000. Seeing the golden figure placing the spirit stone on the forehead of the spirit, people were almost blinded by the strong light of the stone. Then, both the spirit and spirit stone disappeared. Obviously, they had been taken back by their master. After the spirit was gone, the creatures in the shelter became a mess. The giant boar, which was the spirit's mount, roared and charged the golden figure. However, the golden figure did not try to dodge at all. The moment when the giant boar had come to his face, his fists covered in golden armor hit the boar, facing the giant creature that were rushing over like armored vehicles. The golden figure simply took back his fist casually, while the giant boar suddenly had blood coming out of all the holes on its body, dying at the feet of the golden figure. Strong? He's too strong. Everybody gasped. Just now, when they were fighting outside, the humans had seen how strong the giant mount was. Even evolvers with a fitness index more than 100 could not face it head-on. However, the creature was killed by the golden figure with one strike. Dollar, he must be Dollar. Dollar is among us, someone suddenly exclaimed, making people having a chill. Yes, the golden armor, the invincible attitude. Who else could it be other than Dollar? Damn it, it turns out Dollar is here. Dollar is simply invincible, even in Second God's Sanctuary. Dollar, I love you. With Dollar here, we will never be afraid of the creatures. That punch is so badass. Hansen did not stay at all. After killing the boar, he jumped to the top of the palace and quickly left the shelter. He was basically stealing other people's spirit and felt too ashamed to stay. In terms of defense, Mad Shield was definitely the equivalence of a sacred blood creature, if it were not for the fact that the ghost pod claws were berserk. Ordinary sacred blood weapons would be even less threatening to him. Unfortunately, he is not a pretty woman's spirit. Hansen felt ashamed. Initially, he wanted to form a gang full of pretty spirits. However, spirits were so rare that he might as well recruit some male spirits first. In the future, the Crystal Palace needed a lot of help on board in order to gain a huge amount of sea creatures. However, Hansen did not want to recruit too many humans, but preferred his own spirits. As he was thinking how he should make use of his current resources, he suddenly heard a crack in his Sea of Soul, which made Hansen feel happy. He looked to his Sea of Soul and saw the light cocoon of the golden growler had broken. The golden growler that was all golden and shiny came out of the cocoon. It seemed that its body had turned into gold completely, like a gold statue, looking much stronger. Berserk Super Creature Golden Growler Mount. The Berserk Golden Growler had enhanced greatly in both speed and strength. It could even be compared to the Sacred Blood mounts in Second God's Sanctuary. In addition, its ability to change size was something that an ordinary Sacred Blood mount did not have. As he fed the black crystal to his beast souls, Hansen ordered Mermaid Princess to take the Crystal Palace to the ice field. Because the resources were rich near Yellowstone Sea, beast souls were relatively cheap in that area. If he wanted to sell his beast souls, he should go back to Goddess Shelter to get a good price. His journey was quite smooth. The Goddess Shelter was surrounded by the ocean in 3 directions. Therefore, it was easy to get to the sea near the shelter. He did not encounter other shelters under the water, and he saved himself the trouble of traveling through the mountainous region. On his way back, Hansen hunted a large number of primitive creatures and some mutant creatures he found in the water, put them on the back of the golden growler, and returned to Goddess Shelter. When people in the shelter saw the golden growler and mountain of meat, they were all surprised. There were less and less creatures that they could hunt nearby, so they had never imagined a scene like this. Hearing the news, young Manly also came by. Seeing the huge pile of creatures, she was also dazed. Manly, count the meat and you can decide how to sell them. Hansen then transferred all the primitive beast souls and mutant beast souls he had gained to young Manly, asking her to sell them all. Young Manly saw the dozens of beast souls that Hansen transferred to her, many of which were not only mutant, but also berserk, which made her feel quite incredulous. Where did you get the meat and beast souls? Young Manly looked at Hansen with a complicated expression. I hunted them from the sea. Hansen knew that the creatures looked like they were from the ocean and there was no way he could hide it. The sea. Young Manly became even more surprised. It was much harder to hunt in the sea than on the land. I'm such a guy that could kill the tiger on the mountain and dragon in the sea. Isn't it absolutely normal for me to be able to hunt in the ocean? No need to look at me like that. Hansen smiled and said. Young Manly did not want to smile. Although Hansen was joking, she understood that the difficulty of the task was no joke. How did he achieve that? Young Manly felt it was more and more difficult for her to understand Hansen. When she was in First God's Sanctuary, she felt Hansen was inferior to Dollar. However, after they met in Second God's Sanctuary, what Hansen did astonished her every time. At this moment, young Manly no longer had the thought she first had. She only felt it was more and more difficult for her to know Hansen. She did not know what kind of guy he was. Hansen, aren't you interested in the ancient language? An expert in that area has come recently. If you're interested, you could go see him. Hearing Jai Yanran's words, Hansen was immediately excited. He quickly asked, which ancient language expert? Why would we have one here? Jai Ganran smiled and said, Professor Zhu is very talented in linguistics. Also, he is quite a celebrity in the Alliance. Besides ancient language, he has studied a lot of languages from other species. If he is famous, will he ignore me if I just go see him? Asked Hansen. I don't think so. The management asked him to come over to teach us some knowledge about crystallizers. You could go and have a look first. Hansen was naturally very interested in the ancient language. He now could read everything in Dongchuan Sutra, but it did not mean he could understand them. Hansen still did not understand many parts, and he did not want to practice the martial arts before he understood what was going on. When it was time for the lecture of Professor Zhu, Hansen went to attend. The language of crystallizer was too complicated. In other words, they were not even words, but more like images. All sorts of complicated lines were put together to make an image that looked like the inner structure of a machine. It was indeed very difficult to learn the meaning. Even with Hansen's brain, which had been strengthened, he felt it was difficult to memorize those images. The other soldiers felt even more painful. When they went to the lecture, they felt like they were not understanding anything. Although it was very difficult to learn, Hansen was still paying attention to the lecture and tried to memorize. After Professor Zhu's lecture, Hansen quickly walked to the professor and saluted to him. Professor Zhu, I have a question regarding other languages that I want to ask you. I wonder if you have the time. Professor Zhu was a general in terms of military ranks, which was much higher than Hansen's. However, Professor Zhu did not have any power. Is it about the crystallizers? Tell me about it. Professor Zhu was quite easygoing. I want to ask you something about the ancient language of the Alliance, Hansen said. Professor Zhu looked Hansen up and down in surprise and asked, You have studied the ancient language. Currently, although the Alliance did not put less emphasis on liberal arts, many young people were more willing to spend time on practicing hypergeno arts. After all, that would bring them direct benefits. Professor Zhu did not know whether Hansen had really learned the ancient language or he was just trying to kiss the professor's ass. I have studied a little bit. However, I have many confusions and there are not enough materials for me to clear them, said Hansen. All right, it is about lunchtime. Let's work together and we can chat in the cafeteria. Professor Zhu was not arrogant at all. If Hansen was indeed interested in the ancient language, Professor Zhu would like to answer his questions. After chatting with Professor Zhu for a long while, Hansen felt he was inspired. The materials he got from Professor Zhu were also a great help to him. For the things that he couldn't understand before, he had managed to perceive them after reading Professor Zhu's materials. After that, when he read Dongchuan Sutra again, he had many new understandings. Although there were still places that he did not understand, he had a more profound grasp of the text. If he could practice well, he could make his force to penetrate a large object. It was a bit exaggerating to say he could hit the bull behind the mountain, but it would not be difficult for him to penetrate through a steel plate of several feet thick. When he had rested for more than 10 days, eating golden crab every day in the shelter, he had eventually finished eating the crab and gained 7 sacred geno points. Currently, Hansen had 28 sacred geno points. Hansen, super body, king spirit, status, evolver, lifespan, 300, requirement for next evolution, 100 geno points. Geno points owned, ordinary geno points 100, primitive geno points 100, mutant geno points 43, sacred geno points 28. Checking his progress, Hansen felt the number was quite good for someone who had entered Second God's Sanctuary for less than a year. Currently, Hansen's fitness index had definitely passed 120. It took a test for him to find out the exact number. Anyway, he was much stronger than Tiger of Blue Blood in the past now. I will go kill the Berserk Gargoyle first. Hansen entered God's Sanctuary again, making up his mind to go to the nest. Sacred blood beast souls were still very attractive in Hansen's eyes. In addition, the beast souls from the eggs were normally very good and of rare types. When Hansen was at the nest again, he summoned all his beast souls. For the time he spent in the Alliance, the Golden Pincer King had already been evolved into a Berserk Sacred Blood Beast soul, and the golden armor looked even better at this point. The gargoyle glyph had also been summoned. The desert bird was hovering over his head, enhancing all the beast souls further. Hansen felt he had enough strength to blow up a planet. Of course, that was only an illusion. The silver berserk gargoyle quickly rushed toward him. Hansen did not dodge this time, blocking the gargoyle's arm with his ghost pod claws. Bang! The claws in the arm of the gargoyle suddenly clashed, leaving a new long injury on the gargoyle's arm. Silver blood suddenly started to flow. Hansen stepped half a step back. His strength was no weaker than this berserk creature. The gargoyle roared fiercely, trying to grab Hansen with its claws, its nails looking like silver daggers. Hansen was not weaker than it in terms of either strength or speed. In addition, his footwork was much better than the creature's, so there was no way Hansen would let it grab him. As he swayed, not only had he dodged the attacks, but he had also managed to leave scratches on the gargoyle, making it bleed. The gargoyle roared angrily, but it could do nothing to Hansen. It could not even touch Hansen's body because Hansen's kiting skills were so good. As Hansen was feeling content, the gargoyle suddenly scratched at him. Just when he dodged the attack, the arms of the gargoyle suddenly gained 2 inches and still clawed at him. The 10 nails looking like silver daggers suddenly hit Hansen's armor. Then, the sound of metal made people's ear hurt. However, the nails that looked like daggers did not manage to penetrate the armor, but only left some shallow marks on it. Hansen was more than surprised. Berserk golden armor and berserk gargoyle glyph combined, the defense was incredibly strong. Even the berserk gargoyle did not manage to hurt him. This strike gave Hansen more confidence. He took back the ghost pod claws and hit the gargoyle with his fists. Boom boom. His fists were thrown, and legs were dancing. His fists hit gargoyle, making it step back continuously. The gargoyle was overpowered by Hansen and killed by Hansen in the end using the yin force. Berserk sacred blood creature Inferno gargoyle killed. No beast soul gained. Meat inedible. Hansen was dazed. It was the first time he encountered such a result. There was no beast soul or meat. Luckily, Hansen did not mind. There was an egg, which 100% would produce a sacred blood beast soul. In his hand, it was the same as a berserk sacred blood beast soul. What sacred blood beast soul should it be? I would prefer a pair of wings, or a beast soul add-on like the devil sword. Hansen climbed up the cells carefully, looking inside. There were many cells at this place. However, as he went deeper, he did not see any other creatures. It seemed that the gargoyle was the only creature there. Is there not an egg? Hansen became a bit worried. Luckily, very soon he saw the egg, making him feel relieved. Walking up to the egg, Hansen broke it with the claws and heard the familiar voice, producing beast soul. Hansen saw a piece of fog coming out of the egg, which gradually became a beast soul in front of him. The beast soul looked like it was made of tungsten. It looked like a tiger or a panther, with a horn looking like a lightning bolt. The creature had wings on its back. As it blinked, it looked incredibly fierce. The beast soul turned into a light, entering Hansen's sea of soul. He suddenly heard a voice. Beast soul produced. Sacred blood beast soul nightmare gained. Hansen quickly looked at the information of nightmare and saw it was a flying beast soul. He summoned nightmare and suddenly had a huge pair of tungsten devil wings on his back, looking rather cool. Hansen tried its speed and found it was much faster than the sacred blood wings from First God's Sanctuary indeed. He almost reached the exit of the nest immediately. Haha, I can fly again eventually. Hansen was overjoyed. With the ability to fly, it would be easier for him to do a lot of things. The sacred blood wings should be fast enough in Second God's Sanctuary. Without hesitation, Hansen fed the black crystal to Nightmare. Berserk sacred blood wings should be the fastest humans had ever seen in Second God's Sanctuary. With nightmare wings, unless he had encountered a super creature, Hansen could be the king of Second God's Sanctuary. It will be even better if I have sacred blood bow and arrow. Then, I could go back to the top and look down on the entire Second God's Sanctuary. Hansen felt it was a pity that the sacred blood bow and arrow beast souls were hard to find. He came to the Starwheel shelter again. Hansen, I eventually found you. I have made an agreement with Black God and Philip. We will attack the royal shelter in a couple of days. Come and help me, will you? Wise England said excitedly. I am afraid I have to let you down. I am the enemy of Black God, so it should be inconvenient for me to go with you. Hansen smiled and said, You are the one who injured Black God and stole the Snakefish King. Wise England suddenly remembered, looking at Hansen in surprise. It is no other than me. I don't think we should go together. When you started the fight, I will join you at that time, Hansen said. That'll do. However, you must stay careful. At that time, all the advanced fighters in Black God's shelter would be there. If Black God did anything to harm you, it would be hard for you to escape. I am in charge of attacking from the west. You could go to my side. Wise England pondered and said, Who is the one in charge of attacking the main gate? Hansen asked. Black God is the strongest, so he's doing that. After Hansen asked about a few more details, he got up to leave. However, he had made up his mind to go to the main gate where Black God would be. The three forces launched a united strike against the royal shelter after 2 days. Black God's shelter was in charge of attacking the main gate of the royal shelter. From afar, Hansen saw groups of creatures rushing out of the royal shelter, fighting against human evolvers. Black God took a dozen evolvers who had a fitness level above 100, trying to go inside the shelter. However, they were soon stopped by sacred blood creatures. In the other two directions, humans were also stopped by creatures. Fighting could be heard everywhere, while the silver-haired spirit girl was standing on top of the wall of the shelter, looking at everything coldly, not planning to move a finger. Hansen eventually witnessed a large-scale fight. Hansen could not see clearly what was going on with Lai Zinglan and Philip. However, against the dozen evolvers with a fitness level above 100, nearly 20 sacred blood creatures had rushed out of the royal shelter, blocking the attacks from Black God's shelter completely. This was obviously not everything the royal shelter had got. There were definitely more sacred blood creatures inside the shelter, fighting against enemies from the other two directions. This royal shelter was incredibly strong. One man could never take down a large royal shelter like this one. Hansen felt quite impressed. Without uniting the forces on the ice field, an individual could never conquer shelter like this unless he had the strength of a super creature. Giant snakes as long as 300 feet. Huge beasts that looks like titans, black winged beasts, and birds flying in the sky. The whole battlefield was a mess. The scene was 100 times more impressive than a movie. It was equally magnificent as an interstellar war. Black God was better at commanding than Hansen thought. In addition, the majority of the evolvers had been through service, so they were no strangers to fighting together. When they were besieging creatures, they collaborated well. In fact, the casualties were not huge. In addition, some more weaker evolvers would be in charge of logistics. Once someone was hurt, he would be sent out of the battlefield immediately. Not a lot of people died. This Black God is quite impressive. He is able to command such a large-scale war. Quite talented, Hansen thought to himself. However, an enemy was an enemy no matter how good he was. Although the royal spirit was strong, it started to fall. It seemed that it could not withstand the attacks from all three forces for a long time. However, the silver-haired spirit did not plan to attack. She was watching the entire battlefield coldly on top of the wall, moving her staff once in a while, commanding the creatures to fight. If this continues, the shelter will be conquered if the silver-haired spirit did not have other creatures to help her, Hansen thought to himself. As Hansen was thinking, he saw the silver-haired spirit living the war. However, he did not join the battlefield, but went back to the shelter. Hansen was surprised by her move. Currently, the fight had gone into a very fierce stage. The army of the creatures were at a disadvantage. If they lost her command, wouldn't they lose even sooner? When Hansen was feeling puzzled, he suddenly saw the earth started to shake on the battlefield in front of the shelter. Many stones were broken, and silver beetles started to come out like waves. Where the silver beetles passed, the bodies of both humans and creatures were eaten up completely, making one's scalp prickle. More and more gaps started to appear on the land, and numerous silver beetles came out. All of a sudden, the entire battlefield was a mess. Both humans and creatures were rushing to run for their lives. No one had any intention to continue the fight. Humans and creatures that were fighting against each other a minute ago started to escape together. It was hard to imagine that they were fighting for life and death just now. Even the huge snake and the giant beast were running as fast as they could. It seemed that they were very scared of the silver beetles. Hansen was also rather scared. However, after careful observation, he found that the individual of the silver beetles was not that strong. They were slightly stronger than primitive creatures, but weaker than mutant creatures. However, there were so many of them and their mouths were really sharp. Even sacred blood creatures had their weaknesses, so it was painful for them to have a silver beetle inside their body. However, Hansen felt his opportunity had come. The strength of the silver beetles was only their number and sharp mouths. In fact, their strength was not too impressive. However, wearing the golden armor and gargoyle glyph, Hansen could completely block out the silver beetles. In addition, he was covered all over, so there was no gap where the silver beetles could approach him. Although the silver beetles chased humans away, the creatures were also chased away. Taking advantage of the mess, he could enter the royal spirit and maybe there was a chance for him to get the spirit stone. Hansen summoned his armor and glyph, sneaking into the shelter in the mess. Just when he approached the battlefield, waves of silver beetles had come to him, drowning Hansen with their little bodies. Hansen felt the crackling outside his armor as the silver beetle was trying to bite his armor. However, because of the double berserk sacred blood beast souls, even their sharp mouths could not hurt the armor at all. Hansen felt reassured and marched toward the royal spirit in the sea of beetles. Under the cover of the silver beetles, no one was able to notice him. Outside the royal spirit, Hansen jumped over the wall and entered the royal spirit that looked like a cosmopolitan. The The majority of the creatures had been scared away by the silver beetles. There were obviously less creatures in the royal shelter, but their number was still astonishing. There were no silver beetles inside the shelter, but a lot of creatures rushed to Hansen. Hansen did not linger but spread his nightmare wings, dodging the majority of the creatures and went toward the spirit girl. The weird birds and black-winged beasts in the sky came toward Hansen. Hansen flapped his wings and dodged the block of the beasts and birds like a butterfly, thanks to the speed of the berserk sacred blood wings. He quickly reached where the spirit girl was standing. The spirit girl had already come to a large ancient architecture. Feeling the turmoil in the sky, she looked back standing on the stairs, seeing Hansen who was in the sky. Her silver pupils contracted. Even he was covered in armor. The silver-haired girl still recognized Hansen who had once killed her. She was not depending on her eyesight, but her scent that she left on Hansen's body when he killed her. Her face turned cold. The silver-haired girl waved her staff and the birds and beasts rushed to Hansen. A dual-headed silver bird and a black bull with wings also rushed to him. Hansen did not mind ordinary birds and beasts, because they were much slower and weaker than Hansen. Hansen could kill them as he wanted. However, the silver bird and flying bull were obviously both sacred blood creatures. They blocked Hansen's way among other creatures. After doing that, the silver-haired spirit girl did not mind Hansen anymore and continued to go inside the mysterious architecture. After the spirit girl went inside the architecture, two identical black snakes were climbing on the columns at the gate, flicking out their tongues. Hansen had seen one of the black snake before. As time when the spirits were attacking the Starwheel shelter, she brought that black snake, which was also a sacred blood creature. How come there are so many sacred blood creatures in this royal shelter? Hansen frowned. Not all the royal shelters had a large number of sacred blood creatures. The number of sacred blood creatures in a royal shelter depended on the size of the shelter, the number of sacred blood creatures nearby, and the spirit's ability. In terms of both size and number of sacred blood creatures, this royal shelter was exceptional, which showed how strong the silver-haired girl was. To go back or forward was an impending decision that Hansen must make. There were so many creatures here that Hansen could not be trapped. Once he was trapped, he could never escape again. In just 1 second, Hansen had decided. He had already entered the shelter, so it was the perfect opportunity, and he had no reason to go out. If the three forces could not take down this royal shelter when they united, since most sacred blood creatures were not even inside the shelter at this point, he would never have an opportunity to try again if he missed this opportunity. With his eyes cold, Hansen was calculating all the moves and trajectories of the creatures he was seeing. In his mind there was a holographic image and a route that would take him inside the ancient architecture. Boom! Flapping his wings, Hansen made a dive, avoiding the silver bird and flying bull. However, because he went slower, many creatures on the floor started to jump at him, throwing themselves at Hansen who was flying low. Remaining calm, Hansen landed on an architecture. When he flew, he avoided the snaps of the creatures on the land and flew up again. In the sky, the dual-headed silver bird and other creatures rushed over again. Hansen landed again, changing his position continuously and dodging the attacks from different creatures, going toward the ancient and mysterious architecture like crazy. There was no way to block him. Hansen moved quickly among the architectures, flying up from time to time. He perfectly used the space between the architectures and the creatures themselves, going to the ancient architecture at last. The creatures were always a bit too late, not formulating any threat to Hansen. That included the two sacred blood creatures, because they never stopped Hansen. However, because he was using the terrain and the creatures, Hansen did not go straight but made a huge circle in order to arrive at the ancient architecture. The two black snakes had come down from the giant columns, blocking the closed stone gate. They opened their mouths and issued screams at Hansen, bearing their frightening fans, looking rather scary. Hansen did not pause and went up the stairs, rushing at the two black snakes. Behind him were all kinds of fierce creatures, looking like ghosts from hell. They followed Hansen and tried to take him down. The mouth of the two black snakes looked like the dark gates toward hell. Their fangs were each longer than 3 feet, dripping disgusting venom, blocking Hansen's way. Hansen no longer saw a way out. There were only the two snakes. However, he did not mean to stop at all, but speed it up. With her heart thumping like a drum and blood boiling, every inch of his muscles was motivated. Stepping out, Hansen almost immediately rushed inside the mouth of one of the black snakes. Crack! The black snake quickly closed its mouth, trying to swallow Hansen like that. However, blood suddenly spilled, and its snakeskin was ripped from inside. Blood and the golden figure both came out. The 3 purple lightning bolts shone. Boom! Hansen rushed out of the stomach of the snake and hit the giant stone gate of the ancient building, smashing one of the doors and going inside without hesitation. The inside of the ancient architecture looked like a temple, full of mysterious symbols and statues of deities. Inside the temple, a statue of ghost more than 100 feet tall stood like a demon. Between the brows of the ghost there was a silver gem about the size of a fist, which should be the spirit stone of the silver-haired girl. Under the statue, the silver-haired girl had changed into her fighting state. Her perfect body covered in silver armor, she looked lean and delicate with a perfect curve. Holding the silver slim sword, the girl had cold light in her eyes, staring at Hansen. Hansen quickly rushed toward the girl. Initially, he thought the sacred blood creatures would chase him inside, but they were all guarding outside the architecture, and none entered the gate. Hansen was overjoyed. Just coping with the silver-haired spirit girl was much easier for him. In addition, he had killed her once. Even if he could not kill her this time, it would be easy for him to get the spirit stone. Seeing Hansen was approaching the statue, the silver-haired girl exclaimed coldly and slashed her silver sword at Hansen's throat. Hansen was astonished. Last time, he deliberately took the strike that went through his body, so it did not matter how fast her sword was, since Hansen did not want to dodge at all. However, as she cut his throat this time, he would be beheaded if he did not dodge, which could never happen. Fighting the silver-haired girl face to face, Hansen felt how fast her sword was. Stepping back, Hansen raised the ghost-pawed claws to block her strike and managed to save himself. Then, the silver sword and the ghost-pawed claws clashed, making noise of metal. Feeling a huge force, Hansen could not help stepping back. Her strength was even a bit stronger than his. After the strike, the silver-haired girl did not stop her attacks. Like silver lightning bolts, she continued to hit Hansen with her sword, forcing him to defend himself with no chance to fight back. After taking a dozen strikes, Hansen felt the sword was so fast and unpredictable that he could only go back and could not even leave. Same as her sword, the girl had incredibly fast footwork as well. She followed Hansen like a shadow, not giving him any chance to breathe. Ding ding ding. Although Hansen had blocked all the strikes from the girl, his berserk ghost-pawed claws were chipped by the slim sword of hers. Hansen's arm was also numb. Until this moment had Hansen realized how lucky he was to kill the silver-haired girl last time. If he did not surprise her by taking this sword with his body and take advantage of her carelessness, he would never have had any chance. After all, Hansen had much worse fitness at that time. He was at a disadvantage facing the silver-haired girl this time still, which meant he would have suffered even more last time if it were not for his scheme. It seemed that the silver-haired girl hated Hansen to his guts. She did not conserve any energy, forcing Hansen to step back with her sword. Changing his footwork and using kiting skills, Hansen was not the match of the silver-haired girl because he did not know any advanced claws skills. He was merely using the claws at a knife with blade storm. If it were not for the good footwork that Hansen had, he would have been killed by her a long time ago. Even with his footwork, Hansen was still hit so hard that he could not fight back. The sword skills of the silver-haired girl were excellent. She almost became one with her sword, crossing the sky like a lightning bolt. She was so fast that her figure became a blur. As the sword was about to reach Hansen's face, Hansen did not have his claws in place in time, so he could no longer block his strike. That's it. Hansen gritted his teeth and summoned Mad Shield, putting him in front of Hansen to bear the strike from the silver-haired girl. Hansen quickly rushed to the giant statue and went for the spirit stone, no longer lingering. Then, Hansen heard steel being ripped apart. The tower shield of Mad Shield was cut deeply by the silver-haired girl, almost breaking in half. Hansen wanted to take back Mad Shield, but the sword of the girl was too fast indeed. Before he took Mad Shield back, another flash flew across. Crack. This time, the tower shield was cut in half for real. The slim sword cut to the tall figure of Mad Shield like a lightning bolt. With a flash, there was a line added to the body of Mad Shield. Boom. The body of Mad Shield fell into two halves. The spirit was killed like that, not having any time to regret the loss of the aristocrat spirit that he had gained not long ago. Hansen ran toward the statue at full speed. Treading cloud, Hansen had eventually put the footwork into use. Running like wind, Hansen rushed to the statue like a tornado. However, the silver-haired girl was not slower than him at all, but even faster. Catching up with him momentarily, she stepped her sword at Hansen's back. Without turning back, a golden worm covered in red armor appeared behind Hansen, blocking the girl's sword, while Hansen jumped up and spread the nightmare wings, throwing himself at the sparkling spirit stone between the statue's brows. Ding ding ding. The 3 strikes cut the golden rock Worm King consecutively, and the red armor was cut deeply. Even the shell of the Worm King was broken. Golden blood started to flow. Luckily, the pet armor that had become a berserk super beast soul was much harder than the tower shield, so the golden rock Worm King was not killed after taking 3 strikes. Hansen took back the golden rock Worm King. The spirit stone was right in front of him. Even if the silver-haired girl came at this moment, there was no time for her to stop him from taking the stone. However, when Hansen's fingers were about to touch the spirit stone, he suddenly felt a strong anxiety. His back was covered in cold sweat. Something's wrong. As Hansen felt that, he saw a golden figure coming from behind the giant head of the statue. At the same time, a gold sword went to Hansen's chest. That sword was so fast and Hansen was so close that there was no time for him to dodge. Whoosh! The golden sword pierced the golden armor into his chest. Hansen then saw the person who stabbed him. It was a girl with wavy blonde hair and golden eyes covered in golden armor, holding a golden slim sword. Except for the fact that everything was golden on her body, the girl looked almost identical to the silver-haired girl. They were almost like 2 dolls made from the same mold, only with different colors of their armor and hair. Boom! The blonde girl kicked Hansen down to the floor. Hansen fell hard and saw that on the back of the statue there was another face. The statue was two-faced, and between the eyebrows of the face and the back, there was another spirit stone, which was golden and shiny. Twin spirits. Hansen eventually understood why the silver-haired girl would be so relaxed to fight Hansen alone, not asking the creatures to hit him, because that was unnecessary. The spirit shelter was in fact a rare double spirit shelter. In addition to the silver-haired girl, there was a similarly good blonde girl. Hansen could not even get rid of the silver-haired girl, let alone 2 girls. Without any hesitation, the moment when Hansen fell to the ground, he got up and brushed toward the outside. Motivating his body and cracking his bones, Hansen pushed his potentials to his limit. The silver-haired girl and blonde girl did not mean to let him go. The 2 beautiful but deadly figures rushed toward Hansen like to lightning bolts. Blood spilled like rain. Hansen had used the kiting skills to his limit. However, all he could do was to avoid his vital parts. The silver and golden slim sword continued to leave one injury after another on his body. The sword skills of the blonde girl and silver-haired girl were compatible. They complement each other and were much stronger when used alone. Hansen did not even want to fight anymore. He had miscalculated from the very beginning, so he did not have a chance to win again. All he could do was to go out as fast as he could in order to survive. With blood covering his body, Hansen was extremely lucid. His eyes cold, he quickly calculated every possibly as fast as he could. Hansen only had one goal. Under the attack of both royal spirits, he did not any chance to get the spirit stone again. Every step he made was traded with his injury. Every step was carefully designed, but it could not save him from being hurt. At this point, Hansen had no other ways than trading injuries for his life. When he reached at the stone gate, he was covered in a lot of blood already. At this point, Hansen could only celebrate the fact that he had both the armor and the glyph. Otherwise, even if he had practiced Jade Skin, he would have died a million times. The effect of the armor and glyph blocked the majority of the force on the swords of the girls. When the swords hit him, the remaining force was less than 30%, only leaving shallow marks on him. The flying bull fiercely threw itself at Hansen, charging Hansen with its horns. However, the next second, a huge golden creature fell from the sky, smashing all the creatures nearby. Rush out. Hansen threw himself onto the back of the golden growler, which was the size of a hill, and roared, grabbing his hair. The golden growler roared and ran into the group of creatures like crazy, getting rid of the creatures and marching toward the main gate. As a supermount, the golden growler was no weaker than a sacred blood mount of second god's sanctuary after becoming berserk. In addition, its giant body was extremely fast. Every step it made was more than 300 feet. Even with the speed of the silver-haired girl, she could not catch up with it. In addition, most creatures were like ants in front of the golden growler, unable to block its way. Even so, numerous creatures still threw themselves at the mount, biting at it and making it bleed. As the golden blood was spilled, the golden growler rolled in pain. As Hansen killed the creatures that threw themselves at him, birds and flying beasts were charging him from the sky. With blood and dead bodies of creatures everywhere, it was incredibly violent. Boom! Hansen was hit hard on his head. It was the beak of the 2-headed silver bird. Although Hansen's helmet was not broken, it was so painful that Hansen screamed and almost fell from the golden growler. The golden growler had God knows how many creatures on its body. Bleeding everywhere, golden growler was still the king of first god's sanctuary. With a roar, it fiercely jumped up into the sky like a hill. When it fell, several palaces were smashed and there was almost an earthquake in the future royal shelter. A lot of creatures were killed and the majority of the creatures on its body were shaken down. Hansen grabbed the golden hair of the mount and managed to stay on top. The golden growler got up and ran toward the main gate again. Groups of creatures came up to it. Fight, fight, fight. It was the first time for Hansen to be trapped in such a hard battle. He had no idea how many creatures he had killed. His hand became numb, but more creatures kept coming at him. A mile from the main gate, the golden growler roared and fell to the ground, smashing the earth. It was covered in golden blood and its skin was broken everywhere by numerous creatures. One of its paws no longer looked intact, bearing bones. It was incredible that the mount had lasted so long. Hansen took back the golden growler and spread his wings, flying outside the shelter. However, all the bird creatures and flying beasts were coming at him already, especially the flying bull, diving at him with its horns like spears. Without the protection of the golden growler, Hansen knew that he could not be stopped again. Seeing the two-headed silver bird chasing him from the back, Hansen gritted his teeth and charged the flying bull. A black lightning bolt and a golden lightning bolt clashed. When Hansen's head was about to hit the horns, he suddenly contracted his wings and flipped in the sky, putting his legs forward, clipping the neck of the bull, and bowed to hit the bull's stomach hard. Boom! The ghost pod claws stepped into the stomach of the black bull with fierce force. Hansen pulled hard and blood was spilled. A scream sounded, and the magnificent body of the bull fell to the ground. Hansen stepped on the back of the black bull and summoned his wings, rushing out of the shelter. Boom! Hearing a loud object fall, Hansen then heard the voice. A sacred blood creature Inferno Bull killed. Beast soul of Inferno Bull gained. Eat its meat to gain 0 to 10 sacred geno points. However, Hansen had no time to mind those. Like a butterfly covered in blood, he broke the blockage of the flying creatures and came out of the royal shelter. Seeing Hansen going out of the shelter, the silver-haired girl looked mad. However, there was nothing she could do. Under these circumstances, the men still managed to leave the shelter, so there were no other methods that she could adopt. Back to the Crystal Palace, Hansen treated his wounds as he thought about the twin spirits that he ran into. Hansen did not regret at all. All he could think about at this point was how to take the twin spirits for himself. He wanted them so much. Rare twin spirits, both royal. They were so scarce. Coupled with their strength and beauty, it was a gift from heaven. I must have them, Hansen thought, feeling resentful. However, the twin spirits were so powerful and had so many sacred blood creatures. When Hansen entered the shelter, only several sacred blood creatures were guarding the shelter. If it were any other time, there should be at least 3 to 4 dozen sacred blood creatures inside. So, it was very unlikely for him to go inside again. However, that did not make Hansen give up his greedy thought. He was determined to have the twin spirits, so no matter how hard it was, he will have them. In order to have them, I must first have the ability to beat them and get the 2 spirit stones. The sacred blood creatures were not that frightening. After all, they were not intelligent. There is always a way to cope with them. However, the spirit sisters are very clever and powerful. If I am not able to beat them, I can never have the spirit stones. Hansen thought back on their sword skills. Hansen had taken countless strikes from the sisters. He had at least 100 to 200 injuries on his body. With his experience to fight the silver-haired girl, Hansen had learned their sword skills. Give me some time, and I will come up with a solution for sure. Hansen was certain that he had this ability. Sacred Blood Inferno Bull, Shapeshifting Beast Soul. Hansen looked at his new beast soul with a touch of hesitation. He did not expect it to be a sacred blood shapeshifting beast soul. Too bad it was not a humanoid beast soul. Once it transformed, it could only be able to battle with its Inferno Bull's appearance. Hansen was not really interested in this type of shapeshifting beast soul, but an Inferno Bull had the ability to fly. A beast soul like this would sell for a high price, and if he used black crystals to evolve it into a berserk beast soul, its selling price would be even higher. If there's a humanoid shapeshifting beast soul, the chances of beating the twin spirit in battle will be much higher. Hansen thought to himself. Although the Fairy Queen's ability in the second God's Sanctuary was close to that of the beast soul, she was prone to a particular weakness. When she was shapeshifted, she could no longer wear armor. If that happened, Hansen's defenses would be too low. He had no hope of withstanding attacks from the creatures from the second God's Sanctuary. This entire situation had yet to yield a solution. While he healed the wounds he had incurred, he also tried to think how he might crack the twin spirit sword skills. Hansen decided to learn a hyper-geno art to withstand their sword skills. Because of this, he went to the St. Hall community in the military base to find the hyper-geno art he desired. The twin spirit's sword skills relied entirely on speed, so there were many ways to overcome their flurry of attacks. One could use speed to beat their own speed, but another could enable a high defense to withstand each hit. Hansen had seen many evolvers' hyper-geno arts, but none had satisfied him. The military's St. Hall community, compared to the St. Hall community ordinary people could visit, offered a far wider variety of hyper-geno art. After Hansen read the introduction, he found a species of the hyper-geno art that made him feel optimistic. This was a joint strike sword skill called duel, one that required two people. That meant that two people were needed to practice the sword skill. Hansen thought about this for a moment. If each person was able to use one sword, it would be incredibly difficult for them to block the twin spirits' dual blades. With their speed, it would not matter how fast Hansen's sword was. It would be extremely difficult for him to be faster than the twin spirit. If he wanted to beat them, Hansen would require two swords. Therefore, Hansen selected duel for its double strike sword skill. If this was anyone else, it would be impossible for them to use both hands to cast such a sword skill. But Hansen possessed the necessary talent of both hands. His hands weren't classed separately, as they were both considered primary, and the fortitude of his mind allowed for perfect individual control. He could use a different sword skill in each hand. He only needed to slightly modify the operation of the dual skill. Hansen noticed that the skills that required two people were completely different to one person wielding two blades. To complete this sword skill, it was nearly impossible for one person to do it solo. After all, if there were two people, they could strike from different positions. Being alone and using both hands, your position and angle was limited. So a lot of the moves in the dual blade sword skill were impossible to perform with two hands. But Hansen was not a person who gave up easily, and he could not think of any other ways he could defeat the twin spirit in battle. He was still set on making big changes to the dual sword skill. Today Hansen had visited the shelter again. Li Xinglun was there and found him, wearing a strange facial expression. Hansen, I found a humanoid sacred blood-fused transfigured beast soul. Li Xinglun's tone of voice was also somewhat strange. It is a sacred blood-class Snow Lady Beast soul. The abilities of the Snow Lady Beast soul are quite special. It does not increase one's strength, just one's speed. It also has the ability to reduce one's temperature, but that seems rather useless to me. It would most likely just become a problem. I don't think it's worth trading a Berserk Beast soul for a Snow Lady Beast soul. Plus, you had argued with Black God before, Li Xinglun said severely. Did you say that it was me who wanted to trade? Hansen asked. No, I only said that it was a friend. Li Xinglun shook his head as he spoke. Hansen thought for a moment about what to say, then said, that's okay. Feel free to tell him it's me who wants to trade. If he is willing, tell him to come here so we can complete the transaction. It was time to trade with Black God. Black God had brought people with him to the Starwheel shelter. He noticed that Hansen's eyes were a little cold, but of this he made no mention. Hansen, you dare gamble with me. Perhaps now we can settle our grudge. What do you want? Hansen furrowed his eyebrows in response. You and I engage in battle. Regardless of who wins or loses, our grudge can be settled. Black God looked at Hansen and continued, of course, if you do lose, you must leave behind the Snow Lady Beast soul. If I lose, however, I can leave behind the Inferno Bull Beast soul. Li Xinglun frowned and said, Black God, we only want to exchange beast souls on this day. Nothing else. I am merely suggesting a solution to our grudge. It is entirely up to him if he wants to partake in my idea. If he does not dare to engage me in battle, that is fine, Black God said sternly. What if I do not wish to gamble? Hansen looked at Black God as he asked. If you do not wish to settle our prolonged dispute, then you will become my enemy. And I do not go soft on those I deem to be my enemy. The few people who had accompanied Black God now summoned their beast souls. Black God, this is the Starwheel shelter. This is not Black God's shelter. Li Xinglun's eyes went cold, and he summoned a few leaders from the Starwheel shelter to push back against Black God's people. Li Xinglun, do you really want to offend me on the behalf of a person who doesn't even matter? Black God looked at Li Xinglun sternly. Hansen saved me when the Starwheel shelter was in crisis. He is my savior. No one can do him any harm before me. Li Xinglun said these words directly. Black God's emotion began to change, the atmosphere inside the shelter growing tense. It was like a room that was packed to the brim with explosives, where the presence of a single spark would be enough to ignite the volatile atmosphere. It is okay to have a one-on-one, but the beast souls that we gamble must be held onto by Li Xinglun. Hansen said all of a sudden. That is no problem. Black God agreed to the terms, as he knew all about Li Xinglun's identity. He knew he was not the sort to accept the beast souls and make a run for it. There was also the fact that Black God's purpose there was not merely to win a beast's soul. He wanted Hansen's life. Hansen had stolen the Snakefish King in the past and used a poison dagger to hurt him. This had almost taken Black God's life, and was the cause of the anger that he could never find it in himself to swallow. When they arrived at the plaza, Hansen and Black God handed their beast souls over to Li Xinglun. Please, Black God said, as he went onto the stage of the plaza, staring at Hansen as he went. Ever since he had taken control of Black God's shelter, he had never been put at such a disadvantage. If he had the opportunity, he would relish killing Hansen immediately. This time, he did not want only the return of his beast soul, he wanted his life back too. Black God was highly confident in his tornado knife skill. He had battled with Hansen once before, so he thought he knew the extent of his abilities. That is why the idea of combating on stage intimidated Hansen. Word of the bet between Black God and Hansen spread quickly, and drew quite the crowd to the Starwheel shelter to observe it firsthand. Li Xinglun began to feel hopeless. If Hansen did not agree to the bet, he could still protect Hansen and keep him safe inside the Starwheel shelter. But if Black God managed to kill Hansen, then there was nothing he could do but to adhere to the terms of the wager and provide the beast souls all to Black God. Once Hansen was on stage, Black God no longer felt no desire to exchange words with him. He wanted to bite into Hansen's flesh with a savage ferocity. He summoned the Black Beast soul knife and started swiping at Hansen with fierce desire. Black God took a step back and dodged the ghost pod claws. He took up his stance with the knife again and attempted to attack, but he had only raised his weapon halfway when he realized he couldn't do what he had planned. As before, if he opened himself up with a wide attack, his waist would be exposed to the fury of the ghost pod claws. Coincidence. Black God was stricken with worry, unable to believe what was happening. Nor could he believe that someone could so effectively block his tornado knife skill. Black God took a step back and attacked again, his face distorted into an ugly grimace. The people watching were already shocked. Those outside as well inside the arena could see quite clearly everything that was happening. The famous knife skill of Black God was utterly useless against Hansen. Tornado knife skill seemed to have all of a sudden become a total joke. Black God could not even draw his knife out, so there was no way he could attempt to attack twice as fast. Black God had never appeared so lame, so feeble, as at this very moment. Hopeless. He felt hopeless. Black God was suddenly overwhelmed with the fear that he was going to die, and that his bladder would give way if he couldn't reach a bathroom in time. Even the few observers from Black God's shelter were shocked at what they were seeing. They were close to being unable to believe their eyes. They clearly knew the strength and extent of Black God's power, and the ferocity of his tornado knife skill ought to have made him unbeatable in the ice fields. How could it be suppressed in the way they were seeing? Where did this guy come from? Their faces were bursting with surprise. If Black God was already close to submission, they would end up in a far worse condition if they were to go on stage. 2 or 3 hits would probably be enough to end their lives. Having returned to the goddess shelter, Hansen delivered the flesh to young man Li. He had been planning on venturing forward now to the Alliance, but young man Li told him that Zero had not been eating enough recently, and she hadn't eaten at all in the past few days. Why are you not eating? Is the food here not to your liking? When Hansen caught sight of Zero, she was sitting by a window of the tower. She watched the falling snow outside, seemingly lost in a blissful reverie. Zero shook her head and said, I am not hungry. You are not God, how can you not be hungry? Come, tell me what you would like to eat and I shall make it for you. Hansen gently cuffed her head as he spoke. Can you take me with you the next time you leave? Zero turned gazing at Hansen when she spoke, showing her wide eyes. Sure. Hansen hesitated for a moment. Zero's identity was rather mystical, and he did not want her to know much about who he was. But thinking of her, without any family, he was probably the only person she had a true connection with. He felt sorry for her, and so did not wish to reject her. Zero's face finally took on a smile. Although it was merely a raising of the lips, it would melt the heart of anyone who saw it. Come, let us eat first. Tell me what you would like, and I shall make it. I'm not bluffing when I tell you that my cooking skills cannot be below those of a 3-rank restaurant chef. Hansen tugged at her to eat something. Hansen was bluffing. In truth, his cooking abilities were quite poor. The extent of his abilities spread to cooking stews and grilling meat. If the food he wanted to eat could not be prepared and served through either of those methods, then he would simply eat it raw. He brought Zero into the Crystal Palace, and they searched for a lonely deep-sea mutant creature together. They also tried to figure out the dual sword skill, while Hansen was content to freely travel in the nearby area. He did not dare to enter the shelter that resided on the seabed there. The boat had been sailing for a few days when Hansen saw a jellyfish that lit up like a giant lantern. coursing through the water with great energy. It looked beautiful. It seems as if there are many jellyfish in the sea, but most of them are in a group. It's rare to find one that is content to remain alone. Let us see if we can hunt it. Hansen thought about what to do, and then summoned golden armor and a glyph. He then left the crystal palace and swam towards the jellyfish. Though there were no other creatures around him, Hansen was wearing armor and a glyph for protection. Even if the jellyfish was of the sacred blood class, Hansen had the power to protect himself. It would not be difficult for him to escape and return to the crystal palace if he needed. It was different being in the sea. Due to the flow of water, when Hansen was swimming, it was possible for his presence to be detected by other creatures fairly quickly. But the jellyfish that looked like a giant lantern seemed now to be moving quite slowly, remaining where it was, then rising up and down in the water. It seemed as if it did not notice Hansen closing in on it. That jellyfish looks so stupid, there is no way it could be a high-class creature. Hansen approached the jellyfish but did not summon the ghost pod claws. He simply got close and punched the semicircular body of the jellyfish. The ghost pod claws were poisonous. Although Hansen was not afraid of poison, the taste of the afflicted creature would be tainted by the substance. He therefore opted to use the force to punch the jellyfish to death. It would taste better when they barbecued it later. He felt as if his fist had punched through a mound of mud. He lost all strength, and the force no longer worked. He wanted to bring his fist back, which was still lodged in the body of the jellyfish, but he realized that the creature was holding on from the inside and not letting him go. No matter what direction he pulled, the jellyfish followed and remained stuck to him. The jellyfish's tentacles then encircled Hansen and tied him up. He felt electricity surge from the jellyfish, making his body convulse and cramp. Unable to control himself, his mouth opened to gulp in the seawater. What the hell is this? Hansen was shocked, literally and figuratively. He clamped down to withstand the electricity that surged into him, and then summoned the ghost pod claws to slash wildly at the jellyfish. But the ghost pod claws went straight through the gelatinous skin and became lodged inside the creature as well. Hansen was taken aback. This jellyfish was like a living mound of viscous syrup. All slashes and punches were useless against it, as they would have no effect and his foe would maintain its grasp on him no matter what. Hansen was holding back the cramps caused by the surging electricity and desperately wanted to return to the Crystal Palace as soon as he could. But the jellyfish continued to attack, attaching itself all over Hansen. Already, half of Hansen's body had been consumed by the jellyfish, and the rest was sure to follow. This was the first time Hansen had come across such a terrifying creature, and his heart was overcome with dread. His mind raced, trying to think of a way to escape his terrible predicament. Suddenly, in the corner of his eye, he caught sight of a shadow that was swimming towards him from the Crystal Palace. Hansen took another look and saw Zero swimming his way. In his surprise, he wanted to shout and tell Zero to stay back, but being in the water made this impossible. Zero was swimming swiftly towards Hansen and came to his side. He reached out again with his hands, attempting to push the jellyfish away from him. No, Hansen screamed in his heart, but it was no use. Zero was now caught by the jellyfish, just as Hansen had been. More electric currents surged into his body and his body continued to convulse with spasms. It felt as if he would become charcoal any second now. Hansen withstood the pain and desperately tried to think of a way that he could save himself and Zero. But he then noticed Zero's eyes flashing with a strange purple light. Her black pupils were now beaming purple, and the colors spread to consume her black hair, too. Little purple horns appeared from the top of her head. All of a sudden, she became the royal Shura that Hansen had once seen during their first encounter. Zero, who had taken on the appearance of a Shura, used her hands to tear the jellyfish apart. The creature, which was like mud, seemed to have lost its power under Zero's counter-offensive. As though it had been struck by a Goliath knife, the monster was split into two halves. Hansen was shocked by what he saw. When Zero was in this form, it was quite difficult to believe how much power she possessed. Even the monstrous jellyfish could not withstand the power stemming from her small, delicate hands. In a moment, she cleared Hansen's body from the vine-like tentacles that had imprisoned him, and she quickly hauled him back to the Crystal Palace. They both hurriedly emerged from the water. Zero quickly got back on board and lay down on the floor. The color of her now purple hair began to fade and return to black, as the horns that had appeared on her head shrank and disappeared. All of a sudden, she looked like a typical human female once again. Hansen quickly went to check on her. He noticed that she had passed out but was free from any serious injuries. After the incident with the jellyfish, Hansen did not dare go hunting in the deep sea by himself. He salvaged the jellyfish's corpse and cooked it so that he could understand where it had come from. It turned out that it was a sacred blood class red demon jellyfish, and it increased Hansen's sacred geno point score by 8. Upon returning to the Alliance, Hansen carefully investigated his puzzle a great deal, but he could not unearth anything that would give him any greater understanding of Zero's status. Humans are human, Shuras are Shura. Although they shared similar attributes in terms of appearance, they were two separate species. It was impossible for someone to be both a Shura and a human. Hansen even looked into the information alongside a biologist. The biologist proved to him that the genes separating Shuras and humans were far too different to be compatible, or for even a hybrid to be birthed. Even if it was an artificial culture, it was impossible for a crossbreed between a human and a Shura to emerge, too. So, how would you best define Zero and the peculiarities of her situation? Hansen thought about it deeply but could not come to any remote conclusion. Hansen was also curious about the 9-life cat tattoo on Zero's back. Sen, can you come with me please? Hansen had been scouring various outlets of information when Jai Yanran knocked the door and entered the room. Of course, where are we going? Hansen was surprised when he looked at Jai Yanran. This was because Jai Yanran rarely came to Hansen's room, and usually resorted to contacting him only through a communicator. If Jai Yanran was willing to come straight to his room, it had to be a matter of some importance. Therefore, Hansen did not question her motive for coming and promptly agreed to go with her. Tomorrow, I am going to an exchange event. I was hoping that you could accompany me. What exchange event? How do I best explain this? It is a semi-private exchange event. The people who take part in this event are young, like me. Jai Yanran spoke slowly, detailing her explanation with great care. It's not some dating event, is it? Hansen blinked his eyes. Jai Yanran took offense and said, use your mind. That has nothing to do with it. It really is just some exchange event. But you see, the people who are there will be special. And so too will the goods on offer be. I hope you will be able to accompany me, as I am sure it will help you in the future. Could you tell me what sort of exchange event it is? Hansen asked, now curious. Jai Yanran also told Hansen that at the exchange event, he was sure to meet someone familiar. Who? Hansen asked, curiously. Wang Mengmeng from the Wang family. I have heard she's quite fond of you. Jai Yanran giggled while saying this to Hansen, and she looked at him with devious eyes. Mengmeng only treats me like a big brother, and I treat her like a little sister in return. You know that, don't you? Hansen felt a little surprised, because he knew that Wang Mengmeng was not an ordinary person. He had not expected her to be a future inheritor of the Kai Gong. However, Jai Yanran spoke a word that Hansen was quite familiar with, Kai Gong. Only the hyper-geno arts that have been modified by Kai Gong could be used to maintain control of the powers of the universe. According to what Jai Yanran told Hansen, some high-level Kai Gong hyper-geno arts did not require celestial being modifications for use. Even when humans are children, they are able to use Kai Gong to observe the power of the universe. The Jai family is the clan that owned Kai Gong. There were however 3 other families that were gifted in the same way. Each family inherited Kai Gong from the same lineage and heritage. All that was different was the family name. Jai, Lin, Wang, Su. Jai Yanran spoke these 4 surnames to Hansen, and it made his heart leap in his chest. Killing of Zhu Longyan had given him the ice skin skill. Once he had gained it, he had kept an eye on anyone possessing the surname Zhu. But he was never able to glean much information regarding big individuals that belonged to that family. Now, all of a sudden, he heard the surname Zhu spoken aloud to him, and his face changed. Hansen really wanted to ask who the Zhu family were, and also ask whether they possessed a special skill called ice skin. But he kept his question back, for now. Yanran, that must be your boyfriend. A woman of similar age to Jai Yanran approached. She looked over Hansen as she spoke. The genes of the Jai family were strong. It was fair to say that each and every member of the family was pretty, and this woman was no exception. In fact, she looked quite beautiful. That being said, she didn't look as fresh and spotless as Jai Yanran. Yes, Kenku. Jai Yanran confessed to her. If she had brought Hansen here, that meant that she had no intention of hiding his identity. Jai Kinkyu had only asked to make polite conversation. She had no real interest in Hansen. Yanran, this is my boyfriend, Zhu Yao. Today he is here as a representative of the Zhu family, who has come to talk about the Jade Heart Sutra. While Jai Kinkyu said this, her eyebrows were raised boisterously. Jai Yanran then spoke to Jai Kinkyu for a while, who continued to gush praise over how delightful and amazing Zhu Yang was while paying no attention to Hansen. Jai Yanran felt displeased at her behavior and thought of an excuse to leave them. My cousin's urge to compete with me has never been quelled. Now she has a boyfriend from the Zhu family. She is so full of herself, Jai Yanran quietly explained to Hansen. Is that something to be proud of? Hansen feigned surprise as he asked this. Jai Yanran pursed her lips and said, I suppose it isn't something to be particularly proud about. But if he can go on stage and talk about the sutra, he must be a figure of some importance in these four families. Following this, Jai Yanran began saying unfavorable things about the people on stage. Then she quietly said, every time at an exchange event, each family will select a few specific people to give a speech up there. If you are selected to go up there, you must be the best of who that family can provide. Then you should go up there. Hansen laughed. Jai Yanran rolled her eyes then replied, when my father was young, he was always up there discussing sutras. Unfortunately, I did not carry the flame of his talent. My qualifications aren't particularly outstanding. Thus I lack the necessities required to be chosen to go up there. Who said that? If I had a say, I'd be telling everyone that you were the most qualified to go up there. Once you were up there, you wouldn't have to talk or speak. You could just sit there, and the people that saw you would see the true meaning of beauty. Then they would know the answer to everything. That would be better than making some boring speech, wouldn't it? Hansen's flirtation was strong. Jai Yanran's hands were squeezing Hansen's waist, as her face lit up with the light of 1,000 smiles. The Zhu family always think highly of themselves. They believe themselves better than any other family. Did you not see Zhu Yang's eyes rise to breach the stratosphere? Because the four of our families come from the same bloodline. The Zhu family likes to present themselves as the primary lineage. They also possess the most secrets and enigmas that outsiders to their blood can never be made privy to. Jai Yanran explained. What secrets? Hansen's heart began to skip. The Frost Sutra, Jai Yanran replied. Hansen sighed in relief, having worried she might say Jadeskin. Jai Yanran then quickly added, but the Frost Sutra is not easy to learn. Only a few people in the entirety of recorded history have been able to practice what it teaches. The Zhu family in recent times, however, have been trying to turn the Frost Sutra into a hypogeno art, so all of the family can learn it. I heard that they have been seeing results in the past few years, and that it has been modified into a hypogeno art called Jadeskin. But that said, no one has seen anyone from the Zhu family cast it. Hansen's heart jumped, and he thought, so it is true, Zhu Longyan does indeed belong to this family. The first woman who came out to talk was called Lin Yy. He could not tell her age, but she looked so elegant that his eyes felt refreshed just from looking at her. Her whole body was like silky jade, and even her hair possessed a halo of sparkling cleanliness. The third world view she spoke of was a classic in Kaidong. It was supposed to be a proper speech, but all she did was stand on stage and discuss her own opinions on the subject. She did not even read out the sutra. According to what Lin Yy said, Kaigon was just another hypergeno art. It just wasn't like the ordinary types, being designed for humans to maximize the potential of their genes instead. It was a hypergeno art that could absorb the power of the universe. After Lin Yy concluded her talk about third world view, Hansen was still eager to hear more. After Lin Yy, it was time for Zhu Yang to give his speech. He went on stage and began to talk about Ice Heart, a subject which he could discuss with great thoroughness. Through a combination of modern science and a shelter gene system, Hansen was able to learn a great deal about it. This Ice Heart seemed quite familiar. After hearing Zhu Yang's speech, although Hansen did not fully learn Ice Heart, his understanding of it had undoubtedly reached another level. A total of 13 people would give speeches out of the four families. Each would make a speech each day for 3 days. This meant 39 Kaigongs learned greatly through the speeches on stage. Unfortunately, each individual's commentary and personal review colored each on-stage discussion. None of them touched upon the original codexes and how to learn them. Although Jai Yanran felt it strange that Hansen was so interested in the discussions, it made her happy. All the same, it was nice to see Hansen so engrossed in learning Kaigong, as it would make it easier for him to learn the Jai family's Kaigong in the future. Dongsu Sutra, I can finally learn it. Although I have only got the basics, according to what they have been saying, I should now be able to learn how to open the gene lock. Lin Feng, come and sit with us. Zhu Yang smiled and gestured to Lin Feng to join him. Once the speech was over, everyone was discussing what they had seen. But there were too many people, so it was impossible for the discussions to include everyone. Usually, a discussion group only comprised around half a dozen people. People with similar levels tended to group together. Those who were allowed on stage were considered leaders of their generation. Usually, they gathered in a few groups to discuss certain subjects together. The sutra that Lin Feng spoke about was the best. Even Zui Yang, who frequently looked down on others, considered him an important character. This was why he felt compelled to invite him over. I'm sorry, I have a few old friends waiting for me elsewhere that I need to catch up with. Maybe next time. Lin Feng rejected Zui Yang and Jai King Q. Zui Yang's face changed. The Zhu family had always been a proud family, and to have his own personal invitation be rejected by Lin Feng upset him. Lin Feng cared little for Zui Yang's reaction. He simply turned around and walked off in another direction. Many people were looking at Lin Feng as he did this, and they were interested to see which circle he would be joining. Under everyone's curious eyes, Lin Feng went to sit beside a man who was strange to them. The two of them acted quite naturally, not troubling to greet each other formally. It appeared that they were quite close. Many were quite shocked, as most had no idea who that person was that Lin Feng was with. Zui Yang and Jai King Q, seeing who it was, both grimaced. Lin Feng had gone to sit with Hansen. At that moment, murmurs arose from the crowd about who that curious man was. Almost were unaware of who he was. Many did recognize Jai Yanran. Although she was born into a wondrous family, her talents weren't exceptional by any means. It actually seemed as if Lin Feng wasn't there for Jai Yanran either. He really had just sat down and started talking with the unknown fellow. I didn't expect to see you here. Lin Feng smiled, for he had noticed Hansen in the crowd some time ago. Alas, he had had to wait until all the speeches were over before he could join him. I could say the same. Hansen poured Lin Feng a drink. Without a toasting of glasses, he immediately had a swig. The two of them then began chatting casually. Even Jai Yanran was surprised to see Hansen and Lin Feng with each other. She had no idea the two had such a relationship, one that seemed healthy and positive. Little Feng Feng, are these friends of yours? Another person now appeared, uninvited. She sat next to Lin Feng and put her arms around him as she laughed. Hansen looked at the person who had called Lin Feng Little Feng Feng and saw that it was in fact Lin YY, who had given her speech about Third World View. Lin YY was unbelievably elegant, and her entire presence and being felt radiant. Although she was restrained, Hansen could feel the enormous power that emanated from within her. I am Lin Feng's big sister, Lin YY. You can call me Sister YY. Hansen caught sight of Lin Feng's emotionless face, but still, he smiled and shook Lin YY's hand. With a sweet voice, he said, Sister YY. Lin Feng's forehead was already full of creases, but Lin YY was very happy to look at him in such a condition. She said, Little Feng Feng, your friend is far more interesting than you. Jai Yanran sweetly called her Sister YY, but in her heart she felt taken aback. Watching the four of them talk amongst each other, Zui Yang and Jai King Q were unable to come in and join the conversation. Zui Yang looked around and then said aloud, Lin Feng's Kaigong is quite excellent, and you are Lin Feng's best friend by the looks of things. I can only assume you are learning Kaigong as well. How about you and I duel? The people around Hansen suddenly turned to look at Zui Yang. Jai King Q quickly supported her boyfriend's proposal and commented, to sit here is really quite boring. We should definitely show off Yanran's boyfriend to everyone. Jai King Q did not believe Hansen had even a remote possibility of beating Zui Yang in a duel. Everyone in the Zhu family had an elite status, and in Jai King Q's heart, only Lin Feng could possibly come close to rivaling the level of Zui Yang out of the four families. If you want to have a duel, fight against me. Lin YY squinted her eyes but smiled with the radiance of flowers. Zui Yang frowned. Although he was confident of his own abilities, it was still going to take some time before he was close to becoming a surpasser. There was no way he could compete with Lin YY, who was close to becoming one herself. Sister YY, let the man do his thing. We are just pretty girls who shouldn't let them take advantage of us. Jai King Q smiled. Which family are you from? Do you not know who the boss is around here? Who do you think you are calling me sister? Are you not aware that I am Lin Feng's aunt? Judging from our comparative, familial tiers and ties, you should be calling me aunt. Are you silly or merely ignorant of the rules? Lin YY really was a little demon girl, and her temper could change in an instant. In a second, her warm face and composure turned ice cold. Jai King Q's face suddenly became bright red as she blushed hugely, then felt like she wanted to dig a hole and hide. She heard Jai Yanran call Lin YY sister, which is why she thought she could do the same. It did sound friendlier, after all. Lin YY had already become sick and tired of Zui Yang and Jai King Q, and so had no desire to be polite to them. After seeing Jai King Q be humiliated in this fashion, Zui Yang's face wholly changed. From his body came a frosty wind and biting chill, and an angry force swirled inside him. Everyone looking upon him turned cold. I told you, if you want to fight, you pick it with me. Lin YY cared little for his behavior, and she had already stood up and got ready to compete. It was normal to witness duels take place during an exchange event. But what was happening here wasn't normal. Sister YY, allow me. She was right in saying you're a beautiful woman, but to battle with a little child would mean you are stooping to his low level. Hansen now stood up, smiling at Lin YY. Lin YY was shocked. She looked at Lin Feng, who nodded to her, and she then sat back down on the sofa. She said, "Little Sen, I will be watching you." The reason why Lin YY stood up for Hansen was because she had seen that Zui Yang only get angry with Hansen over Lin Feng's friendliness towards him. Otherwise, she would not be helping a person she had just met. Now Lin YY was actually surprised to see Hansen stand up for himself. Jai Yanran was feeling nervous as she watched Hansen and Zui Yang depart for the battleground. Although Hansen was a talented battler, he was going up against someone from the Zhu family, so her anxiety was fully justified. The Zhu family, although they weren't very famous, were always full of pride and confidence in themselves. They were even quite arrogant, but the skills the Zhu family possessed were powerful and justified their self-regard. Little Feng, can Little Sen actually beat him? Lin YY could tell that Zui Yang was a formidable opponent and extremely talented. But she had no clue what to expect from Hansen, a person she had just met. Lin Feng quietly replied, "I don't know. But when he goes against those in his tier, he never loses." After Lin Feng said that, it wasn't only Lin YY who looked surprised. All the other families were shocked, too. They did not expect Lin Feng to say something like that in such confidence, and their view of Hansen now changed instantly. When Hansen went on stage, he calmly looked at his opponent Zui Yang. He had survived many life or death trials and experiences, and he cared little what he felt were trivial matters. As such, he was rarely angered by unpleasant words that might be spoken to him. But he really wanted to see if Zui Yang had learnt ice skin and to see if it was any different to the one he had. If the ice skin he possessed was discovered, he would undoubtedly become a personal enemy of the Zhu family. Before such a thing could come to be, it would be best to gauge their power first. Zui Yang stood upon the battlefield, and the chill in his eyes solidified. His skin was like ice, and a frigid wind blew from his eyes. His whole body looked strange, as if he personified the entire concept of cold. He looked like a demon composed of ice, and the chill air that surrounded him frightened those that saw him. Many of the people who saw him took a step back. "You strike first. If I go first, you will not be given the opportunity to fight back." Zui Yang looked at Hansen coldly. "Little Feng, is Little Sen going to make it?" Although this Zui Yan is rather annoying, his ice skills are truly powerful. Lin YY looked at Zui Yan, who was like an ancient iceberg, and couldn't help herself from asking once again. "He should be fine." Lin Feng merely smiled, not seeming to display the slightest hint of agitation. Although it had been a long time since he had last seen Hansen, he had been informed of Hansen's recent endeavors by Tang Zhenliu. Based on what he had heard, he did not think Zui Yang would be able to beat him. Hansen didn't seem to do anything except watch. He couldn't tell whether or not Zui Yang's ice skin was better than his or not. Because of this, he did not hold back. In a flash, his body began to shine and crystallize. Little Sen is quite good. Has he managed to learn nanocrystal at this age? Lin YY was taken aback. No matter how he looked, Hansen was still only around 20 years old. To learn nanocrystal at such a young age was impressive because it generally took decades to learn it through a hyper-geno art. The talent he possessed was quite surprising. He actually learned nanocrystal. This man really is something. This can't be real. How old is he? How has he learned nanocrystal? Yes, nanocrystal is a lower tier Kaigon, but his talents are scarily good to have already learned it by his age. People from across the four families were discussing with ravenous interest the events unfolding before them. There was a man who looked quite similar to Zui Yang sitting in a corner and coldly looking at the stage, devoid of emotion. "Zui Quang, your brother is an opponent in this battle." Next to this cold-looking man, a bookwormish sort explained the situation. "The only opponents that the Zhu family have are other members of the Zhu family," Zui Quang said, not much caring for what the other person said. His confidence was enough to suffocate those in his presence. "Really?" The bookwormish man smiled but said nothing more. Hansen did not say anything. He just raised his fist and threw a punch, trying his hardest, knowing that ice skin was highly powerful. When going against the Zhu family, he did not dare to underestimate the talents of his enemy. In each attack, he gave his all. His heart was jumping and thumping like an overactive generator, and the body that looked like crystal was annihilating the atmosphere around him. The sound of crackles, bursts, and bangs erupted from the air being pummeled near the human machine. Two fists collided, and the air at their meeting thundered. The air was swirling all about in distress, but neither of the fighters moved. The punch resounded with a boom. But after a second, Zui Yong's face changed. Blood dribbled from the corner of his lips. Everyone was aghast at the sight. No one would have expected one punch to injure Zui Yong. Hansen's eyes were still icy cold, and the fist was still pushing through Zui Yong's defenses. Hansen was like a crystal demon, suppressing his every attack. Now a barrage of fists came his way, and though he desperately tried to dodge them, every thrown fist found its target. The scary shadow was like an ancient demon, and he had the power to instill fear in all who saw him. The smile had quickly vanished from Jai King Q's face. She did not expect Zui Yong to get beaten by Hansen, let alone beaten so harshly. He was injured from the first punch, and after that had no chance to fight back. The hits kept coming until his defeat. And now, blood leaked from multiple orifices. Zui Yong was still screaming, but none of his attacks could match up to his cries. Jai Yanren was delighted. Although she had known Hansen was very strong, even she hadn't believed that he had the power to beat someone from the Zhu family so ferociously. Wow, that is so strong. Where did this guy even come from? He can't be from a Kaigong family. Is nano crystal really that powerful? Can it really suppress ice skin like that? Awesome. That is so awesome. The Jai family has an amazing addition. Zui Quang's eyes changed. He said 2 words, yin force. This is an extremely powerful yin force. To have a yin force be practiced to such a terrifying degree, I am not sure any evolver can rival him. The bookworm said, Zui Quang said, then said nothing more. As he looked at Hansen, a murderous glint entered his eyes. Boom. Zui Yang hopelessly accepted another punch. He felt his organs being pummeled and then felt as if his heart was ready to explode. He screamed again. His body began shining and to expand in size. All of a sudden, he had taken on the appearance of a red-eyed monster. After this, all of his attacks had kept being suppressed by Hansen. He had opted to use a beast soul. Many people despised Zui Yang's new tactic, but he was desperate. If he did not want to concede, his final hope was in the summoning of a beast soul. Zui Yang, through the addition of a beast soul, had increased his power by a great magnitude. His eyes were still incredibly cold, and he raised a fist towards Hansen. Because his power had increased, the fist was able to teleport in front of Hansen and prepare to sucker punch him with great force. This rage-fueled fist could not even be seen by the audience. Fists collided in quick succession, but Zui Yang, who had already transformed with the aid of a beast soul, was only beaten back further. Blood gushed from his nose, mouth and ears. Everyone watching this was highly surprised. Zui Yang was already using a beast soul and yet he was still being beaten badly. To everyone's disbelief, Zui Yang had already been pushed to the edge of the arena. His mouth was agape in rage and his face contorted to a look that refused to concede. But he just could not stand his ground against Hansen's fists. His body was like an ice demon, but then another punch hit him. He went flying off the stage. Crash. Zui Yang was furious and his organs had received significant damage. Little Sen, you are really good. Lin Wai smiled and patted him on the shoulder. It was only because that guy was so weak, Hansen replied casually, but that was the truth. The Zhu family was definitely not as strong as he had thought. After the exchange event ended, they went inside the airship. The bookwormish man looked shocked at Zui Quang and said, "You did not do anything to Hansen? That's not your style." Zui Quang's jaw was sharp like a blade. His eyes were black like onyx and just as cold. His long hair casually flowed down his shoulders. It was still tidy, and each strand was refined like ice. That was an exchange event. What difference does it make if I go out there and beat him up? He had hurt my family. Beating him up would be too small a punishment. Help me check which shelter he comes from, Zui Quang said. His face displayed no emotion, and his manner could run chills down the hardiest of spines. Your luck is bad. He is in the ice field bordering the North Ice Sea. That place is too isolated. You would have to cross a great amount of large, barren landscapes to reach there. There are many spirit shelters. That's fine by me, Zui Quang replied. Then, he stepped inside a teleporter. After Hansen returned, he immediately started to learn the Dongsu Sutra. He was already a beginner in the practice, but that was all. It was still going to take him a long time to pass the first entrance and open his first gene lock. In the exchange event, Hansen had received many benefits. According to the Kaigong that Lin Wai discussed, Hansen had to look back to the ice skin skill. He realized he should have already have opened his first gene lock. According to what Hansen had heard, if he had learnt the first tier, then he should have unlocked the first gene lock. But Hansen did not feel any different or special following his opening of the gene lock. This was unlike the tales of others who had opened their first gene lock. Zui Yang's ice skin had not even gone past the first tier, but his usage had already yielded large amounts of frost air. It seemed as if Zhu Yang had managed to break through the first tier, which would allow him to control the power of ice. Is it because I did not use the Geno solution produced exclusively for ice skin? Hansen asked himself. This was just one idea to pass through his mind. Although he did not have the power to control ice, he was still satisfied with his ice skin, particularly in the way it would reinforce his genes. Now that he had learnt the basics of the Dongsu Sutra, he was confident about learning it in its entirety. Hansen closed his eyes. His blood coursed through his body exactly as he wanted it to, and the cells in his body made happy noises. Even if it was for just a second, Hansen's body was crystal clear, like jade. A pleasant scent permeated the air around him. The sound of his breathing was divine, coming in and out of his nose. The blood flow in Hansen's body steadily accelerated. It was as if his entire body had become a magnet, and a sparkling light was being drawn into his body. The cells in his body possessed a strange strength that made him feel as if he was just a baby again. Inhaling fresh air and exhaling dirty air, his body became more and more transparent. The fresh scent of life now grew stronger, too. One circle had been completed. Hansen opened his eyes. His black eyes looked around, and he was overwhelmed by a blissful, magical feeling. The pleasant-smelling aura of his body began to leave. He felt as if he was ready to fly and launch straight towards the heavens. It really is a Kaigong for break through the vacuum. And yet it is just a beginner skill. I already feel as if I've been reborn. The cells in my body can freely breathe by themselves. No longer do I have to be afraid of running out of oxygen in deep waters. Hansen's heart was overwhelmed with joy. With this power, he could finally hunt creatures under the sea without fear of drowning. Hansen had always needed a hyper-geno art for underwater fighting. To fight in the water was completely different to fighting on land. The effects of water pressure and resistances were considerable. The shift in the effectiveness of certain land hyper-geno arts to how they performed in the water likewise very acute. Hansen had many S-class licenses of the Saint Hull, so spending one more did not concern him much. And now here he was, arriving in the Saint Hull to purchase an additional hyper-geno art. Humans found it hard to hunt creatures in the water, so there were not many underwater-based hyper-geno art to select from. Hansen's choices were strictly limited. Out of the 8 underwater ones available, he picked one S-class licensed hyper-geno art. He did not dwell on the purchase too much and quickly bought it outright. Hansen had picked the S-class licensed hyper-geno art called Tide. It was a water-based skill that allowed its user to draw power from the surrounding water itself and so amplify their own powers. Although it did not sound particularly special, Tide's amplified power was nothing to be sniffy about. After he drank the exclusive Geno solution for Tide, Hansen returned to the shelter and drove the Crystal Palace into the sea so he could practice his new ability. Hansen spent most of his time practicing Tide, but for the Dongshuan Sutra, he decided to only practice one cycle each day. That practice itself only took 2 minutes. This wasn't because Hansen did not want to continue, it was because after one cycle, his body was already filled to the brim with power. Practicing further would not deliver any more benefits. Hansen guessed it was because his body had not yet reached the status of a celestial being. There was a limit to how much his body could take. He wasn't sure if it was because he had learnt the Dongshuan Sutra, but whenever he was in the water now, he felt no resistance. He was like a water fairy. I need to find a sacred blood creature out in the sea, so I can test my abilities on it. Hansen's exhilaration was unbridled. A large band of sea bugs now caught Hansen's attention, and they shone purple as they wended their course across the seabed. What are these little creatures? He summoned the Golden Rockworm King and suited it up in armor. The Golden Rockworm King's defenses were now almost up to the level of a sacred blood creature hailing from the second shelter. This was the perfect opportunity to test out its abilities and resiliencies. If they were to meet a sacred blood creature out there, the Golden Rockworm King was definitely sturdy enough not to die too quickly. Hansen could have the Golden Rockworm King retreat whenever he chose. The Golden Rockworm King had its battle mode initiated, and it dove out into the dark waters. Before it could get close to the sea bugs, the target of its venture had already taken heed of its approach. The spikes that shone purple now discharged a violet solution of some sort. All of a sudden, the water of the area became a thick and murky purple. When the Golden Rockworm King touched this purple emulsion, the super pet armor corroded instantly. Understanding what is happening, Hansen quickly recalled the Golden Rockworm King. Whoa, those are some powerful sea bugs. Hansen summoned his own armor and glyph, and then reached out to touch the purple liquid himself. Fortunately, the purple fluids could not corrode his own armor. Hansen did not hesitate. He was almost like a shark, homing in on the urchin-looking sea bugs. The sea bugs seemed to feel even more threatened, and so they squirted out more of their corrosive purple toxin. The water began turning black and Hansen struggled to see anything. Luckily, he could outpace the sea bugs he was after. He sprinted in front of one and quickly waved his ghost pod claws to kill it. Mutant creature hunted. Poison spike sea bug. The beast's soul was not acquired. Consume its flesh to obtain a random amount of mutant geno points, between 0 and 10. Hansen was shocked. If the sea bugs were mutant creatures, that meant there was a many thousands of them in front of him. It was rare to see so many mutant creatures together on land. The value of what he had stumbled onto was difficult to comprehend. Consumed with excitement, Hansen was overwhelmed at the number of mutant creatures he could now freely hunt. The likelihood of obtaining the beast's soul of a sea bug was all but guaranteed, as a beast's soul was sure to drop from the thousands of mutant creatures that stretched out before him. Hansen immediately swam out to kill as many sea bugs as he could. Like a swarm of angry wasps, they all tried to spray their toxic liquid to deter their attacker. As he came near, they also tried to put their thorns into him directly. Under the buff provided by the double berserk sacred blood beast soul, the mutant sea bugs had no chance of piercing his golden armor. Their poison was useless against him. Hansen casually attacked and slew a fair number of sea bugs. But the poison spike sea bugs had their own form of intelligence. After Hansen had killed a dozen of them, they noticed their inability to compete their hunter, and they all tried to escape. Panicking, they tried to swim as far away from Hansen as they could. Hansen had not yet acquired the beast's soul he was looking for, so he was not planning on letting them get away so easily. He fervently chased them and fiercely swung his ghost pod claws. With each swing, the satisfying sound of a fresh kill struck his eardrums. Mutant creature hunted. Poison spike sea bug. The beast's soul has been acquired. Hansen's heart was delighted at obtaining a new beast's soul. He tried to push his luck and kill a few more to collect another, but in the corner of his vision he saw a giant poison spike sea bug headed in his direction. This sea bug was like a hot air balloon, and it shone out of the darkness of the sea like a renegade neutron star. Its brightness made it impossible for Hansen to open his eyes at all. A sacred blood creature. Hansen was not alarmed and instead was feeling happy. He had been looking for a sacred blood creature to train upon. After all, now, with a poisonous sea bug king appearing right before him, Hansen considered it the best thing ever. He did not remain idle and swam quickly towards the poisonous sea bug king. However, he noticed that its body strangely appeared to be shrinking. A new dark liquid was emitted from its large spikes. This substance made the entire water glow in a bright purple haze. When Hansen's golden armor touched the purple water, it was as if it had been plunged into a vat of powerful acid. White foam enveloped the armor, and bubbles frothed angrily all around it, as if it was being violently corroded away. A large regiment of mutant poisonous sea bugs came to surround the sea bug king, seemingly attracted to the purple mixture. They consumed the nectar of their master and began to shine in likeness to the king, surrounding it like a net of stars. Hansen was slightly taken aback by the quick turn of events and held off from attacking the mutant sea bug king. He turned around to escape the purple cloud. The poisonous sea bug did not chase after Hansen. Instead, it stayed put, discharging more and more of its purple fluids. After a short while, it looked as though the entire sea had turned purple. Hansen did not dare remain still, and to hasten his passage he rode on the back of a silver eel. With an armful of slain mutant sea bugs, he returned to the Crystal Palace. The sacred blood creature was too much for him. Mutant poisonous sea bug beast soul, spiky shield type. Hansen summoned his new beast soul. It was like a small, round shield that was adorned with a large number of spikes. Its size was like that of a frying pan. Being an arm shield type, it could be equipped and used like a buckler. The purple spikes obviously contained the poison. Although he saw it could effectively corrode metal and armor, he wasn't yet sure whether it could corrode the body of a living thing. Hansen thought about preparing a few sea bugs to eat, but he noticed that the bodies of the dead sea bugs had turned purple. After poking them with his finger, he felt them burn his skin, and that surely rendered the sea bugs inedible. Hansen lobbed the bodies away, disappointed. He wasn't going to risk eating tainted meat like that. What if it corroded his stomach? With no food, he wasn't satisfied returning just yet. He ordered the mermaid princess to keep driving the Crystal Palace under the sea. At the very least, he wanted to hunt some form of a sacred blood creature. Hansen then caught a glimpse of what appeared to be a bull walking across the seabed. Its body was pitch black, and it had the scales of a lizard, but its figure was unmistakably that of a bull. The creature also appeared to be walking alone, with no other creature nearby. The creature was quite pleasant to look at, and was the first